Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. A boy spent 30 years in this world, but remained a simple old man with a sword. He had an imbalanced skill, which allowed him to absorb magical artifacts. But when he finally mastered it, it was too late to become a hero. Shin Sang-yoon grew up in an orphanage without a family. One day, a collapse appeared in the sky. Bloodthirsty creatures descended to earth. All the children in the orphanage and the teacher died. The monsters took MC's family. But a miracle happened, and a mysterious figure saved him, so he could become a hero. Shin Sang-yoon did everything he could to achieve this, but he still couldn't become strong. After clearing the dungeon again, the protagonist received a skill book as a reward. An assistant from the system appreciated his efforts, but Shin Sang-yoon didn't want to continue, as he was already too old, so he decided to break the contract. Then suddenly, the constellation returned him to the day when his powers first awakened. Now, knowing all about his future, he begins to absorb the legendary artifacts before anyone else can take them. The story jumps back to a world where dungeons and gates are still being explained to the public as the workplaces of awakened players. A corporate executive calmly frames dungeons as stepping stones for players to grow stronger. She further explains that gates connect to unknown dimensions that players must explore and pioneer. Watching this old broadcast in a small apartment, Sang-yoon realizes he has truly returned to the past. Holding one of his old weapons, he accepts that regression is real. After 4 days of orienting himself, he concludes that he has gone back 30 years. He remembers blacking out after the constellation's intervention and waking in the studio apartment of his younger days. He was no longer in his worn 55-year-old body but in his 25-year-old body, with all his future memories intact. The only explanation he can accept is that the constellation used a miracle to send him back. Still confused but unwilling to waste the chance, he decides to move immediately. He takes up the bronze tier Venomoth's dagger, a low-rank weapon he knows hides a valuable skill. Using his future knowledge, he synchronizes with the dagger and learns that its hidden value matters more than its weak base stats. Even with a low absorption rate, he knows the hidden skill is the real prize. Mana synchronization begins, and he enters the unconscious space required to devour the artifact. Inside that strange inner realm, he braces himself for whatever form the absorption will take. To his surprise, the artifact manifests not as something grotesque but as a perfectly cooked meal. The system declares the preparation complete, leaving him stunned by how edible the process has become. The dagger is presented as a rotisserie barbecue chicken drizzled with olive oil. Relieved that the result is normal food instead of some monstrous dish, he relaxes for the first time. He immediately starts eating, and the absorption process begins in earnest. The reward comes through exactly as planned. He permanently gains agility and acquires the hidden skill Demon Bash. With its essence fully absorbed, the dagger itself disappears forever. Back in reality, he notes the loss of the weapon but considers it a trivial price for the skill he wanted. Satisfied that his first move succeeded, he decides it is time to act. He heads to dungeon number 85, where a raid team led by Yoon Daekyung is preparing to enter. At the gate, the porter leader urgently reports to Yoon Daekyung that one of the support members has dropped out. He explains that the replacement is a newcomer named Shin Sang-yoon who only joined 4 days earlier, expecting him to remain with the porter team. Instead, he is shocked to learn that Sang-yoon has been assigned directly to the player team. Yoon Daekyung makes clear that the decision was his and dares anyone to challenge it. The porter leader protests that Sang-yoon is newly awakened, untrained, and will disrupt the team's structure. Yoon cuts him off and forces him to remember his place. He coldly reminds the porter leader that contribution and party matters are not his concern. Once the porter leader backs down, Yoon privately reveals his real motive. He wants the porters silenced and sees Sang-yoon as expendable. One of Yoon's subordinates asks why he accepted such an obvious liability in the first place. Yoon answers with cruel confidence that if anyone dies, it will be the rookie, and that outcome would conveniently preserve the player's status. Sang-yoon overhears enough to understand exactly what kind of men he has joined. Even so, he introduces himself cheerfully and announces that he will be working as a player from today onward. The porters immediately realize he has crossed into a hostile hierarchy that will not welcome him. Yoon and his men greet him with smiles that barely hide their contempt. Sang-yoon notices how openly everyone is broadcasting their hostility, and finds it almost excessive. Yoon theatrically welcomes the newcomer while mocking the idea that he might have been late on his first day. Then Yoon's attention shifts to Sang-yoon's weapon. When he learns Sang-yoon chose a long sword after studying videos online, he immediately judges him as a fool. He lectures that a long sword is difficult to wield, while Sang-yoon humbly insists he only wants enough skill to protect himself. Yoon pretends to admire that spirit, using false encouragement to keep the rookie compliant. With the mood set, he rallies the team and leads everyone into the dungeon. As they enter, Sang-yoon is ordered to stay near the entrance and remain on standby. The other players joke about kill counts while treating the raid like sport, and Sang-yoon quietly observes them. Yoon keeps watching him from behind, still trying to measure the man he expected to sacrifice. Inwardly, Yoon dismisses Sang-yoon as ridiculous for thinking online videos could prepare him for real combat. He convinces himself the rookie is just another arrogant awakened fool with a death wish. Sang-yoon, however, already knows this orc dungeon's reputation as the first brutal wall that crushes overconfident beginners. He also knows Yoon is certain the dungeon will teach him his place. That certainty is shattered when Yoon suddenly realizes the rookie he mocked is the same man who just annihilated enemies before anyone could react. The team stares at the aftermath in disbelief, unable to process how quickly the orcs were cut down. The corpses and fallen weapons make it undeniable that the slaughter really happened. Someone can only ask who Shin Sang-yoon actually is. Even the orc side is left stunned by what they have just witnessed. Sang-yoon stands calmly amid the fading energy, already far beyond the image of a helpless rookie. He reflects that orcs are monsters people think they understand because fantasy stories made them familiar. That familiarity bred prejudice, making humans underestimate them. In truth, he knows orcs are weak only in comparison to truly monstrous beings like dragons. Against ordinary humans, they are still brutal, dangerous opponents. That is why arrogant new players so often die by charging them without thought. One such reckless player lunges in exactly the way Sang-yoon expected. An orc instantly punishes that mistake, proving how little room there is for carelessness. Sang-yoon notes that their sheer size and strength create a natural power gap over humans. That overwhelming physical advantage is why orcs earn their reputation as the Wall of Lament. The raid continues deeper into the dungeon, with Sang-yoon now moving among the team instead of behind them. A teammate warns him that no one will protect him just because he is new, making it clear he is expected to survive alone. A porter watching from behind condemns Sang-yoon as arrogant for acting like a player the moment he awakened. Sang-yoon answers with easy politeness, but privately notes that veterans are never kind to newcomers. Another player barks that effort is meaningless unless Sang-yoon can actually perform, dismissing his humility as empty talk. Sang-yoon only smiles, already deciding how he wants to handle them. He then calmly asks whether he may take the front line if they encounter a monster, a request so absurd to them that it stops the conversation cold. The nearest player can only stare back, too startled to answer immediately. The party is caught off guard when a green orc suddenly appears in the corridor. Shin Sang-yoon, thrilled to test himself after regressing, steps forward and claims the fight. Before he can act, the team leader throws himself in front and blocks the orc's opening blow. The leader angrily calls Shin reckless, pointing out that someone this slow cannot handle a greatsword in real combat. Shin insists he never asked for help, but the leader cuts him off and tells him to pay attention instead of talking. The leader keeps scolding him while holding the line against the monster. His confidence falters for a moment as something fast approaches. Another teammate crashes in and slams the orc hard enough to drive it back. The blow sends the orc sprawling into the floor, briefly turning the tide. The leader snaps at everyone to stop fooling around and focus on the battle. The group rallies behind him, praising his command while he takes charge of the fight. He meets the recovering orc head-on and absorbs its next charge with his shield. Using the opening, he drives his sword into the orc's chest and believes the vital strike should finish it. The orc staggers with the blade lodged in it, but it is clearly not dead. The others cheer too early, convinced the heart strike must have ended the fight. The orc answers with a menacing growl, proving it can still fight. It retaliates immediately, forcing the leader to realize his critical hit was not enough. As the orc attacks again, the leader curses that even a heart strike failed to kill it. Shin watches in silence, already reassessing the situation. He notes that even the highest level member here is only level 50, which means the team leader cannot land true critical damage on this monster. Unwilling to accept that, the leader throws himself back into the fight in frustration. He hacks into the orc again, desperately trying to force it down through brute persistence. This time the orc finally collapses, and the party erupts in disbelief that the leader killed one alone. The leader tries to play it off modestly while checking whether everyone is safe. The team showers him with praise and calls him dependable. Their relief vanishes when another roar echoes from deeper in the dungeon. A whole pack of stronger red orcs appears, including high orcs and armored ones. The party panics as they recognize the new enemies are far beyond what they expected. The leader immediately decides they should retreat, privately admitting he could barely handle one ordinary orc. Shin calmly asks if he can try fighting them instead. The others are stunned, and one teammate apologizes as if Shin has lost his mind from excitement after awakening. The leader starts to lecture him about getting carried away too soon. Shin ignores the warning and dashes straight toward the incoming monsters. With a single clean swing of the great sword, he bisects a high orc and casually remarks that the weapon feels good in hand. The party is left speechless that he just split a high orc in half. Shin checks his status and notes that even after that feat he is still only level 1, meaning his technique still is not at its best. The remaining monsters roar and surge at him together. Shin meets the rush without fear, saying that low level does not matter when he has enough experience. He tightens his grip and prepares to use that experience properly. His next sweeping strike tears through the charging orcs in one fluid motion. He keeps cutting through the pack while taunting them with the ease of someone who has done this countless times before. Still moving, he begins to explain that they are nothing new to him. He recalls having killed many of these monsters when he was younger in his previous life. Watching him, the party starts to believe he might actually wipe them all out himself. Shin closes in on the last survivor, already treating the outcome as decided. The final enemy turns out to be an armored orc, tougher than the rest. It charges with a roar, trying to overwhelm him with raw force. Shin slips past the attack and avoids the heavy blow. His eyes sharpen as he reads the monster's movement. He counters with a powerful slash aimed at the armored orc's body. The blade bites and only shallowly instead of cutting through. The team leader realizes the armored orc's hide is too thick for a normal finishing strike. As the monster prepares to punish the failed attack, the party fears Shin has finally overreached. Shin stays calm and tells them not to be dramatic. He activates his hidden skill, Demon Bash. The skill inflicts hindrance, freezing the armored orc in place for 2 seconds. Pleased, Shin tells the immobilized monster to stay exactly where it is. The armored orc can only roar helplessly. Shin uses the opening to decapitate it in one clean execution. The team leader can only stare, unable to process what he just witnessed. The party is shaken that someone who awakened only 3 days ago just used a hindrance skill of that caliber. They are even more stunned because the duration far exceeds what they thought was possible for new players. Now they start wondering whether Shin is also absurdly skilled with the great sword itself. The leader cannot believe a hindrance skill that strong worked even on an armored orc. He keeps staring at Shin, unable to reconcile that power with someone so newly awakened. As Shin stands among the corpses, system messages announce that he has leveled up and earned the F-rank title Fearless Immature Puppy. The title grants him extra evasion, and while he finds the name ridiculous, he appreciates the effect. The system offers him 1 bonus stat point, and he immediately knows where it should go. Remembering a lesson from his past life, he decides luck is essential because it affects skill success and artifact drops. He raises his luck stat while the others continue staring at him. The team leader finally approaches and directly asks whether Shin's skill was really hindrance, and where he got something like that. Shin hides the truth about regression and simply claims he received the skill when he awakened. The leader explodes, saying that explanation makes no sense at all. He presses harder, suspecting Shin must have gotten insanely lucky and found an extraordinary artifact. His suspicion lands on the great sword, which he imagines might be diamond rank, or even higher. Shin offers to let him inspect it himself. The leader reluctantly checks the weapon's information. To his shock, it turns out to be nothing more than an ordinary faded greatsword, confirming the skill really belongs to Shin. That realization eats at him, because after 2 years of dungeon runs and reaching level 50, he still has nothing comparable. Before he can dwell on it, a scout warns that the middle boss has awakened. The leader forces himself back into command and orders the team forward. As they move, he grudgingly admits Shin made clearing the minions easy, but warns him not to overstep. He insists Shin's useful trick will mean nothing against the demon orc ahead. Shin remembers that this boss is exactly why he returned to this party immediately after regressing. When the leader senses hesitation in the group, he mocks fear and tries to reassert authority. Shin cuts in with a practical question. If he kills the demon orc alone, can he claim the artifact reward? He asks because this party distributes rewards according to contribution, and he wants the boss drop for himself. The item he wants is the Crimson Stone, a rare artifact that only demon orcs can drop. He remembers that even after killing hundreds of demon orcs in his previous life, the drop rate remained notoriously low. In that past life, his team failed here, and he only later saw another party obtain the Crimson Stone. That memory sharpens his focus on taking it this time. He recalls overhearing that the stone could sell for a fortune and carried the rare skill Delay. The mention of Delay confirms to Shin that this is the exact artifact he needs. He realizes that skill is crucial for the build he is planning right now. The party gathers near the boss chamber while Shin stands apart, already thinking beyond this raid. He asks the leader to confirm that if he defeats the boss himself, the reward will be his without dispute. The leader hesitates, caught between greed and pride. Shin knows he needs Delay for the future, but also knows no one will take a cocky level 1 seriously. As expected, the others react with disbelief and contempt at his demand. They confront him openly, saying killing a few orcs does not entitle him to talk about item distribution. The leader coldly tells him to do whatever he wants. But he adds a condition: Shin only gets that chance if the party fails to defeat the boss first. In other words, Shin can only try solo after they have already lost control of the fight. Shin accepts immediately, finding the restriction easier to work around than expected. The leader marches toward the boss room, and the others hurry after him. Privately, he seethes at Shin's arrogance and vows to clear the dungeon himself just to shut him up. He steels himself and pushes open the boss chamber doors. Determined to prove experience matters more than one broken skill, he leads the charge inside. For a brief moment, he thinks he still has control. Then he comes face to face with the middle boss, the bloodthirsty demon orc. The chamber trembles with the monster's presence. Its oppressive aura alone makes the room feel hostile. The boss stands chained and monstrous, with the crimson stone glowing at its chest. Even so, the leader orders everyone to prepare for battle. Relying on bad information, he claims the boss only looks dangerous, and should be easy if they circle behind it. He inwardly dismisses Shin's talk of soloing, convinced Shin will never get the chance. So he takes the lead and rushes the demon orc first. The next instant, he is smashed away before he can even understand what happened. He can only ask in confusion as he lies bloodied on the floor. Watching from the side, Shin dryly notes that their habit of charging blindly is exactly why they failed before. The demon orc advances while the party freezes, and panic spreads through the group. They realize too late that this fight could wipe them out. The leader curses the market advice that misled him into underestimating these monsters. He finally orders a retreat, deciding there is no point dying here today. Shin only smiles, because the situation has unfolded exactly as he needed. The leader stares at him in disbelief, unable to understand how anyone could stay calm now. He orders the party to flee along the boss's flank, trusting its peripheral vision to let them escape. As they move, he turns to Shin and warns that if Shin dies after staying behind, he has only himself to blame. The warning is meant as a final severing of responsibility. Shin answers with quiet confidence instead of fear. He grips his sword and tells them not to worry about him. He states plainly that he will not die today. The demon orc roars and brings its axe down in a devastating strike. Shin knows he cannot win by raw stats alone, so he relies on the experience he carried back from his previous life. Using that experience, he meets the attack with perfect timing rather than force. The demon orc senses resistance and reacts in surprise. The party hears the clash and realizes Shin actually deflected the boss's axe. Shin admits the impact still hurts, but concludes that deflecting the boss's attacks is within his limits. As the crimson stone glows on the demon orc's chest, Shin fixes his attention on it. He reminds himself that the crimson stone is the key to the combination he has been chasing. By combining delay with his own demon bash, he believes he can create a far stronger control effect. His devour artifact skill lets him merge skill effects, and he imagines stacking demon bash into repeated stuns. With delay, that dream of an almost endless stun lock could become real, so he provokes the boss to keep coming. The demon orc growls and commits to another attack. Shin slips aside again, drawing the boss into the exact movement he wanted. Satisfied, he says this is the pattern he needed to see. He strikes into the boss's vulnerable opening, proving he can identify its weak points. The demon orc's axe crashes into the floor as Shin stays just outside its killing line. Shin activates Demon Bash, and this time the skill successfully stuns even the middle boss for 2 full seconds. Watching from a distance, the team leader is horrified and amazed that Shin's supposedly broken skill works on a middle boss at all. Shin Sang-yoon realizes the demon orc is far less straightforward than he assumed. That realization hits him just as danger closes in. The demon orc launches a brutal counterattack before he can finish thinking. Sang-yoon barely blocks the blow with his great sword and is driven back by the force. He grimly remembers the monster can recover from damage. The demon orc's self-regeneration breaks free of the earlier stun far sooner than expected. Sang-yoon calculates that he needs 15 more seconds to reapply stun, so all he can do is buy time. He decides that if stun is no longer reliable, he will simply have to kill the monster outright. Even while dodging the orc's attacks, he treats that impossible plan as the simplest answer. The rest of the party watches in panic and urges their leader to retreat before they are all wiped out. They cannot understand why Sang-yoon's stun is failing now when it had carried them this far. From their perspective, his skill is ineffective and his stats are nowhere near the demon orc's. Yet Sang-yoon keeps smiling, which makes the others question whether he is really just a beginner. He draws on hard-earned experience from his previous life instead of fear. Knowing he lacks the power to cut the monster down normally, he narrows his focus to a single decisive point. Rather than contest the orc's raw strength, he prepares to turn that strength against it. His true aim is not to slash but to pierce straight through. The plan works, and a system notice declares the demon orc defeated. As the monster collapses, Sang-yoon is rewarded with multiple level-ups. He also earns the E-rank title Demon Hunter, which greatly boosts health regeneration against middle bosses and stronger foes. Sang-yoon is amused that he has already collected 2 titles simply by advancing alone. Then he notices the surviving party members approaching him. The leader and his men are left speechless by what they have just witnessed. Sang-yoon immediately starts thinking about how to avoid future misunderstandings like this. Before anyone can question him, he loudly pretends the party leader dealt the real damage and saved everyone. The leader is baffled because he knows he never harmed the demon orc at all. He can only stare at Sang-yoon and wonder what kind of person he is dealing with. Sang-yoon calmly holds his ground and lets the leader process the offer. He makes it clear that the man is not foolish and gives him a chance to keep his pride. The demon orc's reward item rises between them, silently confirming the battle's end. The leader understands that Sang-yoon is handing him a graceful way to accept total defeat without humiliation, so he immediately reasserts command, announces the middle boss is down, and orders everyone to prepare for the final boss. As the others leave, they convince themselves Sang-yoon could not possibly have beaten the demon orc alone, and reduce his role to a stun specialist. Once the audience is gone, Sang-yoon drops the act and turns his attention to the loot. He decides to consume the Crimson Stone instead of merely equipping it. That choice triggers a strange unconscious interval, and he is pulled into the artifact absorption process. The system absurdly presents the absorption like a dish being served to him. Sang-yoon accepts the bizarre ritual anyway because it means he can absorb the Crimson Stone's power. The absorption begins in earnest. He gains small increases to strength and health and, more importantly, acquires the special effect delay. The system explains that delay can now be attached to one of his skills, which makes him uneasy with anticipation. He chooses to bind delay to Demon Bash. That combination upgrades Demon Bash so a hit during the first stun can guarantee a second stun state. Further consecutive uses can keep extending the stun with decreasing odds, turning the skill into a potential chain lock. Sang-yoon is stunned by the result because what he thought was only a theory has become a real 4-second guaranteed stun. While he studies the new effect, the party leader cautiously approaches to speak with him. The leader explains that the final boss ahead is an orc berserker and asks whether Sang-yoon intends to join the fight later. Sang-yoon refuses that assumption. Instead, the leader openly admits he would be a poor commander if he failed to use someone as valuable as Sang-yoon. They agree to cooperate, though Sang-yoon reminds him that his own conditions have not changed. When the party reports that the boss room is ready, the leader accepts Sang-yoon's presence without hesitation. The group enters the final chamber on full alert. Sang-yoon senses someone's hostile gaze amid the tension. He notices the leader acting overly friendly and realizes that suspicious eyes are on him. Inside the final boss room, the orc berserker waits in a vast arena. The monster's murderous aura announces itself before it even fully rises. The final boss reveals itself as an orc berserker wrapped in violent red energy. Its presence alone rattles the party. The leader tries to take the front line and tells Sang-yoon he will go first. Sang-yoon cuts him off and tells him to stay close instead. He has already judged that berserkers resist skills less than demon orcs, so stunning this one should be easier if he stays composed. Trusting that analysis, he moves in without hesitation. Even as the berserker roars and attacks, Sang-yoon is struck by how naturally confidence now comes to him. He remembers a past life spent in fear and weakness. He remembers how adulthood became nothing but a struggle to survive and vows not to repeat it. That resolve drives him straight at the boss. He decides this fight will mark the break from both his powerless past and the future that once trapped him. To do that, he must prove his change through action. He intends to prove it in front of everyone watching. The leader can only stare at him as if he is seeing a monster in human form. Sang-yoon slams the orc berserker with Demon Bash and overwhelms it in a single exchange. The skill activates exactly as planned, locking the boss into a 4-second stun. He immediately orders the rest of the party to rush in and unload everything while the opening lasts. The berserker can only snarl helplessly under the effect. The party's combined assault tears through the immobilized boss before it can recover. The final boss falls, the dungeon is cleared, and the others are left thinking the whole run was absurdly easy because of stun. Some of the porters even start wondering whether attaching themselves to Sang-yoon would be profitable. Sang-yoon notices how quickly people change once they smell advantage and decides he owes them nothing. More level-ups arrive, along with a new D-rank title that extends the duration of his status effects. He is pleased by the haul and notes that his stun has now become even more broken than before. Even so, he knows this progress is still insignificant compared with the swordsman he truly wants to surpass. He thinks of Gyungsu, the famed Ghost Blade, a title-rich prodigy who became Korea's strongest swordsman. In his previous life, Gyungsu was someone he could only admire from afar, but now Sang-yoon dares to imagine catching up. That possibility hardens his resolve to accelerate his growth from this point on. The leader catches him psyching himself up and mistakes it for odd stretching. Then, to Sang-yoon's surprise, the leader hands him a reward ring in gratitude for carrying the run. Sang-yoon teases him for suddenly acting generous, but the leader admits the credit is deserved. The leader downplays the gift as only a bronze artifact, though even he seems surprised by how bluntly honest Sang-yoon is. He finally admits he is giving it away because their paths will likely never cross again. Sang-yoon accepts that painful truth and recognizes that he is already stepping into a world beyond ordinary players. One of the other party members watches this exchange with growing resentment. That man fumes that years of loyalty mean less to the leader than Sang-yoon's brief display of talent. Consumed by jealousy, he secretly calls someone and asks for the whole group to be killed. Later, back at home, Sang-yoon basks in the fact that being a player has already transformed his life. He celebrates the freedom and possibility that now belong to him. Checking his account, he sees a 6 million won deposit from Yoon Dae-kyung, far more than a porter's normal pay. The money and the bonus artifact make the run feel even more rewarding. He examines the gift and learns it is the Berserker Ring, a bronze artifact that grants lighten and boosts strength. Even though it is only bronze rank, he is thrilled to receive an artifact with a useful support effect for free. After reading the details, he understands why it is low rank. Most players would burn through mana before getting any real use from it. But he reminds himself that he is not most players. From his previous life, he already knows how to exploit mana-consuming artifacts because he spent decades studying them after discovering his own ability too late. That research taught him a shocking truth about devouring artifacts. Artifacts that normally consume mana lose that cost after being devoured, though their special effects are weakened as a penalty. So he synchronizes with the Berserker Ring without hesitation, deciding that more skills matter more than perfect efficiency. Elsewhere, the jealous subordinate reports Sang-yoon's 4-second stun to dangerous people in a private club. He insists the ability is real and not drunken exaggeration. The gang leader coolly forces him to calm down and explain himself properly. When asked what he wants, the subordinate denies seeking revenge even though that is exactly what he is after. He frames it as business, claiming Sang-yoon is protected by Yoon Dae-kyung and therefore worth targeting. The scarred swordsman in the room immediately sees through him and mocks how little standing he actually has. Before the subordinate can respond, the gang mutilates him to remind him of his place. The hyena pack makes clear they are not hired servants and will punish disrespect first. They continue the lesson by taking his ear as the price for wasting their time. Only after that do they agree to hear him out, and they ask where Sang-yoon can be found. Sometime later, Sang-yoon heads to the Jamsil training grounds to test his new setup. He is still sore from overtraining but keeps going anyway. The Berserker Ring's devoured effect manifests in a ridiculous way, producing cold cucumber soup from the ring, and he is baffled by how uselessly specific it seems. The absurd side effect leaves his stomach unsettled rather than satisfied. Still, he refuses to dwell on the nonsense, and chooses to focus on the practical upside. He tosses the great sword into the air to test the new weight reduction. For a moment he risks losing control of the weapon entirely. When he catches it, he confirms the sword has become dramatically lighter, and the system names the altered effect lightweight. He decides to rely only on the great sword for now until he can trust the new balance. Satisfied with that improvement, he opens his status to review the rest of his gains. At level 7, with 3 consumed artifacts and no spare points left, he sees steady growth but knows it is still only a beginning. His next priority becomes clear. He must start attracting the attention of a constellation, because each player can only bind to one. If possible, he wants a constellation that synergizes with his unusually high luck. For now, though, he admits he still lacks the presence to interest one and must keep building himself first. So he returns to the only answer available to him at the moment: relentless training. That routine is interrupted by a car arriving fast nearby. Sungyun startles, realizing how close he came to being hit. After days of non-stop training and driving, he is exhausted, but at least he has earned a new passive skill for ambidextrous sword training. Then he notices a newly opened solo player dungeon and recognizes the rare opportunity immediately. He reminds himself that solo dungeons normally require months of waiting, so being able to drive straight to one is a huge stroke of luck. Even so, something about the situation feels off to him. Looking back, he spots another car hidden among the trees. He realizes someone has followed him through the forest, though he still does not know why. Deciding the answer can be dealt with inside the dungeon, he enters anyway. The portal accepts him, but others slip in right behind him. A full-armed group emerges after him, led by the scarred swordsman from the club. Sungyun is stunned because a solo-player dungeon should never allow a party to enter together. He turns to face them in the darkness, already understanding this is no accident. When the scarred man suggests Sungyun must have entered the wrong dungeon, Sungyun rejects the lie and claims the place as his. The intruders mock him openly and make it clear they came here on purpose. Sungyun quickly judges that they are far too organized and well-armed to be ordinary raiders, so he offers not to report them if they leave now. But his own analysis tells him they abandoned healers and mages because they were never planning a normal dungeon clear in the first place. He identifies them as the Hyena Pack, a party built specifically to hunt other humans. The gang laughs at his confidence, and warns that if he dies here, no one will even recover his body. Sungyun remembers that the Players Association once kept groups like this under control, but with that surveillance gone, he knows exactly what kind of threat now stands in front of him. The group recognizes that archers are the biggest threat in a fight like this, so they decide to finish the confrontation quickly. The enemy reveals he had been waiting for all 4 of them to gather, leaving the others momentarily confused. The black-haired swordsman makes his intent plain by saying this dungeon is the perfect place to dispose of 4 bodies. Realizing they were lured into an ambush, the thugs erupt in fury and draw their weapons. Their scarred leader tries to steady the group by proposing they handle the situation the simple way. But the big thug immediately sees that facing this man is anything but simple and feels his confidence crack. The swordsman mocks their chain of command and dares them to stop hesitating and attack together. That taunt finally pushes the biggest thug over the edge. He charges in screaming, determined to silence the swordsman by force. As the attack comes, the swordsman recalls the brutal rule of dungeons: only the strong survive. He reminds himself that monsters always want your life, and other people inside a dungeon are often no different. With artifacts at stake, every encounter becomes a fight where death is always close. In a place without laws, he accepts that killing first is often the only way to stay alive. He treats that lesson from his past life as still true in the present. Acting on that conviction, he drives his great sword down with lethal force as the attackers close in. To him, what happens next is not murder but self-defense, and he coldly invites the rest to come at him too. The surviving 3 instantly scatter and rush to reposition instead of meeting him head-on. Their scarred leader orders everyone to keep their distance and form a proper setup before engaging again. The archer obeys, but panic spreads when he realizes their strongest frontliner, Sango, has already been killed. Even while retreating, the archer understands how abnormal this is for a newly awakened player who should not be this strong. The swordsman stops their escape by spinning his massive blade and cutting off their movement. The archer lashes out in terror, calling him a monster as he tries to attack from range. The swordsman remains unnervingly calm, reading the battlefield without flinching. The archer is stunned to see his shots reflected in the swordsman's eyes, as if every trajectory is already being tracked. Instead of guarding, the swordsman hurls his great sword like a projectile and turns the weapon itself into an attack. That impossible move shocks the gang, and they begin to realize they are facing someone far outside normal expectations. The scarred leader instantly understands the opening this creates. He sprints straight at the now unarmed swordsman, betting everything on close combat. The swordsman notices the danger too late, and the leader believes this is the perfect moment to kill him. The leader commits fully and launches his strike at point-blank range. But the thrown greatsword lands by impaling another thug instead, turning the battlefield even more chaotic. In a single exchange, one man is dead, the others are mid-charge, and the swordsman is still moving to seize control. He twists through the chaos, and uses the embedded sword as a pivot rather than trying to recover it normally. That sudden movement catches the attackers off guard. As both remaining melee fighters dive in to finish him, he uses the planted sword to redirect himself between their attacks. Their own momentum carries them into a disastrous collision that tears through stone and flesh. The orange-haired thug can barely process what just happened. The swordsman hangs off the sword and casually notes how close that had been, making the survivors even more unnerved. From below, the scarred leader can only conclude that the man they attacked is insane. Blood splashes again as the melee collapses into another fatal wound. The scarred leader suddenly grabs the orange-haired thug from behind, and his ally cannot understand why. Instead of helping, the leader uses him as a shield and hostage in a desperate bid to survive. The swordsman answers that betrayal with a single brutal slash that cuts through both men at once. The leader's fingers dig into his subordinate's face even as both are struck, exposing how little loyalty ever existed between them. Landing from the attack, the swordsman openly identifies them as organ dealers and forces the leader to confront the truth of what they are. He reasons that men like this would never truly trust one another, and he deduces that their real goal was awakening mana stones through organ transplants. The scarred leader laughs off being understood, insisting that the truth no longer matters. He throws himself into one last furious attack, enraged that his crimes have been seen through. The swordsman sidesteps the outburst with contempt and activates Demon Bash to end the fight decisively. The skill lands, and the system announces that the player has been stunned for 4.4 seconds. The leader is horrified to realize he has been stunned and cannot understand how such a thing happened. He finally grasps that the tiny cuts from earlier were enough to trigger the effect, and the realization breaks his confidence. The swordsman tells him the fight is already over while the leader still cannot see why. For the first time, the predator faces death himself and refuses to accept it. That terror drags him into a memory of when he once believed in his comrades and thought they could do anything together. He remembers one of them smiling and telling him he was trusted. The memory curdles into betrayal and blood, leaving only the question of why. He recalls begging for his life after being maimed, only to learn what role he truly held in that world. The answer was simple and cruel. He had never been prey by accident, because he had always chosen to be the predator. Now the swordsman throws that truth back at him and asks whether he is afraid now that the roles have reversed. The scene shifts to the aftermath, where blood spreads through the dungeon water. Cleaning his blade, the swordsman exhales and admits he should not get comfortable with killing, even if he has slipped back into old habits. He briefly worries that this violence might disqualify him from becoming a constellation, then dismisses the thought as self-defense anyway. His attention turns from the corpses to the loot left behind. The system confirms he has obtained 8 artifacts from the dungeon, and he happily claims them all as his. Checking his status, he sees that devouring artifacts has already pushed his growth far beyond what his level should suggest. The stat gains are so large that he decides the bloody risk was absolutely worth it. He realizes his raw numbers now rival players around level 50 despite having only recently returned. Then he remembers there is still one more useful item to examine. He picks up a ring from the spoils. The ring turns out to be a recovery ring that can cleanse status abnormalities in exchange for mana. That makes him realize the thug who rushed him at the start had unknowingly carried the perfect counter to his stun strategy. He understands how badly things could have gone if he had relied only on that one trick, and he resolves to be more careful next time. He begins synchronizing with the recovery ring while moving deeper into the dungeon. The path ahead leads into Dungeon 101's internal access road, where goblins patrol the mine tracks. One goblin notices something strange and starts to react. The swordsman approaches them with his eyes covered, deliberately limiting his sight. He steadies himself and keeps walking despite the danger. He remembers that the Lucky Day title required killing 500 monsters with his eyes closed. The goblins snarl and prepare to attack as they realize a human has entered their territory. One of them spots him clearly and raises the alarm. The swordsman welcomes the attack, curious whether he can sense enemies without seeing them. The goblins answer with hungry excitement. He begins to notice their presence through sound and movement in the air rather than sight. Remembering old instincts, he tells himself to read the airflow and listen to everything. He forces himself into a heightened state of concentration and tries to hold it. In that focus, the battlefield becomes a pattern of ripples and disturbances. His awareness sharpens until he can track motion around him almost naturally. He moves within that sensory field as if the darkness itself is guiding him. Convinced he can do it, he commits to the test. A goblin swings first, expecting an easy hit. Instead, the swordsman explodes into motion and cuts through multiple goblins in one sweeping counterattack. When the blood settles, he is standing amid dismembered bodies, proving the method works. The success thrills him more than he expected. Another attack comes from range, forcing him to react without hesitation. He senses the incoming shot and slips aside at the last moment. With growing confidence, he bats the projectile away and feels himself mastering the technique. He even catches an arrow in his hand, turning defense into certainty. The goblin archer charges in disbelief, no longer sure what kind of opponent it is facing. As he advances through the tunnel, the swordsman reflects that a recent life or death struggle has unexpectedly sharpened his senses. He concludes that reliving the past may have helped him recover abilities he once relied on. Satisfied with that answer, he invites the rest of the goblins to come at him. They rush him in a pack, trying to overwhelm him by numbers. He meets the charge head-on, and begins cutting them down before they can even surround him. His blade tears through the mob in wide arcs, turning the tunnel into a slaughter ground. He smiles through the bloodshed, fully in control of the massacre. Only one goblin remains standing after the others are carved apart around it. That last survivor freezes, its bravado collapsing into fear. The swordsman lowers his bloody blade, already knowing the fight is finished. The system rewards the massacre with repeated level-ups. It also grants him the D-rank Lucky Day title, confirming he met the absurd requirement. The title massively boosts his luck and can keep increasing it against the same monster type, making it far more valuable than he expected. Even the goblins that remain can only tremble before him now. One burdened goblin hesitates among the corpses, too frightened to flee and too terrified to fight. Seeing easy prey and easy gains, the swordsman decides to use the opportunity to farm even more stats. His updated status shows his luck has surged and he has more points to spend. That sight leaves him quietly delighted. Then the delight bursts into laughter when he realizes a single title has raised his luck by 30, rivaling rewards far above its rank. He is already calculating how much a title like this would be worth in money when a new phenomenon interrupts him. The dungeon begins to fade, and he thinks he has finally become rich just before the system signals something far more important. He suddenly understands what is happening and goes still. 3 constellations descend at once, each showing interest in him for different reasons, including the goddess of luck herself. Their presence manifests before him, with the goddess taking the most direct and radiant form. The system confirms that 3 constellations have formally entered his space. He is stunned by how quickly this happened and by the fact that 3 of them came at all, but he still tries to play it cool. The goddess of luck personally approaches him, leaving him genuinely startled. He wonders if he got too full of himself, then reminds himself this situation never happened in his previous life. When the system says the goddess of luck is interested in him, his confusion only deepens. She is fascinated by the contradiction of a swordsman whose defining trait is luck, and he awkwardly jokes that he has always been pretty lucky. Relieved that all 3 seem open to a contract, he decides to evaluate them carefully instead of rushing. He identifies the cleaner of a fallen dimension as a Slayer-type constellation and assumes it noticed how efficiently he butchered the goblins. The Pilgrim of Grand Space is harder to explain, since that constellation usually appears only to players suited to become saints. That makes him suspect the Pilgrim may have shown up because of the goddess of luck's presence. He recalls that the goddess is influential even among other constellations, which would explain why the others followed her lead. The goddess reacts sharply, as if she has just noticed the implication in his thoughts. Then she offers him an extraordinary concession. Even if he chooses another constellation now, she will still allow a contract with her later. He is amazed, immediately recognizing how absurdly valuable that promise is. That offer reminds him of a legendary archer from his past life whose impossible feats were secretly enabled by 2 constellation contracts. He remembers that the true source of that miracle archer's power was the goddess of luck making the impossible possible. So even with 3 constellations before him, he knows this decision could shape everything that follows. The constellations press him to choose, while one of them already worries he may be making the wrong call. He admits the goddess of luck is extraordinary, but he also knows this first contract may determine his entire future as a player. He compares this moment to the end of his first 10 years, when only one constellation had ever reached out to him. Back then, that lone savior was the late bloomer model student, and its appearance had felt like grace. He had been overjoyed, believing that contract meant his miserable life was finally about to improve. But nothing changed, and he remained trapped in failure until he was 55. Only later did he realize how powerful a constellation could be, yet he had never been able to use that one because its requirements were absurdly high. Even so, he owes his regression to that same constellation and knows he should be grateful for the chance it gave him. That gratitude makes him cautious, because he cannot assume he will ever be allowed to regress again. With that in mind, he turns his thoughts toward the Pilgrim of Grand Space and the possibility of holy powers. The story opens by weighing destruction against luck as a new power is about to be chosen. A goddess of luck presents herself as the option before Shin Sang-yun. Faced with the decision, he hesitates only for a moment. He accepts the offer and formally enters a contract with the goddess of luck. The contract is confirmed, and he learns it will remain binding for 30 years even if he dies. Otherworldly beings take notice of the pact, while many friendly constellations celebrate his choice. At the same time, hostile constellations mark him as a threat and vow to obstruct his rise, leaving him stunned by how much interest he has drawn. Instead of dwelling on it, he decides to move forward with the partnership. He offers the goddess mutual good fortune and addresses her as his new patron. Their agreement is sealed with a touch. Pleased, the goddess of luck praises him for making the right decision. The contract immediately activates and prompts him to state what he wants from it. He is shown a set of absurdly powerful benefits, including guaranteed critical hits, hidden artifact effects, and certain boss drops, and can barely believe what he is seeing. Even more bonuses appear, including doubled gains from investing in luck, and the goddess credits him for earning such rewards. She then asks what he plans to do about the other constellations still offering him deals. He dismisses the waiting constellations because he wants to focus on his own goddess instead. One rival constellation promises to wait for another chance, another openly threatens to behead him, and the goddess of luck praises him for holding firm. With his new contract effects, he decides his immediate future is secure enough that he can afford to stay calm and wait for better opportunities later. The scene shifts to the final boss room of Dungeon 101. Empowered by his new luck, Shin overwhelms the goblin boss in a direct clash. Even the goddess of luck is startled by how dominant his opening attack is. He mocks the final boss for being far weaker than expected and presses the attack without fear. The goblin lord meets his blade head-on but is forced back. The monster reveals itself as the final boss, the consumed by greed goblin lord, and lunges with murderous intent. Shin knocks it away and keeps control of the exchange. The goblin lord erupts with a red aura and prepares a special attack. Its skill lands, inflicting Shin with the status ailment overwhelm. Rather than panic, he recognizes the effect at once and notes that it is weaker than stun but dangerous because it crushes the will to fight. The boss bears down on him with that oppressive pressure, trying to break his resolve. Shin counters by activating recovery to shake off the mental debuff. As the boss crashes in again, he endures the pressure and keeps moving. The goblin lord is rattled that its intimidation failed to stop him. Shin realizes overwhelm cannot fully immobilize a target, only hinder them. He judges it useful against weaker enemies but not enough to stop him here. Recovery fully activates, removes overwhelm, and he decides it is time to test just how far his luck can carry him. The goblin lord tries once more to crush him with killing intent. Shin slips through the attempt and taunts the monster for thinking the same trick would work twice. He answers with Demon Bash, stunning the goblin lord for 2 seconds. He immediately treats those 2 seconds as a decisive opening. Shin unleashes a rapid series of slashes before the stun can end. His delay effect triggers and extends the stun by another 2 seconds. He keeps carving through the helpless boss while it can do nothing but flail. A second delay activation extends the stun yet again, turning his opening into a massacre. Even Shin is impressed that his luck let the extension trigger twice in a row. By the time the boss can move, its body is already shredded. It collapses while Shin remains standing over it, battered but in control. The goblin lord falls for good, and Shin clears the suffocating goblin swamp dungeon. He levels up and earns the D-rank title Don't Touch Me. Relief finally breaks through as he celebrates surviving the ordeal. The title grants more luck and evasion, but the fight leaves him wondering whether he is pushing his body too hard. The goddess of luck cheerfully points out that he must have been extraordinarily lucky to survive everything that happened that day. When he jokes that most people would call that skill instead, she insists luck is a skill too and takes pride in supporting such a fortunate player. She smugly claims the results are all thanks to her, while he decides to raise his luck stat first. He discovers his luck is already over 100, which grants an extra bonus to related effects. He starts thinking through what those boosted related effects actually mean in practice. His luck leads him to a silver artifact drop, the Shield of Kudnis, which can convert damage into health regeneration at the cost of mana. He notes that the guaranteed drop came from the goddess anyway, but now wonders whether higher luck can also improve the rank of those drops. That thought pushes him to test the shield immediately. He begins synchronizing mana with the shield while the goddess clings to him affectionately, and he resigns himself to her becoming more troublesome than his old system guide. Later, the story moves to the quest area near Jamsil Station. At the entrance, a staff member flatly refuses his request. Shin argues for his own plan, but the employee apologetically begs him to reconsider because the request is too much for her to approve. He reveals that after seeing so many corpses that day, he cannot afford to let fear stop him anymore. A flashback begins, showing him driving 2 hours earlier on the Honam Expressway. While thinking about the goblin shield and even joking that it is lucky he only got something as ordinary as rice and kimchi from a goblin, he keeps driving. Then his car suddenly starts malfunctioning. Warning lights flood the dashboard, leaving him baffled by the timing. He realizes the car is failing too and starts thinking he may need both a new vehicle and a new place to live. He concludes that his current circumstances make him too likely to get dragged into more crimes and danger, so he needs the safety of a player district under constant surveillance. Since he also needs more equipment and artifacts, he starts planning how to buy used gear cheaply. That train of thought leads him to the real obstacle. He realizes everything comes down to one thing: money. He needs a huge amount of it, and he knows the only place to make that kind of money fast is through the system and its quests. The rise of players created not only quests but also the organization that manages them. That organization is the Players Association. He decides that if the Players Association controls the system's quest structure, then he can use it to get what he needs. With that resolve, he races toward the quest arena. Back in the present, he is still being denied entry because he is trying to take on a level 100 dungeon without even having an official rank yet. He insists that low-level areas would only waste his time and swears he can handle the higher quest. The employee tearfully explains that she has heard the same reckless confidence before from people who later died, though Shin understands her concern. Even so, he forces himself to stay firm and refuses to back down. At that moment, a new voice interrupts the argument. Kim Miso of the Eden Guild arrives, a level 100 player ranked A+, instantly changing the atmosphere. Shin recognizes her at once as the famed marksman of devastation. She is renowned not only for being the first player to reach level 100 but also for being the daughter of a powerful biotech chairman. To Shin, that makes her the future shadow assassin Shintiri's greatest rival. She also belongs to the same guild as another legendary player, the swordsman Cho Jinho. In short, she comes from overwhelming power, wealth, and influence. She casually notes that she has never seen Shin before. After watching the exchange, she asks why he is so determined to start a level 100 quest, and he answers with brutal honesty that he needs the money. The surrounding players gossip in disbelief, while Shin hears every insult and silently fumes. Kim warns him again that the quest will be difficult, and he calmly says he already knows that. He sums up his mindset as high risk, high return, making clear that this is about necessity, not personal feelings toward her. He even reminds himself that although she rejected his party request before his regression, he is not acting out of resentment. Kim points out a practical problem he overlooked: solo entry is not allowed for this quest. That makes him realize he forgot a rule that will not be changed for another 4 years. He covers the mistake with awkward laughter and pretends he simply misread the notice. Kim sees through the act and decides to press the situation. She unexpectedly offers to accompany him. The bystanders explode with jealousy and disbelief at the idea of her going with him. Shin immediately suspects she has an ulterior motive and asks what condition comes with the offer. Kim claims she is only helping a fellow player, but Shin openly admits he does not trust people that easily. She says she has no conditions, only a promise she wants from him. That promise is simple and threatening: if he disappoints her, he will pay for it. Shin understands that she is really testing him and accepts the implication. He correctly reads her interest as a trial of his worth. He recalls that Kim Miso's influence is so great that once she marks someone as an overconfident fraud, their player career is effectively finished. Instead of shrinking back, he leans into the challenge and decides this could become interesting. Outside, Kim tells her attendant to wait because she may be gone for a while. She notes that most of her usual guild members are busy, so she needs temporary party members anyway. A staffer arrives with her level badge, and it becomes clear that by coincidence she genuinely did need someone to fill out a party. The same party size regulations that blocked Shin are also inconveniencing Kim. Because she encountered a player bold enough to insist on the impossible, her curiosity about him deepens. That curiosity turns into real interest as she studies him more closely. She asks the employee to pull up the exact quest Shin had been trying to enter. When she sees it as a defense quest involving 300 wolf-type monsters and a guardian tower, she is visibly surprised. She realizes he did not choose a simpler fetch or raid mission but one of the most punishing quest types instead. Defense quests can only be cleared by defeating every monster before they destroy the tower core. That is why they normally require at least a 4-person party with ranged support, making Shin's solo plan seem insane. Kim bluntly calls it a suicide mission and asks if he is finally nervous. She is startled when he does not flinch and instead seems amused by the question. Trying to be reasonable, she offers to wait for more party members, suggesting a tank or another ranged attacker. Before she can finish, Shin abruptly grabs her and cuts off the suggestion. He refuses any extra help, and before he can be argued down, Kim accepts the quest and triggers their relocation. The two of them are teleported into the quest area in a burst of energy. Left behind, the employee can only pray that nothing disastrous happens and desperately distance herself from responsibility. The onlookers still doubt a level 17 rookie can possibly clear a level 100 dungeon. But one of them points out that Kim Miso must have seen something worth testing, because someone with her judgment would not act blindly. They begin discussing the Players Association's newer ranking system, which was created because level alone was not enough to measure strength. The system judges players by both dungeon clear records and combat sense. That second criterion explains why raw battle instinct can matter as much as experience. Kim Miso earned her A+ rank purely through battle sense, which makes Shin wonder what kind of monsters exist above even her level. The answer is grim. A+ means there are threats even stronger than Kim Miso. The spectators decide that the real issue is not the quest itself but the fact that Shin entered it with Kim Miso. Their envy overwhelms every other concern. Inside the quest, night falls over a city bridge as the Age of the Night and Wolves begins. Kim takes position with her bow, ready to intervene if needed. She resolves to take responsibility for bringing him here and to help if he gets into real danger. Shin, however, remains completely composed. Kim hopes the experience will teach him a hard lesson about reckless confidence. A short while earlier, Shin had already laid out his own terms. She was not to interfere unless he asked, and if she only supported him, she would receive 5% of the reward. Kim had been so surprised by his audacity that she needed him to repeat himself. Shin made clear that his offer was not a negotiation tactic but a statement of what he believed she could realistically contribute against 300 enemies. Kim started to object that the quest was difficult even for her. Then she stopped, realizing he was utterly serious. Shin answered her doubt with quiet confidence and told her to watch. Kim finally accepted a wager instead, saying her cut would increase by 1% for every monster he failed to kill, and that he would get nothing if he let 95 through. The first wolf arrives, announcing the start of the real test. More blue wolves emerge behind it, snarling as the pack begins its charge. Shin meets the oncoming horde with absolute certainty, declaring that there is no chance of them reaching their goal. A pack of blue wolves closes in with murderous intent. The young swordsman calmly takes responsibility for wiping them all out. The wolves rush him at once, trying to overwhelm him by numbers. Watching from above, the pink-haired archer is caught off guard by his confidence. He answers the charge with precise, sweeping cuts that tear through several wolves in one motion. Without wasting a step, he keeps moving through the pack and carves a clean path around himself. He even enjoys the sound of monsters dying, revealing a disturbingly casual cruelty. The archer realizes he is far more skilled than the arrogant amateur she assumed he was. She studies his stance and recognizes the ideal balance of reach, offense, and defense that a veteran warrior once described. She notices that every movement is efficient, and every swing is arranged to kill multiple enemies at once. Even while impressed, she judges that his technique alone will not be enough. There are simply too many wolves for an ordinary level 17 player to survive. He seems to agree that sheer numbers are the real problem. The archer suddenly realizes the monsters have been behaving strangely from the beginning. A wolf skill called Demon Bash activates, and the surrounding beasts freeze in place under a stun effect. She immediately understands that he must have used stun on them first. Losing herself in the analysis, she nearly slips from her perch before catching herself. Below, the battle continues in a blur of steel and collapsing bodies. Recovering her balance, she confirms that anyone could see he had just used stun. Because his stun lasts unusually long, she concludes he now has enough time and resources to finish the entire swarm. As he keeps cutting down wolves with ease, her suspicion turns into genuine bewilderment about who he really is. In the middle of his momentum, he senses something dangerous and his focus sharpens. A much larger wolf suddenly bursts into the battlefield and charges straight for him. The newcomer lands with explosive force, scattering the lesser wolves around it. Instead of panicking, he recognizes that the true target has finally appeared. He identifies the monster as a black wolf, a far deadlier predator than the others. The black wolf roars and releases a violent aura as it bears down on him. Although he claims he has never faced this exact monster before, seeing it stirs an unsettling familiarity in him. A system warning confirms that the black wolf has inflicted the same stun debuff he uses on others, and he is caught by it. Purple lightning-like energy spreads across the battlefield as the debuff locks him in place. The archer is spared only because one of her artifacts automatically blocks the stun. She remembers too late that the black wolf can use stun as well. Ashamed of criticizing him while he was in real danger, she prepares to help. She assumes he may be able to inflict stun, but there should be no way for someone at his level to remove it from himself. To her shock, he instantly breaks free as a recovery effect cancels the debuff. She can hardly believe that he combines elite swordsmanship, an abnormally long stun, and a way to purge debuffs. The more she sees, the less sense it makes for a mere level 17 player. The black wolf charges again, and he runs straight to meet it instead of retreating. The beast is briefly thrown off because prey that should still be stunned has started moving again. That tiny hesitation gives him the opening he needs. His blade bites into the monster before it can fully recover. He turns that instant into a decisive follow-up, driving the attack home. The black wolf falters, and the archer realizes something impossible about what she is seeing. Even as it collapses, she understands the monster was still under stun when he finished it. Standing over the corpse, he complains more about getting filthy than about nearly dying. Now that he is already covered in blood, he decides he might as well enjoy himself. From the rooftop, the archer watches the battlefield settle under drifting light and debris. Her fear gives way to fascination as she wonders who this man really is. A quest display reveals he has killed 299 of the required 300 wolf-type monsters, leaving only one target. He levels up repeatedly from the slaughter and earns a new title, No Fear, which nullifies status debuffs from wolf-type monsters other than bosses. As he turns, he senses movement behind him. The archer remains high above, still watching the aftermath. He notices that her contempt has shifted into belief, and he quietly enjoys that change. Though his body aches, he decides to keep performing until the stage is truly over. A far larger presence emerges from the darkness, announcing the real finale. He greets the coming fight with a confident challenge. The final boss reveals itself as the full moon Wolf Lord. The Wolf Lord crashes down with overwhelming force to begin the last battle. He immediately recalls the boss's trademark irregular attack style and treats the fight like a familiar puzzle. Drawing on knowledge gathered over countless past encounters, he decides the Wolf Lord's supposedly irregular patterns are no longer unpredictable to him. He counters one of the boss's opening attacks cleanly, already moving as if he knew it in advance. The Wolf Lord strike tears past where he had already chosen not to be. When he tries to trigger Demon Bash, the system informs him the level 100 boss resists it completely. The archer can only conclude that he is insane, because even his failed plan becomes part of a larger strategy. She keeps cataloging his absurd qualities, including the way he swings a massive sword as lightly as if it were nothing. The Wolf Lord lunges in close, trying to crush him with brute force. He slips under the jaws at the last instant, and keeps his footing. The boss tracks him sharply, proving it is no mindless beast. It unleashes another savage rush, trying to catch him before he can reset. He meets the blow head-on with his great sword and barely holds it back. The Wolf Lord is startled that he can keep up at all. Even while defending, he continues reading and answering every irregular pattern the boss throws at him. He tells himself he already knows everything this monster can do because he has repeated this fight countless times before. The archer realizes the most unsettling thing is not his power, but the strange certainty behind it. She starts to suspect that his constant swagger is partly aimed at proving himself to her. Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, she directly asks who he really is. The battle surges across the bridge in a storm of impacts and sparks. He admits to himself that the fight is dragging on longer than expected. Worse, he has run out of flashy tricks to impress Kim Miso and can only hope the boss tires first. Instead, the Wolf Lord keeps attacking with relentless energy and refuses to slow down. His health drops to a critical level, and he realizes he may collapse before the boss does. Then a sudden idea strikes him. As the Wolf Lord launches a familiar pattern, he recognizes the setup for its deadliest signature attack. He sees that the boss is using a heavy strike as bait to create an opening for a piercing follow-up. The true danger, he remembers, is the thrusting kill move that comes immediately after. That signature pattern is the one that has slaughtered countless players in the past. Driven into desperation, he decides to gamble on a power he has never used in actual combat. He slashes upward to force the boss into the exact line of attack he wants. The Wolf Lord commits to the finishing thrust anyway, convinced it has him cornered. From above, Kim Miso can only stare, unable to understand what he is attempting. The boss's attack tears straight through his body in what should be a fatal hit. Kim Miso drops to her knees in horror. Certain she has just watched Sungyun die, she blames herself for letting her guard down. She realizes too late that his brilliance in battle did not stop this disaster from happening. As she apologizes to him in despair, a brilliant green light suddenly erupts. She stares at the light, unable to process what it means. A system notice reveals that the absorbed shield of Kudnis has been destroyed forever. In exchange, he gains a special effect called Sacrifice that converts damage to a chosen body part into healing, and can fully restore him if the damage would have killed him. He instantly understands that this conditional healing skill is still usable even after absorption, though it requires choosing a specific body part in advance. The system forces him to select exactly where Sacrifice will apply on his body. He is irritated by how absurdly specific the choice is and starts calculating the safest option. He rejects his back as too inefficient because it is split into too many separate zones. Betting on the front of his body, he triggers the effect and is restored to full health the moment the fatal strike lands. Now alive and fully healed, he tells the stunned boss that one lucky guess solved both his survival problem and the fight itself. He immediately activates Demon Bash again, and this time the Wolf Lord is vulnerable. By severing the boss's right arm, he discovers that the injury bypasses its resistance and finally inflicts stun. With the monster frozen, he raises his sword and decides to trust his luck one more time. Kim Miso steps down into the blood-soaked battlefield, drawn closer by the end of the fight. He notes that his stun only worked on the third attempt, but accepts that as enough. As Kim Miso approaches, he stands before the kneeling boss and prepares to finish things. He notices her arrival and acknowledges that she has finally come down. He addresses her politely by name, catching her attention. She scolds him for not warning her that he had a healing skill and admits she truly thought he was dead. Then she half-jokingly asks if he is somehow living a second life, because his knowledge of the Wolf Lord's patterns is impossible to explain. She admits she has met many players, but none have ever confused her like he does. As she trails off, she struggles to put into words what he feels like to her. He braces himself, worried she might be about to guess the truth. Instead, she simply leaves the thought hanging while the boss remains helpless between them. She says the pressure around him felt extraordinary, and tries to explain the impression he gave off. What she finally says is that watching him felt like watching a rancor, which catches him off guard for a different reason. Relieved that she did not suspect regression, he realizes an ordinary player would never think that far. She asks whether he plans to finish off the immobilized Wolf Lord. The boss can do nothing but growl weakly beside his blade. He casually decides to kill it now, as if remembering an unfinished chore. Before the final blow, the system awards him a new C-rank title, Face Off, specialized for isolated one-on-one combat. He is delighted that his first C-rank title is tailored exactly to duels. Kim Miso reveals that she already knew about the title and asks whether he has ever cleared this stage solo before. She pauses, reconsidering how much of her own confidence was bluff. Then she admits she only cleared the stage herself because of an expensive artifact and tells him that obtaining the right tools is also a skill. She thanks him for the compliment, but clearly wants him to stop downplaying himself. To prove the point, she notes that her own artifact cost more than 200 billion won, while he fought with an ordinary street-level greatsword. She urges him to test the effects of his new title right away. When Face-Off activates, the system identifies Kim Miso as an isolated target within 5 meters, making him realize the title can trigger against allies too. Both of them laugh awkwardly at the absurd misunderstanding, and the effect is cancelled once the moment passes. Kim Miso says she should leave first so she can call her porters to haul away the loot and monster parts. He recognizes that as the sensible next step and takes it as proof that he has made a strong impression on her. Then she unexpectedly offers to give up her 5% share of the quest rewards. He protests that the offer is unfair, but she insists he should accept it. She frames the gesture as an investment in him and hints that she wants to work with him again. He forces a smile and agrees, while privately deciding he can never fully relax around her. Once she is gone, he confirms the coast is clear and turns to the real prize. The boss reward appears as a blue moonstone, a platinum accessory that boosts health, mana, and luck. Seeing the artifact, he trembles with excitement. He erupts in joy because he has finally obtained a platinum rank artifact. Already imagining the fortune it could bring, he clutches it like treasure and dreams of finally affording a soul apartment. The goddess of luck appears, smugly asking whether he believes in her now that his luck has paid off so spectacularly. Another constellation, the one with ripped lips, objects to his unfair luck, and the player's system immediately proposes banishing the goddess of luck. The goddess counters by forcing a vote on banishing the complaining constellation instead, and the tally rapidly swings in her favor. The vote ends unanimously, stripping the one with ripped lips of its status as a constellation, while the goddess strolls away satisfied. Watching the absurd divine politics unfold over his new treasure, he dryly wonders whether this outcome is really acceptable. After studying the Blue Moon Stone, Sungyun realizes that while he can absorb part of its raw stats, its true value is a special effect that massively boosts his recovery in moonlit dungeons and completely shuts down dog and wolf-type monsters. He immediately understands the implication. Against the full moon hounds that nearly killed him, this artifact makes him effectively untouchable, and he begins synchronizing his mana with it. The synchronization opens a portal in the quest lobby, signaling his return from the dungeon. Sungyun steps back out alive, carrying the proof that he cleared the impossible quest. For a moment, even he is struck by the reality of what he has just accomplished. The crowd gathered in the lobby falls into stunned silence as they face the man who supposedly entered a level 100 challenge alone. Whispers spread that Shin Sungyun really did clear a level 100 dungeon by himself, and Kim Miso's earlier claim suddenly becomes credible. As the staff member worries about the backlash, Kim Miso arrives and calmly takes control of the situation. She makes it clear that no sane person would have approved a level 17 player entering such a quest, and insists everyone had tried to stop him. Then she redirects attention away from blame and towards Sungyun's future, hinting that he is going to become a regular presence there. Sungyun, relieved to be spared the immediate mess, briefly feels sorry for the worker who had been caught in the middle. That respite lasts only seconds before guild recruiters swarm him, led by the Guardian Guild's recruitment chief, all trying to sign him on the spot with promises of status and benefits. Kim Miso cuts through the mob by claiming Sungyun already has business with her, and pulls him away before anyone else can secure him. The recruiters instantly suspect Eden Guild has made the first move. Sungyun goes along with her rescue, though he remains wary and wonders what she actually wants from him. She takes him away in a private car, making it clear this is no casual favor. On the ride, Sungyun receives the quest payout and is stunned to see 500 million won deposited into his account. The speed of the payment alone reminds him how differently the world treats someone who has suddenly become valuable. When he marvels at how quickly the money arrived, Kim Miso explains that her influence helped push the process through. He thanks her for handling everything, still half dazed by the scale of the reward. She answers his gratitude with formal deference, reinforcing that she is now dealing with him as someone important. Then the atmosphere shifts as the system announces a switch to secret mode, confirming Sungyun's suspicion that the real conversation is only beginning. He braces himself, convinced that kindness this calculated must hide a concrete agenda. Kim Miso drops the pretense and decides to speak plainly. Her request is direct. She wants Shin Sungyun to join Eden Guild. The bluntness of the offer catches him off guard. He notes that her confidence says more than her words do, and she proudly leans into Eden's reputation as the most desirable place a player could end up. Sungyun had expected this kind of recruitment pressure, and his thoughts drift back to the life he lived before regressing. He remembers how, in his previous life, a small guild had taken in a talentless version of him and given him the comfort of belonging when he had nowhere else to go. That memory turns dark as he recalls the catastrophe that eventually destroyed that warmth. Because of that past, he now sees organizations less as support and more as chains that could slow his growth. He starts to refuse, deciding that for now he needs to remain solo. But Kim Miso immediately guesses where his thinking is headed. His silence confirms to her that he is already planning to build a one-man guild rather than join someone else's. She reveals that she deduced this not by chance, but because she understands both business and players far better than he expected. Kim Miso explains that with his ability, predicting his next move was easy for her. More importantly, she says she intends to keep that conclusion secret for now, making it clear she is offering discretion as part of the negotiation. Sungyun realizes she knew he would reject a normal guild offer, yet still approached him by being transparent and useful instead of coercive. He is forced to admit that she has built a genuinely mutually beneficial arrangement, and is a far more dangerous negotiator than her cheerful manner suggests. Later, in Player Town C near Jamsil Station, Sungyun begins setting up the independent base he will need for his next steps. A realtor walks him through the terms for a new place, asking for a steep deposit and monthly rent. Even while joking about the price, Sang-yoon is told that the property is in high demand and that he is still getting a favorable deal. He signs off on it, and the realtor leaves, offering future help if he needs anything. Once alone, Sang-yoon is surprised by how quickly everything has fallen into place and wonders whether fortune is still pushing events in his favor. His sparse belongings in the new home underline how abruptly his life has changed. Standing by the window, he takes in the new space as the first real foothold of the life he is trying to build. He reflects that only a short time has passed, yet everything around him has already been overturned. The regression itself, the confusion that followed, and the constant upheaval had left him mentally adrift. At first he had spent his days simply trying to understand what had happened to him, with no clear answers. He had no idea how to move forward until something inside him changed. What returned was a sensation he had forgotten. Even before acting, he could feel blood racing through his body with a vitality he had not known in years. He recognizes that what has come back to him is youth itself. That recovered youth, and the memory of the giant enemy he once faced, refused to let him remain passive. The terror and helplessness of his old life become the reason he can no longer tolerate standing still. Fleeting memories of people from that lost future sharpen his resolve rather than soften it. Even the thought of Kim Miso becomes tied to the new path opening in front of him. He swears that this time he will live differently and never return to the pathetic existence he once endured. From that point on, chances to grow begin arriving one after another, starting with Kim Miso taking a call about new developments. As she speaks with unusual familiarity to a reporter, Sang-yoon realizes she is connected to the media as well. The call is with Park Jong-min of the Player magazine, who says the entire quest area is in chaos over Sang-yoon's appearance. The reporter pushes for a quick statement, but Kim Miso keeps control of the exchange while people around him notice who she is talking to. Outside Player Town, her car waits as the machinery around Sang-yoon's sudden rise keeps moving. When Sang-yoon gets out, Kim Miso stops him with one more offer before letting him go. She invites him to join a 4-person free team for an upcoming unconfirmed gate, stressing that this is her personal arrangement rather than a guild obligation. The moment he hears there is a chance to enter a gate, Sang-yoon accepts before she can even finish asking. Kim Miso is amused that he rejected Eden so coldly yet reacts to this invitation with open excitement. He cannot hide the truth. What thrills him is not her invitation, but the long-awaited chance to enter a gate at all. He reflects that ordinary dungeons are fixed and predictable once entered. Gates, by contrast, are unstable spaces where entrances, exits, and even the monsters themselves can change mid-raid. That danger is exactly what makes them so valuable. In the player world, greater risk always means greater reward, and unconfirmed gates are especially coveted because they can contain unknown treasures. He remembers that first-time clears of such gates guarantee high-rank artifacts, making them ideal opportunities for explosive growth. He also realizes Kim Miso likely has prior experience with unconfirmed gates, because otherwise she should not possess an artifact capable of resisting the Black Wolf stun effect. After ending the call, she promises to send him more detailed information as soon as she has it. She also insists they exchange numbers, signaling that their cooperation is going to continue. When she hands him her phone, an accidental glimpse of her lock screen reveals a memorial image and a scheduled meeting tied to someone named Gregory, hinting at a private grief she keeps hidden. Kim Miso hurriedly apologizes and claims she only meant to switch to the typing screen. She brushes it off as absent-mindedness, but the moment leaves Sang-yoon with the sense that she is carrying burdens of her own. He says nothing, choosing not to pry. Instead, he concludes that every player has complications they would rather not explain. He knows that better than anyone, because his own past and regression are secrets he can never reveal openly. If anyone learned he had regressed, he is certain it would only create endless trouble. The thought of the mysterious being tied to his regression reminds him that some truths are too dangerous to share. Even so, he cannot help wondering what the people from his old life are doing now. He had spent years with them, and the fact that he can no longer even clearly remember their faces leaves him with a quiet ache. Elsewhere, in Eden Guild's VIP room, Kim Miso waits with another guild member over coffee. That man teases her for ignoring him and staring at her phone as if she is waiting for someone important to contact her. She openly admits she is messaging Sang-yoon because they are preparing to enter a gate together. Her companion jokes that she is obviously infatuated, but she denies it and reframes her interest around Sang-yoon's usefulness and the way he rejected her offer. Rather than defend herself emotionally, she turns the conversation back on him. She praises Sang-yoon's swordsmanship so highly that the man laughs off the comparison as absurd. He introduces himself as Jo Jinho, an S-rank level 700 member of Eden Guild, and insists Sang-yoon cannot yet be measured against him. At Jamsil Training Ground 4-3, Sang-yoon later meets another familiar face from his old life. He answers Kim Miso's call there and asks to discuss the newly appeared gate. She quickly provides the location near Chunni Station and says she has already sent him the investigated information on the intersections. Sang-yoon pauses to review the data while the man waiting nearby gives him space. Then one detail catches his eye. The gate's second mid-boss is Cerberus, a 3-headed hellhound whose traits match the kind of enemy his new artifact effect can counter. He is delighted that the passive skill he just gained from the Blue Moonstone should work perfectly against this boss, giving him a chance to use it immediately. After thanking Kim Miso for the advance warning, He ends the call while the man beside him complains that this is a poor use of the meeting he arranged. The complaint turns out to be playful, and the older man reveals he is only teasing him. Sung-yoon recognizes him as Dae-kyung, his former captain, who now treats him like a rising celebrity and tells him to drop the old formalities. Sung-yoon downplays his fame, and Dae-kyung guesses from his reaction that he still has not seen the media coverage. When Sung-yoon asks what he means, Dae-kyung simply shows him the article. Sung-yoon learns that the Player magazine has already put him on its front page as a newly arrived star, turning his dungeon clear into public news. He is horrified by how quickly his anonymity has vanished, while Dae-kyung laughs that his phone should already be exploding with calls. Sung-yoon resents being thrust into the spotlight without warning, especially when he never asked for publicity. Dae-kyung jokes that this is what happens when everyone suddenly wants a piece of someone important. Sung-yoon decides to ignore the media panic for the moment and focus on why he really came. He reminds Dae-kyung about the favor he had mentioned before, and Dae-kyung immediately understands. When Dae-kyung hands over a bag of old artifacts, Sung-yoon thanks him profusely, and Dae-kyung clarifies that this is still a business deal, not charity. Dae-kyung explains that these are just old artifacts he no longer uses and questions why Sung-yoon wants outdated gear instead of buying newer items. Sung-yoon dodges the truth with a joke about honoring history and carrying on Dae-kyung's legacy, which Dae-kyung instantly sees through. Unable to explain that long-unused artifacts are easier for him to absorb, Sung-yoon hides behind a vague superstition. Before Dae-kyung can press further, an appraiser arrives late to help evaluate the items for a fair trade. She apologizes for the delay and moves straight to the appraisal work. Sung-yoon is surprised to learn she has been brought in specifically to make sure neither side is cheated in the exchange. Dae-kyung proudly says he wants the deal to be fair for both of them, even if Sung-yoon is embarrassed by the fuss. The artifacts are laid out and the appraiser begins examining them with her ability. Her appraisal power activates in a surge of violet energy as she checks each item. Once the process finishes, the system confirms the appraisal is complete. The appraiser declares the values acceptable and says the two men can proceed with the trade. But before finalizing anything, Dae-kyung abruptly changes the subject and raises his sword instead. What he really wants is not just to sell artifacts but to have Sung-yoon look at his swordsmanship. Sung-yoon tries to refuse out of humility, saying he is not qualified to advise him. Dae-kyung rejects that modesty, insisting that after everything they have been through he knows Sung-yoon is operating on a different level and is wise enough to learn from him. Sung-yoon inwardly groans at being dragged into this, but he cannot bring himself to dismiss someone earnest enough to ask sincerely. A sudden realization about Dae-kyung's problem forms in his mind. Dae-kyung braces himself, sensing Sung-yoon has seen through something he has been hiding. Sung-yoon decides that ignoring a man who genuinely wants to improve would be wrong, so he tells Dae-kyung to forget his presence and simply show everything he has without restraint. He also warns the appraiser to stay behind him for safety. Dae-kyung unleashes his full power in response. His sword arcs violently across the training ground, displaying the overwhelming force expected of an S-rank veteran. Sung-yoon is impressed by how much stronger Dae-kyung has become since the last dungeon they shared and recognizes the results of relentless training. Even so, he spots a flaw hidden beneath that power. Dae-kyung continues his barrage, but Sung-yoon has already seen enough. He stops him and asks whether something is wrong with his left arm. The question shocks Dae-kyung because it hits the exact weakness he has been trying to conceal. Sung-yoon explains that Dae-kyung opens his left shoulder too quickly whenever he swings right-handed, as if he is instinctively protecting that side. Dae-kyung realizes there is no point denying it any longer. He admits that he carries trauma around defending his left side and can no longer fully hide it. Most of his injuries from both training and real dungeons have accumulated there, and even knowing the cause has not let him fix the habit. Sung-yoon tells him that this is still something he can overcome. He explains that trauma is easier to beat when you stop trying to conceal your weakness and instead reshape your style around your strengths. He begins giving concrete instruction, from grip to breathing, telling Dae-kyung that the change will be difficult but worthwhile. As Sung-yoon adjusts the details of his form, even the appraiser can tell this is far more advanced than casual advice. Watching the two men work through the correction at close range leaves her flustered and overwhelmed by the intensity of the exchange. As Dae-kyung immediately feels the improvement and Sung-yoon keeps coaching him, the appraiser can only stare in disbelief at how absurdly intense these two have become. After an exhausting sword lesson, Sung-yoon leaves the appraiser bewildered while Dae-kyung is thrilled by the result. Dae-kyung can barely believe what he just witnessed from Sung-yoon. Once home, the shaken appraiser obsessively searches up players, reports, sword poses, and even romance, trying to process Sung-yoon. Meanwhile, Sung-yoon drives off with his new purchases. He decides spending over 400 million won was worth it because the artifacts should repay him far beyond their cost. He recalls Dae-kyung's satisfaction and the appraiser's strange expression, dismissing it as simple fatigue. More eager to consume the artifacts than to wait for the next gate, he considers calling Kim Miso. That thought is cut short when something suddenly catches his attention. He slams the brakes as two men step into his path. Pretending it was an accident, Sung-yoon apologizes, but the larger man makes it clear he has been waiting for him. The thug casually plants himself on Sung-yoon's car and complains about being kept waiting. He immediately drops the act and orders Sung-yoon out of the car. Sung-yoon's confusion only amuses the pair, who mock him for not understanding the situation. When Sungyun senses fire behind him, he realizes this is no ordinary intimidation. The big man, wreathed in flames, tells him there is no point talking and offers a choice between getting out or burning with the car. Sungyun finally recognizes them as Choi Yongkyul and Cho Seongo of the Utopia Guild. He remembers Yongkyul as a bully who built a following by humiliating weaker players on video, while Seongo filmed and enabled him. Yongkyul once kept loyal viewers through extreme content, but after crossing into outright crime he was jailed and largely forgotten. Listening to them sneer at his stillness, Sungyun concludes they are both worthless excuses for human beings. Their status windows confirm the threat. Yongkyul is level 100 and rank B, while Seongo is level 75 and rank C. Sungyun decides these pests are not the kind of opponents he wanted to test his new artifacts on, but they will have to do. Yongkyul notices Sungyun's calm and grows curious. He presses him for an answer while holding fire in his palm, expecting fear. Instead, Yongkyul frames himself as Player Town's enforcer and claims many residents complained about Sungyun. He narrows the complaint down to one insult. People hate seeing Sungyun's shabby car around them. To make the point, he kicks in the car door and demands Sungyun leave with his belongings. Sungyun is stunned less by the damage than by how petty the reason is. Yongkyul warns that unless Sungyun wants the rest of the car destroyed, he should take his things and disappear. Nearby players notice the commotion and recognize the two troublemakers are bullying someone again. One bystander starts to intervene, then hesitates. As Sungyun kneels by the damaged car, the crowd realizes he is the same man recently seen with Kim Miso. His name comes back to them, Shin Sungyun. Rumors spread through the onlookers that Sungyun may have cleared a level 100 quest alone, making even Yongkyul pause. Yongkyul dismisses the rumor because Sungyun still looks weak to him. Seongo reinforces that doubt by insisting Kim Miso must have carried Sungyun and taken the real credit. The two immediately turn the situation into content, already brainstorming a humiliating title for their next video. With the camera rolling, Yongkyul promises mercy while setting Sungyun up as the latest newbie to be taught a lesson. Seongo proposes a one-on-one spar in training mode, with the loser forced to leave Player Town. Sungyun raises the stakes by demanding that if he wins, they stay away from him for good. Yongkyul eagerly accepts, thinking Sungyun has finally played into his hands. Then Sungyun adds a brutal condition, 500 million won in Yongkyul's wrist, or else he can get lost if he is scared. The insult enrages Yongkyul, but Seongo urgently stops him from refusing too quickly. Even while cursing Seongo for interrupting, Yongkyul is forced to look at what his viewers are saying. The live chat explodes with demands for the 500 million won wager, turning the audience against backing down. Cornered by his own viewers and Sungyun's taunts, Yongkyul swallows his pride and asks if Sungyun is truly in. He briefly worries the video cannot be monetized because of violence and adult content, but greed wins out. Sungyun accepts, deciding he may as well use this chance to vent his stress. The duel is moved to Building C Plaza, where a crowd gathers to watch. The spectators recognize Sungyun and assume Yongkyul is just tormenting another newcomer. Training mode activates, sealing Sungyun and Yongkyul into a protected sparring match. A barrier effect is applied, and Yongkyul confirms the wager of 500 million in their wrists, boasting that he keeps his promises. Seongo finishes setting up the match and warns Sungyun not to beg once it starts. Sungyun calmly acknowledges the setup and steadies himself. Yongkyul begins grandstanding about how serious he is, still expecting to control the pace. Seongo suddenly panics and calls out to him. Before Yongkyul can react, Sungyun launches first with a killing leap. He declares that he is just as serious, and that no apology will save Yongkyul now. The live broadcast catches the opening attack in full, shocking everyone watching. At home, Kim Miso sees the stream and is stunned to find Sungyun in it. Hearing Sungyun's cold threat through the screen, she realizes something is very wrong. She goes silent as the seriousness of the fight sinks in. Watching more closely, Shinturi identifies Yongkyul as a Utopia Guild player who abuses his guild master uncle's protection. Miso asks if something is wrong, sensing Tiri's attention sharpen. Tiri, an S-rank level 700 player from Eden Guild, immediately understands this is no trivial street fight. She recognizes Sungyun as the player Miso has been trying to recruit. Miso confirms it, and wonders why he is being dragged into a scumbag's live stream. Tiri notes with interest that Sungyun's movements are unexpectedly refined. Back in the plaza, Yongkyul realizes too late that Sungyun is far faster than he expected. He lashes out wildly and accuses Sungyun of cheating as the exchange turns against him. Even while attacking, Yongkyul knows Sungyun is deceiving him somehow. He swings a flaming strike with full force, trying to overwhelm Sungyun outright. Sungyun's grip shifts, preparing a counter instead of retreat. He redirects the clash and turns Yongkyul's fire aside. Yongkyul is thrown off by how cleanly Sungyun reads him. Sungyun slips past the blast and plants himself in a stable stance. The fire detonates harmlessly behind him, while he remains untouched. Even Seongo can no longer understand what kind of fighter Sungyun really is. For Sungyun, the fight finally feels right because his body is moving exactly as he intends for the first time since regressing. That realization fills him with fierce satisfaction. Earlier that day, he had thanked Daekyung and the appraiser after the artifact deal was completed. The appraiser modestly insisted she had done nothing compared to the two men. Daekyung, thrilled by the successful sale, tried to celebrate by inviting everyone out for drinks on his tab. Sungyun declined, saying he had somewhere more important to be. Daekyung worried he had offended Sungyun by asking too much and even offered to return some money. Sungyun reassured him it was not personal, and Daekyung reluctantly accepted that answer. The appraiser suddenly remembered another obligation and excused herself too, because Sungyun's next step interested her more than any celebration. She hurried off while Daekyung chased after her, leaving Sungyun alone with his prize. He settled at a quiet shelter with the artifacts, ready to consume them. With anticipation building, he began the process. The system calculated a base absorption rate of only 10% for the bronze equipment, but because the artifacts had been actively used, the final rate jumped to 90%. Sungyun is stunned by the absurdly high efficiency. The goddess of luck smugly reminds him that this blessing is possible because of her favor, and he admits used equipment changes everything. He then asks her about a constellation called the Late Bloomer Model Student. The goddess listens as he wonders whether she knows anything about that name. Jealous that he is paying attention to another constellation, she scolds him and demands his focus. Her anger softens when he hesitates. Sungyun admits that constellation matters to him personally. The confession leaves the goddess awkwardly apologetic instead of angry. She relents and even gives him permission to look up again. Feeling generous, she promises to investigate the constellation for him, and Sungyun gratefully accepts. With that settled, he turns back to the bracelet among the artifacts. He activates it, expecting another useful gain. Instead of a normal effect, the 5 artifacts begin synchronizing their mana and manifesting as food. The system reveals the bizarre result as a menu of favorite foods for men. Sungyun is dumbfounded, then immediately tempted by how good it looks. He realizes that even though the artifacts once belonged to an older man, the manifested dishes are still irresistible to him. Seeing that every item carries a 90% absorption rate, he can only imagine how much stronger he will become after eating everything. Back in the present fight, his title face-off isolates Yankyul and triggers its effects, though Sungyun judges the title itself underwhelming. His status window shows the gains from devouring artifacts have already pushed his strength, stamina, mana, luck, and defense sharply upward. Across from him, Yankyul starts trembling as even the live chat notices his confidence collapsing. Sungyun quietly recognizes that fear. Yankyul responds with a desperate full-power fire assault, trying to crush Sungyun from above. Watching the stream, Miso panics for Sungyun, but Tiri remains composed. Tiri predicts he will probably evade it. Instead, Sungyun charges straight through the flames, reminding Yankyul of the wager. He closes the distance so fast that Yankyul is left exposed before he can recover. Sungyun openly claims the money in Yankyul's wrist as if the outcome is already decided. Seongo realizes with delight that Yankyul has taken the bait exactly as Sungyun intended. Sungyun drives his blade down with overwhelming force. Yankyul still thinks he has the winning move. Sungyun reveals the opposite, coldly declaring that victory is his. A hidden condition is met, and force freezing activates on Sungyun, coating him in ice. For a moment he is caught by the sudden freeze and even he is surprised. Watching from home, Tiri realizes Yankyul can use magic beyond fire and sees a possible opening. Miso bursts into laughter, startling Tiri, because she has figured something out first. She insists Sungyun possesses status ailment removal, and says that is exactly why she wanted him in her organization. Tiri is caught off guard by the claim. On the screen, the ice shell around Sungyun begins to crack. Miso calls his name as the frozen prison starts breaking apart. Yankyul stares at the shattered ice in disbelief when Sungyun vanishes from where he should have been trapped. He realizes his freezing skill definitely activated, so escape should have been impossible without status ailment removal. That forces him to question whether Sungyun was ever a true newbie at all. Sungyun reappears above him and slams down with crushing force. Even as the strike lands, Sungyun is almost amused by how little Yankyul understands. He tells Yankyul that training mode is the only reason he survived a blow that should have killed him. The crowd and chat erupt as they realize Sungyun really did break the status effect. Seongo notices something even stranger. Sungyun no longer looks like the same person from earlier. Sungyun's aura has changed completely, becoming darker and far more oppressive. Miso is shaken by the transformation and wonders what exactly he has done. Tiri identifies it as an awakening-type skill. She narrows it down to either transcendence or psychedelic, and the blackened eyes make psychedelic seem more likely. Because that awakening causes extreme exhaustion when the user takes damage, Tiri concludes Sungyun is fighting as if he expects not to be hit at all. Miso struggles to believe it because Sungyun never showed anything like this when he was with her. Tiri explains that a skill this valuable leaves only 2 possibilities. Either Sungyun had no reason to reveal it before, or something more alarming is true. Tiri falls silent as the second possibility settles in. Miso realizes the implication. Sungyun may be gaining rare skills at an impossible pace. That thought leaves her deeply unsettled. Reviewing the bracelet's listing, she notices it carried a tiny chance of a hidden skill and wonders if Sungyun deliberately tested it for that reason. The hidden skill named on the bracelet is psychedelic, confirming that Sungyun likely awakened it from the artifact he bought. As others doubt that a hidden skill could awaken under such terrible odds, Sungyun's survival still seems almost impossibly lucky. The absurdity of that luck is underscored as if fate itself had singled him out. But the truth is revealed. His hidden skill psychedelic restored him, pushed him into a brief awakened state, and left a brutal crash afterward, while he calmly turns back to the wager. His opponent, Choi Young-kyo, is shaken enough to suggest dropping training mode and restarting under real conditions. Instead, Choi lashes out, realizing too late that the rookie he underestimated is far stronger than expected. Forced to take the fight seriously, Choi creates distance and prepares to fight for real. As he retreats, he realizes Cho Seongo fed him lies and dragged him into a fight he never would have started if he knew Sungyun's true level. That realization hardens into panic as he understands he has been set up. Even the spectators are battered by the shockwaves while Choi curses the man who misled him. One of the onlookers also realizes Cho Seongo had been talking nonsense all along. Sungyun closes in and decides to finish the match before Choi can recover. He slams Choi into the ground as the promised finale begins. Sungyun reassures himself that training mode will prevent a fatal outcome, freeing him to press the attack. With Sungyun crushing his face, Choi finally gives up and admits defeat. Once the bet is settled and the promised 500 million won is secured, Sungyun reveals the fight was never just about money but revenge. Choi is baffled and terrified by that word, unable to understand what he is being punished for. Sungyun makes it clear that everything started because of Choi. He recalls the moment 3 days earlier when a mechanic told him his repaired car would soon have to be discarded. Sungyun was stunned to hear his beloved old car described as something near the end of its life. When the mechanic urged him to prepare to say goodbye, Sungyun refused to accept it. The mechanic tried to soften the blow by saying the car was fortunate to have him as an owner. That sentiment hit Sungyun deeply, as if the car itself were thanking him for every ride they had shared. He silently wished that his car could at least be happy. Back in the present, he declares that this is revenge for what Choi did to his car and punches him again. Choi breaks down completely, begging forgiveness as Sungyun keeps humiliating him. The bystanders are horrified when the revenge turns grotesquely embarrassing instead of merely violent. Even Sungyun pauses for a beat at how far the humiliation has gone. The live stream chat erupts in disbelief as Choi's dignity is utterly destroyed in public. Reduced to tears in the crater, Choi can only keep apologizing. The crowd recoils from the smell, and the scene becomes impossible to ignore. The streamer realizes the channel no longer matters because they have provoked someone far more dangerous than expected. That panic is interrupted when someone arrives asking for Mr. Cho Seongo. The newcomer is Moon Baek-hyun, Gangneung regional manager of the Utopia Guild, who immediately sees the disaster and takes control. Cho Seongo can only offer a terrified apology. Moon finds the situation intriguing, especially because a newly awakened player has just defeated the experienced Choi Young-kyo. He then addresses Sungyun directly. Moon introduces himself as someone sent to handle the aftermath and any compensation, and asks if Sungyun has time to talk. Sungyun responds coolly by demanding his name and affiliation first. Moon is briefly thrown off by Sungyun's confidence and lack of deference. He quickly realizes this is not empty arrogance but the poise of someone whose experience far exceeds his apparent level. So he formally introduces himself, and resolves to recruit Sungyun no matter what. Moon promises that the Utopia Guild will cover all damages from the incident. Sungyun immediately raises the price to 2 billion won, adding emotional damages to the original 500 million in his calculation. Moon is stunned by the demand, while Choi lies ruined beside them as living evidence of the claim. From the crater, Choi weakly asks if the payment can at least be made in installments. Later, someone waits anxiously at Sungyun's apartment until the doorbell rings. The visitor immediately bombards him with questions about whether he struck a deal with Utopia and whether he has ties to Kim Miso, or even Eden. Sungyun opens the door only to tell the pestering reporter to leave, assuming he has just returned from training. Instead, a swarm of reporters forces itself into the doorway, demanding the truth about him and Kim Miso. One question in particular about whether he is dating Kim Miso leaves him exhausted and incredulous. Back inside, he decides romance is the last thing he can worry about right now. He pushes the distraction aside and turns back to preparation. Sungyun starts getting ready for the coming gate raid. He reflects that the raid Kim Miso recommended has already arrived and that the past week has been consumed by preparation. Still, he believes the progress he has made should be enough to survive it. His growth has been substantial. Demon Bash leveled up, his dual-wielding skill improved, and the title effects now extend his hindrance window dramatically. The upgraded skills confirm he can now hinder a target for longer and handle a wider range of blades with far greater adaptability. And he is not done yet. He checks the final results of his recent training and acquisitions. That review shows he has gained blade-wielding training for daggers and one-handed swords, along with full charging, a movement skill that converts stored energy into a powerful rush. With those additions, he finally feels equipped enough for the raid and even has a backup plan. Even so, he admits his last battles exposed major weaknesses. Against the Wolf Lord, he had to gamble because his combat options were too limited. Against Choi, his lack of a movement skill nearly got him trapped and killed. He realizes that if either opponent had been slightly stronger, he would have died. That fear pushes him to focus completely, because simple progress will not be enough if he repeats his old path. He remembers the second breakdown of 2040, and vows to force a different future than the one that ended in ruin. He refuses to lose everything again in this life, so he resolves to become far stronger than he is now. He especially wants to reach the level of the mysterious warrior who once saved him. That vow is interrupted by an incoming call. The caller is reporter Park Jong-min, reminding him about the interview they had arranged. Sang-yoon is horrified to realize he completely forgot. He hurriedly pretends everything is fine and agrees to meet at the cafe they discussed. He quickly calculates that the interview is at 2 while the gate raid is at 7, so the schedule is still manageable. Then he checks the time and realizes he is already cutting it close. When he arrives, the reporters are already waiting and immediately try to drag him back into gossip about Kim Miso. Fed up, he enters with weapons drawn and an aura blazing, instantly silencing the room. He orders everyone to get back as psychedelic activates again and sharpens his body for speed. Elsewhere, the reporter waits at the cafe, unaware of the chaos Sang-yoon is causing on the way. The reporter answers a call, expecting his guest, and is startled by what he hears. He spots Sang-yoon arriving in full battle gear and awkwardly waves him over despite the obvious mismatch with the setting. Nervous but trying to stay polite, he asks Sang-yoon to sit. The reporter can only call Sang-yoon interesting, while Sang-yoon struggles to act normal despite looking like he came straight from war. When asked if he had been in a dungeon, Sang-yoon denies it aloud while privately thinking getting here was even harder. He apologizes for being late, and the reporter quickly assures him it is fine. The interview begins with questions about the recent incidents in the quest area and how much Sang-yoon has been through. The reporter tells him that, whether he likes it or not, he has become the center of attention for players everywhere. Because of his low level and sudden rise, people have started calling him a super newbie. The reporter then reveals that countless guilds are trying to recruit him. Sang-yoon assumes this means domestic guilds like Eden, but the reporter hints the interest goes far beyond that. When Sang-yoon asks what he means, the answer catches him off guard. The reporter explains that even foreign guilds are now watching him. In fact, 5 overseas guilds have already formally asked the Korean Player Association to verify his identity. That level of foreign interest in a newbie-level player is unprecedented, so the reporter warns Sang-yoon to stay cautious. By the time night falls at the Chuni Station back alley's gate site, those words still weigh on him. He had hoped to remain a one-man guild, but foreign attention makes him wonder just how much bigger the game around him really is. He bitterly reflects on how much he must have suffered in his previous life for all of this to feel familiar. Then Kim Miso arrives and greets him warmly before the raid. Sang-yoon is surprised when she says there is still time before the gate appears. The reason soon becomes clear when another woman steps forward behind her. Sang-yoon finds himself facing 2 members of Eden. Kim Miso explains that her sister has been wanting to meet him, so she brought her along before the raid. She introduces the woman as Shintiri, another member of Eden. Tiri studies him in silence before deciding how to approach him. She formally introduces herself, and Sang-yoon returns the greeting. But inwardly he is stunned, because Shintiri is already famous enough that every player in Korea knows her name. Known as the Shadow Assassin, Tiri is one of Korea's greatest players and a major reason Eden holds such influence even internationally. Sang-yoon can only think that his luck after regressing keeps throwing him into the path of top-ranked players. Then Tiri unexpectedly asks him for a favor. She downplays it as something small. What she actually wants is a fight between the two of them. Kim Miso protests that this is an outrageous request to make of someone she just met, but Tiri insists she already mentioned it on the way. It becomes clear Tiri has wanted to test him ever since Miso argued he was worth recruiting. Miso apologizes for her sister's habit of challenging people for fun. To their surprise, Sang-yoon says he does not mind. He immediately accepts and asks to begin at once. For him, a chance to cross blades with a nationally top-ranked player is too valuable to refuse. Tiri praises Miso's eye for talent and apologizes for how casually she handled the request. She proposes a brief exchange of only 5 moves and tells him to signal when he is ready. Sang-yoon knows he has almost no chance of winning, but he sees this as the perfect test of his growth and his remaining flaws. The moment Tiri merely manifests her weapon, he realizes her aura alone is on a completely different level. Even so, he refuses to hesitate and prepares himself. He activates psychedelic again and decides to fight at full power from the very first move. Miso can barely understand how quickly the mood has shifted from conversation to a serious duel. Tiri calmly takes the initiative and launches the first attack. Her opening movement distorts the air itself, showing speed beyond what Miso can even track. Sang-yoon instantly realizes he has made a mistake by trying to read her with ordinary reactions. He admits that at his current physical level, he cannot rely on raw reaction time to answer her. Even so, he barely manages to intercept the first strike instead of being cut down outright. He understands that from here on, every motion must be predicted before it happens. Tiri notices his adjustment with interest. Sang-yoon follows through with a counter before she can fully reset. Tiri praises his technique and decides to put in a little more effort as she leaps away, leaving Miso stunned. Still smiling, Tiri reminds him that he has only survived 1 move and 4 remain. She responds by filling the space with a web of impossible slashes that seem to close off every escape. Sang-yoon recognizes that she is a monster, and that she is accelerating even further. Faced with that overwhelming pressure, he makes a desperate decision. He recalls the blindfolded swordsman who once saved him and the lesson hidden in that memory. He shuts out his sight entirely and tries to read Tiri through instinct alone, even though doing so against someone like her is far harder. Miso is shocked to see him close his eyes despite the absurd gap between them. She can only conclude that he has gone mad. Yet Sungyun commits fully to the gamble and moves through the storm of attacks without looking. Tiri, still composed, watches to see whether his recklessness hides something real. At the exact opening he senses, Sungyun strikes back and collides with her blade again. Tiri is genuinely impressed that he not only endured the second exchange, but blocked the follow-up as well. She tells him that this kind of focus is something most swordsmen never reach. Then she reveals why his concentration feels so unusual. It is supported by experience that should not exist at his level. That insight leaves Sungyun shaken, because it feels as though she has seen through him and recognized the bearing of a veteran player. With 3 moves still remaining, Tiri asks for a favor of her own, signaling that this test is about more than simple curiosity. The black-haired swordsman calmly accepts the challenge and thanks her for agreeing. He proposes skipping the formal limit and ending things with her fighting at full power instead. The white-haired woman is caught off guard by how boldly he pushes her. He admits the request is arrogant, but insists this may be his only chance to test himself against her properly. He asks for one final exchange before they part. Privately, he admits he truly needs to witness her real strength, or the uncertainty will keep bothering him in training. While Miso tries to stop it, the white-haired woman agrees to indulge him. She warns that without her restraint mode, she cannot hold back completely, but promises to show him her full-speed capability. He accepts immediately, deciding that merely keeping up with Shintiri at full speed would already count as success. Shintiri crouches to launch, and he steels himself as if this were a real life-or-death fight. The moment she commits, he realizes that if he fails to respond instantly, he dies. He understands he has no time to prepare once she starts moving. That realization pushes him to abandon passive defense. Instead of waiting for her blade, he decides to strike the place she is about to reach. He attacks the empty space ahead of her path before she arrives. He commits fully to intercepting her movement rather than reacting to her body. For a split second, Shintiri notices what he is trying to do. She instantly activates Shadow Illusion and slips past his prediction. He is shocked when his read fails at the last moment. Before he can recover, she lightly smacks him in the face with the flat of her blade and ends the duel. The hit is gentle enough to spare him, and she immediately checks whether he is alright. He assures her he is fine, though he had not expected her to use a skill. As the pain sets in, he kneels and wonders if his nose is broken. He confirms the damage is minor but still stings badly. Shintiri apologizes, explaining that using the skill was an instinctive reflex rather than deliberate cruelty. She offers him a hand to help him back up. He accepts, thanks her for taking the match seriously, and she says the pleasure was hers. Once he is standing, she asks for something from him next time they meet. Rather than another spar, she wants a serious conversation with him. He agrees at once, and she says she will contact him later, leaving Miso silently baffled by the sudden intimacy. Miso finally cuts in and reminds her sister that they are almost late for their raid. Before leaving, Miso adds that there is still another matter to settle. She orders her sister to write a full report on today because her reckless actions could have caused a dangerous incident. Chastened, Shintiri apologizes, wishes Miso luck on the raid, and tells Sungyun to get home safely before walking away. Watching her leave, Sungyun accepts this as his first defeat since regressing and realizes she would have crushed him even harder if she had gone all out from the start. Even so, the unexpected meeting gives him a new benchmark he now wants to surpass. As she departs, Shintiri seems to sense his determination. She leaves with a faint, knowing smile. He recalls her attitude as a challenge and takes it as motivation to keep pushing forward. The focus shifts to Chunri Station, where an unidentified gate numbered 727 opens in the middle of the city. Miso gathers herself and starts organizing the raid party. She introduces 2 new teammates who will be joining their group. Sungyun politely introduces himself, and the armored man responds that they already know him as the rising wonder boy from the news. The man identifies himself as Park Tae-suk, an A-rank level 120 mage who specializes in the Ignite skill line. When Sungyun compares Ignite to the pyromancy used by Choi Yonkyol, Tae-suk confirms they are related schools of magic. He then adds that his own flames are on a higher level. To prove it, Tae-suk conjures blue fire and explains that he focused most of his player growth on flame control, making his output stronger than ordinary fire mages. Still, he humbly admits he has only reached the blue flame stage and has further to go. Sungyun reassures him that specializing so deeply was the right choice and makes him a dependable teammate. He reflects that Choi Yonkyol had been easy to beat because the man spread his growth across too many fields instead of mastering one. In Sungyun's eyes, Choi's versatility had really been a weakness born from lack of focus. Miso moves on to introduce the final member. The shy blue-haired woman is Kang Juhi, an A-rank level 110 mage who specializes in space connection abilities as a space wielder. Trying to demonstrate her power, Juhi nervously starts opening a spatial effect before Miso can stop her. The sudden blast of force buffets Miso, and Sungyun dryly notes the chaos. Miso scolds Juhi for doing this again, while Sungyun realizes her power is producing winds and distortions far beyond what he expected from a simple space specialist. The spatial distortion briefly warps the surrounding cityscape, revealing the scale of Juhi's ability. Flustered, Juhi explains that this overwhelming phenomenon is simply how her power works. Sungyun politely welcomes her anyway, and she bows so hard that he has to ask her to stop. Even through the awkwardness, he immediately sees that her mobility and utility complete an ideal team structure. He pictures the formation clearly, himself in close combat, Miso at range, Taesuk covering magical offense, and Juhi handling movement and escape. To him, the most important advantage is that the team's roles fit together naturally. Watching the others already coordinate, he realizes their chemistry is excellent, and that this kind of familiarity matters most when survival is on the line. That sight reminds him of his own past, when he had once struggled to explain his plans to less synchronized companions. The memory leaves him briefly silent. Miso notices his distant look and asks if he is alright. She wonders whether he is still hurt from fighting her sister earlier. He brushes it off, saying he was only thinking, and decides to leave the past alone for now. He leads the team into the gate, choosing to focus on the present instead. Inside, they arrive in Frost Hell, a blizzard-ridden mountain region buried in snow. The four advance carefully through the frozen terrain as snow whips around them. Sungyun thanks Taesuk for something he has already done for the team. He explains that Taesuk's Blessing of Flames buff is the only reason they are not freezing solid in the harsher-than-expected cold. Miso agrees that the weather is far worse than on previous visits, and thanks Taesuk as well. As they continue, Miso notices Sungyun carrying a second weapon besides his greatsword and asks why he did not use it before. He says he recently acquired it and brought it because he expected a battle that would demand more mobility. When she asks whether he is skilled with many weapons, he gives a vague answer while privately struggling to hide the truth behind his rare ability. Miso turns to Juhi to continue the conversation. Before they can settle in, a giant blue ogre bursts from the trees and roars over them. Juhi panics, but immediately starts channeling her power when Sungyun calls for Plan C. The ogre raises its weapon and charges with murderous force. Its blow smashes the snowfield apart as it lands. Sungyun and Miso leap clear of the impact zone together. From midair, Miso yields command to Sungyun, ready to follow his lead. He tells her to cover him while he takes the initiative. The ogre lunges again, trying to catch him before he can reposition. Sungyun spots the opening he needs. He and Miso dive in from above in a coordinated assault. Miso calls to Taesuk for support. Taesuk answers immediately and begins forming a concentrated spell. Miso fires downward as Taesuk's magic crashes into the battlefield beneath her. At the same time, Sungyun flips through the air and lines up his sword for a vertical strike. Their attacks converge on the ogre from above. The combined pressure slams into the monster and forces it back. Sungyun follows through with a clean sword cut across its upper body. Miso's arrows tear into the same target a moment later, deepening the damage. Without pausing, Sungyun calls for Juhi to prepare the next step. Juhi obeys and starts gathering another spatial attack. The ogre reels but still refuses to fall. It snarls and twists its body, showing it can still fight despite the wounds. Sungyun studies it calmly, already adjusting his plan. Another heavy impact shakes the ground as the battle escalates. In the chaos, Sungyun's spare sword ends up embedded in the rock below. The ogre grins through the pain, revealing that it is far tougher than the team first assumed. It taunts Sungyun as if his attack had barely mattered, but that only sharpens his focus. Sungyun answers by carving another fast slash across the monster's side. Taesuk tells Juhi to ready another attack while he prepares to support her. The ogre suddenly activates Demon Bash, signaling a dangerous counterattack. Sungyun recognizes the threat and smiles as if he has been waiting for this. He cuts again, severing part of the ogre's head and staggering it further. Taesuk and Juhi watch in stunned silence as Sungyun keeps overwhelming the monster alone. They can barely process what they are seeing. Sungyun lands lightly and remarks that the exchange was more tiring than it looked. Taesuk asks what kind of technique Sungyun just used. Sungyun apologizes, explaining that he interrupted because he judged their single strike would not have been enough to finish the ogre. Miso quickly tells him there is nothing to apologize for, and that they are simply shocked by how much he can do. She admits that even she had reacted the same way when she first saw him fight, and hints that he will probably keep surprising them. Her confidence in him only makes Sungyun feel more pressure to keep his secrets hidden. He tries to move the conversation along before anyone digs too deeply. Even so, the others are already convinced that their first raid together is going far better than expected because of his skill. Sungyun feels encouraged by how naturally the team is coming together. Then he spots a second wave approaching and dryly announces the start of round 2. The snowfield ahead is already littered with dead monsters, but more enemies keep pouring in. Taesuk openly praises Sungyun as the best swordsman he has ever fought beside. Sungyun thanks him, and Miso jokes that he has just made Taesuk very happy. She explains that Taesuk rarely gets to unleash his pyromancy at full potential, so fighting beside someone this dependable excites him. Sungyun realizes that most mages are forced into support roles whenever they lack a frontline fighter they can truly trust. Meanwhile, Taesuk's shining enthusiasm becomes so intense that Sungyun can barely handle it. Miso then asks about the strange skill Sungyun used earlier, but Taesuk is already too thrilled and eager to keep working with him. Miso sighs that she should be used to Sungyun surprising her by now, yet he still keeps doing it. Before they can talk further, A fresh eruption of violence from the forest cuts the moment short. Taesuk and Miso immediately unleash magic and arrows to thin the incoming monsters. Miso suddenly notices a new threat and snaps to attention. An armored demon ogre appears at the front of the horde, forcing the team to reassess the fight. Miso and Taesuk agree that the armored brute is the real danger and that their firepower has to be concentrated on it. As Miso starts to suggest retreating to gain distance, Sangyun interrupts with a different idea and calls for Juhi. He asks Juhi to open a portal that will place him directly in front of the armored ogre. Miso warns that the monster specializes in defense, but Sangyun has already committed to the plan. He lowers his stance and begins preparing a decisive movement skill. Trusting his judgment, Miso orders Juhi to do exactly as he says, and Juhi opens the portal. Sangyun launches into full charging, pouring energy into a straight-line rush whose power scales with distance. The force of his acceleration blasts the ground apart as he vanishes into Juhi's portal. He emerges high above the armored ogre, dropping out of the spatial tunnel like a spear. The armored ogre notices too late as Sangyun descends with unstoppable momentum. Taesuk and Miso stare in disbelief, realizing they may be witnessing something extraordinary. Sangyun grins, fully confident in the strike. Juhi is astonished that a movement skill could carry that much destructive power, and Sangyun says he can only use it this aggressively because he trusts his team. Juhi suddenly hushes everyone, sensing that they have reached their destination. The four peer over the edge and realize they have arrived at the heart of the gate. Below them lies a ruined sanctuary watched over by a blue-flamed beast, revealing the true objective waiting deeper inside Frost Hell. The party discovers that the middle boss, the Cerberus of the Frost Hell, is asleep, giving them a brief chance to think. While the others start discussing portals and ranged attacks, Sangyun stays silent and studies the situation instead. A familiar dangerous grin spreads across his face as he realizes he has found a way to turn the fight into his own advantage. He activates the Age of the Night and Wolves, a passive effect tied to the moon that weakens wolf-like monsters before him and prevents them from attacking him while the moon is fully visible. With that in mind, he abruptly announces a new plan and moves away from the group before they can stop him. His teammates are startled by how suddenly he takes charge and heads toward the boss alone. The look on his face confirms to them that he is about to do something reckless again. Even so, they sense he has a real idea and ask him to explain what he intends to do. Sangyun tells them to stay back and simply watch, making it clear he plans to handle this himself. Pressed for details, he only says there is no time to explain everything. He focuses on the one condition that matters. His moon-based effect only works at full strength while the moon remains completely unobstructed. Knowing he cannot waste that window, he apologizes in advance and commits to acting first. He rushes straight at the Cerberus, and the beast notices him but does not immediately attack. Sangyun treats the risk lightly, relying on the fact that asking forgiveness later is faster than waiting for permission now. At close range he taunts the monster, testing whether the passive effect is really holding it back. Behind him, the others panic and prepare to support him if the boss lashes out. But as they watch, they realize something is wrong. The Cerberus is not reacting to him like a normal enemy would. That confuses them even more, because during their earlier research the beast attacked on sight. Only after a tense pause does the Cerberus finally move, but not with the immediate hostility they expected. The team assumes Sangyun may have misread the situation and think they need to rescue him. Then they notice the truth. The Cerberus is not trying to attack at all. Its posture shifts from aggression to submission as if it has recognized something above itself. The monster begins obeying Sangyun instead of fighting him, stunning everyone watching. A system message confirms that the Cerberus recognizes him as a higher-ranked being and is entering total obedience. Sangyun is surprised by how easily the middle boss falls under his control and decides to finish the encounter quickly. The Cerberus is defeated almost immediately, and the system announces the middle boss's death. Even as it dies, Sangyun admits to himself that killing something willing to obey him feels wrong, but he cannot progress otherwise. His reward is a C-rank title called Reduction, which halves the cooldown of one chosen skill. He immediately links that title to Recovery, cutting its cooldown from a minute to 30 seconds and recognizing how useful that will be. Before he can move on, Kim Miso calls out to stop him. Sangyun turns, unsure whether she has noticed something he meant to keep hidden. His worry spikes when a new artifact drops beside the Cerberus's corpse and draws everyone's attention. He realizes too late that he never explained his strange skill interactions to his teammates because he is used to fighting alone. Expecting an argument over ownership, he braces for the worst. Instead, Miso simply tells him the loot is his because he defeated Cerberus by himself. Relieved, he awkwardly thanks her while trying not to show how tense he had been. The rest of the team immediately agrees that the reward should go to him, since they barely contributed to that fight. Sangyun accepts, while privately deciding he needs a better way to use his abilities without exposing too much. As the group prepares to move on, Miso casually tells him they will leave him alone to do what he needs to do with the artifact. That remark confuses him, because he still does not understand what she thinks he is doing. When she hints that artifacts sometimes require a special personal action, he suddenly realizes she may have invented an explanation for his secrecy. Miso admits she has known about his hidden behavior for a long time. She explains that after they once cleared a quest area, she noticed him lingering behind instead of leaving with the others. Just as she was about to go, she turned back and watched what he was doing alone. That moment made her curious enough to keep observing him. From then on, she concluded that he was hiding some kind of personal ritual tied to his power. Sang-yoon is horrified that his unique skill, the core of his survival, may have been exposed. But Miso reveals she never understood the truth and only assumed he belonged to the rare type of players whose abilities require ritual-like conditions. Her mistaken theory instantly saves him from a much more dangerous misunderstanding. She even tells Juhee that Sang-yoon probably just needs privacy whenever he gets an artifact. Sang-yoon realizes the situation is absurdly convenient, and far better than having his real secret uncovered. He collects the Heart of Ice, a gold accessory that grants freezing along with boosts to evasion and defense, and decides to move on. The scene shifts deeper into the frozen dungeon as the party advances toward the final stage. Juhee begins opening another large portal, declaring that this will be the last one they need. Tae-sik praises her work, and the team credits her support for getting them this far. Sang-yoon agrees, recognizing that her role is becoming essential to the raid. Juhee still worries about whether the next step of the plan is really safe. The group stands before a pile of dead ogres and questions whether the final boss will truly come to feed on them. Sang-yoon assures them that the boss in this area is driven strongly enough by hunger that the bait should work. When asked how he knows that, he pointedly avoids answering. Instead, he orders Tae-sik to ignite the bait, and Miso notices that he has deliberately dodged the question. Blue flames rise in the distance, signaling that the lure has been set. The party waits from a safe position overlooking the frozen arena. After 20 tense minutes, Sang-yoon judges that the final boss should appear at any moment. A sudden sound confirms his prediction and snaps everyone to attention. The grisly big bear of the cold emerges from the shadows, and the final battle begins. Sang-yoon immediately orders everyone to get ready and takes the front position himself. The enormous bear reveals itself as the final boss, towering over the party with overwhelming presence. Miso moves to higher ground, readying her bow to support from range. Even while preparing to fight, she reflects that their success so far has depended heavily on Sang-yoon. But she also sees the cost of that dependence as he draws the boss's full attention alone. The bear roars and charges him with a level of force far beyond the earlier fights. Sang-yoon instantly realizes the situation is much more dangerous than he had hoped. Already bloodied, he admits to himself that this fight could genuinely kill him. A brief flashback explains how he set this plan in motion only minutes earlier. When Miso questioned his orders, he insisted that he had already made the plan clear. He told them there was no better option than using himself as bait, because it was the fastest and safest way for the rest of the team to clear the raid. He explained that giant monsters like this one enter a special phase once their health drops past a threshold. That phase is called gluttony, and it makes them tougher and far more violent. In that state, the boss tries to devour everything nearby, which is why they stacked ogre corpses as substitute prey. He also planned for the feeding itself, preparing a way to drug the boss through its meal. While Juhee moved the corpses with portals, the others mixed in juniper wood, which acts as a strong sedative when eaten. The real problem, he said, was surviving long enough to reduce the boss's health and trigger gluttony. He promised to create an opening where the others could attack safely. Sang-yoon insisted that drawing out that opening was his responsibility alone and asked them to trust him. Back in the present, he bitterly realizes how close that promise has brought him to death. He tries to reassure himself that he has grown stronger, but the boss's power is still beyond what he expected. Each exchange proves that he misjudged how much punishment he could endure. Even bracing with his sword, he is overwhelmed and forced to admit his strength is not enough to stop the bear head-on. He concludes that if he keeps taking hits, he will die, so from now on he must evade everything. The boss slams the ground again, shattering the ice and forcing him into desperate movement. Sang-yoon uses the rebound from the broken terrain to launch himself upward and redirect the fight. He rises above the bear, trying to turn its own momentum against it. But the monster tracks him instantly, proving it can react even in mid-assault. That speed tells him his aerial gamble may have been a mistake. As the bear opens its jaws beneath him, he realizes he may have jumped straight into its bite. At that critical moment, Miso's arrows strike the boss's face and interrupt its attack. The sudden pain throws the bear off just enough to save Sang-yoon from being swallowed. He immediately understands who rescued him. Looking up, he sees Miso standing firm above the battlefield, perfectly placed to cover him. She shouts for him to move now, turning her support into a command. Sang-yoon recognizes that she has given him the exact opening he needed. He thanks her in his heart, and uses that chance to counterattack. The bear realizes too late that its prey has slipped free. Sang-yoon unleashes full charging through his blade, driving a heavy empowered strike into the boss. The blow tears through the ice and carries the new freezing effect from the Heart of Ice into the attack. The bear is briefly frozen by the combined effect, buying Sang-yoon a precious second. He is thrilled that the artifact's freezing effect actually works even against a boss with strong resistance. Seeing the opening, he prepares to press the advantage before the boss recovers. He declares that it is his turn and follows with another attack. That strike triggers Demon Bash, adding more force as he carves into the bear's side. From above, Tae-sik sees the moment and prepares his own strongest support attack. He gathers a massive surge of blue flame, intending to give Sang-yoon the biggest opening possible. Tae-sik warns Sang-yoon to dodge before releasing it. Sang-yoon catches the warning at the last second. A pillar of blue fire crashes down onto the boss, engulfing it in a blast far stronger than Sang-yoon expected. The explosion hurls the bear through shattered ice and stone, and even Sang-yoon is stunned by the power. He realizes that this attack may have lowered the boss's health to the exact threshold they needed. The damage is enough to push the bear into the next phase. A system warning announces that the energy of the grizzly big bear is changing. The boss's body twists, and its savagery intensifies as the transformation begins. For a brief moment Sang-yoon thinks they have done it, and that the plan is proceeding correctly. The system confirms that the grizzly big bear has entered gluttony, exactly as Sang-yoon intended. Miso senses his confidence but remains uneasy about what comes next. Another warning reveals the real danger. In this state the boss will devour everything around it, not just the bait. Sang-yoon is startled by how monstrous and malicious the transformed bear has become, but he knows the next step depends on Juhi. Tae-sik realizes the boss is now practically a different creature, far more dangerous than before. Miso asks about Juhi, and Tae-sik sees that she is still moving into position. Juhi continues preparing a large-scale portal, but she is not finished yet. She expands the warp field around herself, building the structure needed to redirect the boss's feeding. The strain is obvious as she concentrates under pressure. Miso worries whether Juhi can finish in time, but Tae-sik points out that Sang-yoon surviving until then is the more immediate problem. Below them, Sang-yoon keeps barely escaping the transformed bear's attacks as the window narrows. He panics that if Juhi is not ready soon, he will die before the raid can succeed. A sudden shift in the boss's movement tells him another lethal strike is already coming. The transformed bear lunges with terrifying speed, its hunger now focused directly on him. Sang-yoon realizes he cannot evade this one and prepares to meet it head-on instead. He activates Psychedelic, forcing out one more desperate burst of power to survive the collision. At the same time, Juhi's portal finally stabilizes into a complete warp. Despite the blood on her face and the mana drain, she announces that her preparations are complete and starts the warp. Sang-yoon holds the boss in place for a final instant, gambling everything on her timing. The completed portal opens directly in the path of the transformed bear's feeding charge. The warp locks into place, and Sang-yoon realizes the trap has finally been set. Tae-sik and Miso rush to Juhi as the strain of the spell drops her to her knees. From below, Sang-yoon is relieved to hear that she is alive, though exhausted from spending too much mana. He looks back at the boss and realizes how close he came to being devoured if her timing had slipped. The plan succeeds at last as the boss consumes the prepared bait, and the juniper takes effect, putting it into a strong sedated state. Sang-yoon can only laugh weakly in relief after surviving by the narrowest margin. The others celebrate Juhi's success and cling to her in gratitude, believing the worst is finally over. But the sedated bear is still alive, trembling and growling through blood and drool, leaving the danger not quite finished yet. The party faces the wounded final boss, a gigantic grizzly bear, and prepares for the last exchange. The monster finally gives out, its body failing as the battle reaches its end. A system notice confirms that the final boss, Grizzly Big Bear, has been defeated. With the bear collapsing in a violent burst, the gate itself is officially cleared. As the danger passes, the archer thanks Sang-yoon for carrying so much of the burden, and he brushes it off as his own reckless plan. The system rewards Sang-yoon with a major level increase, though he admits this dungeon pushed him to the brink repeatedly. A blue-haired teammate arrives late through a portal, apologizing for not helping finish the fight, and Sang-yoon still praises her contribution. He reassures her that agreeing to his last-minute strategy mattered, because it let him test the limits of his own ability. Sang-yoon sincerely hopes they can work together again, grateful that the whole team trusted his dangerous calls. Even so, he admits to himself that if they had refused, he would have forced the issue anyway. That thought brings back the grim truth of his past, where gate raids so often ended in tragedy. Even high-reward gates usually had strong survival odds, since experienced teams handled them. But for him, memories of desperate cries for help still define what those raids became. He remembers that despite the statistics, disaster always seemed to find his side. That lingering 10% chance of death was enough to destroy lives in front of him. He could only call it cruel coincidence that he was so often the one left alive to witness it. Those memories harden into a new resolve as he reflects that strength alone is not enough. He quietly settles on a more personal purpose. What he wants now is simple: to prevent deaths that never needed to happen, even as his teammates fuss over one another. Putting that vow aside for the moment, he invites the group to inspect the reward they earned together. A first clear bonus appears as the gate's final reward, rising before them like a new treasure. Sang-yoon realizes this is the special bonus he was aiming for, one that grants each member a fitting reward. He reaches toward the reward first, ready to claim what he has been waiting for. Before he can touch it alone, another hand joins his. The goddess of luck intervenes directly and insists on showing him the truth behind her power. Rather than hesitate, Sang-yoon accepts the challenge with eager confidence. He commits himself to seeing what this hidden favor will bring. The system reveals a list of unique rank artifacts and allows Sang-yoon to choose one. Seeing an entire selection of unique items confirms just how extraordinary the first clear bonus really is. He notices the goddess acting smug, as if she has prepared something more than a simple choice. Her authority unlocks a hidden effect normally reserved for artifacts above unique rank. Sungyun remembers too late that this extra favor came with a condition from their contract. The goddess openly demands proper gratitude for the effort she just spent on him. While the others are distracted by their own rewards, Sungyun hopes none of them can see what is happening between him and the goddess. He decides to stop stalling and finally pick the artifact he came here for. Without hesitation, he selects the Great Sword of Fighting Spirit. It is exactly the weapon he had planned to take from the start. The Great Sword appears, revealing overwhelming stats and a hidden knockback effect that make it a perfect prize for him. Its power lives up to the reputation of a unique artifact, confirming his choice was right. He reaches out to claim the weapon as his own. He even greets it like a prized partner he intends to rely on from now on. The moment he grabs it, the sword's weight slams down so hard it nearly drags him into the ground. He is stunned to find the weapon absurdly heavy, because the lighten effect on his gear has been weakened by the penalty attached to devour artifacts. Reading the details, he realizes the system quietly saddled him with a hidden drawback. He fumes at what feels like a scam, since every equipped artifact now effectively weighs 100 kilograms. When his teammate asks if something is wrong, he forces a casual answer and hides his frustration. He turns back to the group before his irritation shows too clearly. The others proudly reveal that they all received class-appropriate artifacts and credit Sungyun for making it possible. He tries to deflect the praise, but they refuse to let him downplay his role. The archer reminds him that they already discussed how to divide the spoils fairly. They offer him the boss carcass and the dropped magic stones as his share, recognizing that he contributed the most. Sungyun initially declines, but the team insists on settling the matter according to the numbers they calculated. He pretends to be overwhelmed by their generosity. In truth, he is thrilled because their offer is worth an enormous fortune. He struggles not to laugh out loud at how profitable this run has become for him. Afterward, the group emerges from the cleared frost-held gate back onto the street. When the archer suggests celebrating together, Sungyun declines for now because he wants to appraise the loot first. They part on good terms, promising to meet again soon and thanking him sincerely. As they start to leave, the archer hesitates, as if she still has something personal to say. She asks shyly whether she can call him whenever she wants. Though his first instinct is to reject the familiarity, he swallows it and agrees. Her quiet satisfaction makes it clear the answer meant a lot to her. She leaves with a bright promise that they will see each other again soon. Sungyun is left momentarily stunned by how unexpectedly intimate the exchange felt. He sends her off with a smile, privately surprised to have seen that side of her. Watching the three teammates walk away together, he senses that something delicate had begun between them. He reflects that it has been a very long time since anyone spoke to him with such warmth. Once alone in a back alley, he immediately begins dealing with the burden of his new equipment. He absorbs an old faded great sword to feed his devour artifacts skill. That restores the conditions for lighten, reactivating the effect, though the absorbed weapon gives him little besides a small comfort reward. With the cleanup done, he turns to reviewing everything he gained from the raid. He opens his status and confirms he has reached level 51, with the goddess of luck still bound to him and 25 artifacts already consumed. His status gains from the new sword are massive, and he also reviews the hidden knockback skill and a stamina-restoring title. The sheer jump in power leaves him giddy. He realizes that simply swapping to this one great sword has transformed his combat potential and made the gate a treasure trove. He pushes his luck stat past 200, triggering a recalibration of his critical hit range. A possible 600% critical hit confirms he is advancing far faster than he ever did in his previous life. Encouraged, he vows to keep accelerating until he can catch up to the monsters who once stood far above him. That triumphant mood is interrupted when the atmosphere around him suddenly turns ominous. He instantly recognizes the pattern as a sign that new constellations are approaching. Several constellations appear at once, with the Lion King and the owner of a beautiful beard praising his swordsmanship and fighting spirit. A far more sinister figure also arrives, the Dark Hunter, who questions why someone like him exists in this world at all. The goddess of luck treats the whole lineup like a market surge in his value, which only deepens his unease. The visiting constellations fully manifest before him, making the encounter impossible to ignore. Sungyun notes that constellations are taking interest in him again much sooner than expected. He blames part of that on his explosive growth, but mostly on the goddess of luck being too socially active on his behalf. Resigned, he decides to identify exactly who has come this time. He recognizes the Lion King and the owner of a beautiful beard as famous hero constellations born from real-world legends. Even so, their presence makes him tense rather than honored. The bearded hero studies him closely and seems to notice something unusual. The two hero constellations immediately start treating him like a junior in need of discipline, confirming why he dislikes dealing with heroic patrons. But his real concern remains fixed on the Dark Hunter. To him, she is by far the most dangerous of the visitors and the one he least wanted to meet again. He remembers that the Dark Hunter acts like a bounty enforcer, tracking players who gain excessive benefits or violate the system's rules. In his past life, she relentlessly hunted powerful players with dual contracts until some were completely ruined. That memory makes him reject every one of the current offers on instinct. He knows a constellation contract can reshape a player's entire future, so the choice cannot be made lightly. For now, he decides the goddess of luck alone is enough and refuses to add anyone else. Looking at the gathered constellations, he starts wondering if their attention means he should aim even higher than before. The thought leads him to set his sights on the distant realm of truly mythical constellations. He remembers that mythical constellations are almost unreachable beings, with only a handful of players in history ever contracting with one. He dislikes gambling, but he realizes he has no safer path left open to him. So he politely refuses every constellation present, choosing none of them today. The hero constellations are shocked by the rejection, but Sungyun remains unmoved and makes it clear repeated visits will not change his answer. Then he notices the Dark Hunter lingering instead of leaving quietly. She turns back toward him, making it clear she is not finished. Her attention sharpens, as if she has marked him personally. The Dark Hunter warns that one day she will uncover whatever secret he is hiding. After she departs, Sungyun is left staring at the empty space she occupied. He admits the warning is troublesome and resolves to be far more careful around constellations from now on. Shaking it off, he checks the time and remembers he has somewhere else to be. Seeing that it is still early enough, he decides he can make it in time. He recalls that the next rift will release kobold packs. Because they count as creatures between dogs and wolves, he recognizes the event as another perfect opportunity for his build. He braces himself for a brutal schedule of repeated runs, knowing it will not be easy. Still, he commits to pushing until even mythical constellations are forced to notice him. He heads to the quest area near Jamsil Station, where the Player Association monitors dimensional threats. Inside the Rift Management Bureau, the staff continue routine surveillance over emerging anomalies. An operator answers a call through the Korean Player Association's Dimensional Bureau. The report instantly shocks her. She leaps up in disbelief as the situation escalates. A rift has appeared at Exit 1 of Bupyeong Station, and all available combatants are ordered to mobilize. As the Bureau confirms the emergency and prepares to request reinforcements, a witness adds that someone is already fighting there. The operator can barely process what she just heard. The caller insists that a lone player is battling the monsters by himself. Even while being told to evacuate, the witness points out that the fighter does not seem to be losing. From the witness's perspective, the lone player looks strangely calm rather than endangered. Sungyun's narration explains that rifts are different from gates or dungeons, because they are unstable tiers where monsters spill directly into the real world. That is why they become true disasters, throwing civilians into immediate danger. The rift tears wider as more monsters pour out into the street. A kobold warrior emerges first, snarling as it enters the city. But the creature's confidence falters the moment it truly sees who stands before it. Sungyun faces it without fear, already in control of the encounter. To him, this disaster is not unpredictable at all. He remembers arriving at Bupyeong Station 10 minutes earlier, before the catastrophe fully unfolded. He had come because he knew exactly when and where this rift would open. The moment he stepped out, he recognized the beginning of the event. He spotted the unstable point where the rift was about to form while a bystander nearby remained oblivious. That confirmed he had found the exact origin point of the coming disaster. He remembers this rift so clearly because, in his previous life, it became one of the tragedies he could never forget. It caused countless civilian deaths, and he swears that this time he will stop that outcome. He even thinks that regressing was worth it if it lets him prevent this one disaster. His resolve is rooted in a childhood spent in an orphanage, where he grew up without ever knowing his parents. But what truly shaped him was not that absence, but the loss he later learned to understand too well. Having seen people torn away by monsters, he believes the dead must never be reduced to statistics or forgotten. A memory of someone asking if he was alright flashes through him, sharpening his focus instead of weakening it. He reminds himself that the objective comes before getting stronger and launches into action. He draws the kobold pack away from the rift and the civilians, forcing the battle into open ground. The kobolds charge after him in a frenzy, taking the bait exactly as he intended. Then his tidal effect activates, and the kobold warriors are intimidated by the aura of dogs and wolves, giving him control of the fight from the very start. He confirms that his new power is functioning, and is pleased with the result. Even so, he realizes it still falls short of the overwhelming effect it had against Cerberus. He concludes the difference is the hidden moon, which weakens the monster's submission to him. Rather than worry, he welcomes the handicap as a better test for himself. One of the wolf-like enemies lunges in with a snarl. He decides to use the opening to experiment with a newly learned skill. He activates full charging and learns it stores power for a stronger rush at the cost of being unable to move while charging. As the enemy closes in, the attack continues building. The monster senses danger but is already committed to the charge. A swirling force forms in front of the beast just before impact. He releases knockback bursts together with the charged rush, blasting the surrounding pack away in a wide shockwave. The werewolves are hurled through the air and smashed back by the force. The expanding blast tears through the whole group and leaves them badly battered. He notes that knockback burst covers a surprisingly large area, and full charging makes it hit much harder. Seeing the surviving monsters stagger, he decides the combination works well enough as an area attack. He also remembers that his luck stat widens his critical damage range, giving the attack even more potential. When some enemies remain alive, he concludes the strike was critical but not instantly lethal. He immediately prepares to try again with maximum damage in mind. A surviving brute rushes him as he commits to a stronger follow-up. Meanwhile, a van from the Player Association speeds toward the scene. Inside the vehicle, the arriving agents spot the disturbance and realize they have found the incident. The van pulls up near frightened civilians as the battle rages nearby. Lee Hyun of the Korean Player Association jumps out and demands to know who reported the monsters. A woman identifies herself as the caller and points them toward the danger. Before Hyun can finish securing the civilians, his partner notices something else happening at the battlefield. Lee Young urges him to check that first, sensing the situation is not what they expected. They arrive just in time to witness a lone fighter clashing with a huge kobold attacker amid the chaos. The kobold slams down with brutal force, but the swordsman meets it head-on. The two agents identify the enemy as a kobold attacker and assume this must be a kobold-type rift, deciding to focus on that elite first. The unknown fighter refuses their help and orders them to stay back. He insists he will handle the monster alone, leaving the agents confused. He activates Face-Off to isolate the kobold attacker and boosts himself further with Psychedelic, reinforcing his body and speed. The kobold swings, but he surges in to meet it at close range. He stacks his skills onto Knockback Burst and deliberately tests what recoil or side effects it might inflict on him as well. The empowered strike launches both the monster and himself in a violent collision of force. The kobold is sent flying upward while he is thrown back by the same explosive exchange. The monster crashes into the edge of the rift and takes extra damage from the boundary itself, teaching him another rule of the battlefield. He praises the result as the kobold slams down hard. Watching from behind, the two association agents are left speechless by the display. One of them finally recognizes the fighter as Shin Sang-yoon. Sang-yoon confirms his identity, apologizes for earlier, and learns the agents are grateful because his intervention prevented casualties in a place where that should have been impossible. He brushes off the praise and admits he only happened to pass by. Lee Young quickly guesses that Sang-yoon intends to enter the rift itself. The agents ask to accompany him, explaining that upper-level players often raid this way and begging to be taken along. Lee Young pushes the request harder, appealing to Sang-yoon directly. He promises they will not interfere and only wants to observe how Sang-yoon hunts. Sang-yoon pauses, amused by their eagerness. He agrees to let them come, privately finding their inexperience endearing. The three of them enter the Bupyeong Station fissure and push toward the midpoint through a corridor littered with kobold corpses. Sang-yoon cuts down another kobold as they advance deeper inside. Struggling to keep up, the agents question how someone supposedly low-level can move and fight this fast, and remind each other that the evidence outside already proved he is exceptional. Hyun decides Sang-yoon must possess extraordinary battle sense, and resolves to learn by watching him. Yoon is less convinced by simple explanations and points out that Sang-yoon's remaining health after such battles makes no sense. Hyun starts to answer by reflecting on how much he has always trusted his own durability as a player. He recalls that even for him, the battle at the entrance had been hard to endure. That memory makes both agents realize just how abnormal Sang-yoon's performance has been. When they reach a large chamber, they discover a full kobold force waiting across multiple levels. Archers on the upper balconies draw their bows and prepare a coordinated volley. Sang-yoon orders the others behind him and reveals he brought a corpse for exactly this situation. The archers release a rain of shots toward the group. The dead kobold body absorbs the barrage, sparing the agents from the first wave. Sang-yoon crouches behind the improvised shield with them as arrows continue to strike around them. Under the pressure, he wonders if bringing the two agents inside was a mistake because protecting them is slowing his progress. That thought hardens into a decision. He rebukes himself for hesitating and reminds himself that surviving situations like this is the only way he will rise higher. Determined to become a high ranker, he searches for a way to break the deadlock. A kobold archer exposes itself while drawing another shot. Sang-yoon instantly hurls his great sword and kills it, stunning the other archers with the speed of the counterattack. Another archer freezes in panic as blood rains down from the first kill. Sang-yoon closes in and punishes it for taking its eyes off him instead of continuing to fire. He activates full charging mid-movement and sweeps through the balcony line, cutting down multiple archers in one pass. Without slowing, he lands and keeps moving through the chamber. Reaching the second floor, he marks the advance as progress. A massive kobold champion suddenly crashes down on him from above. He barely avoids being crushed, skidding away with the help of a burst of speed. He realizes a moment later that if he had reacted any slower, he would have been torn apart. Recognizing the enemy as a kobold champion, he is alarmed that such a powerful boss-class monster is already waiting on the second floor. The champion braces behind its shield and prepares another heavy assault. Sang-yoon understands the danger immediately. When the champion begins charging again, he sees that the monster can repeat the attack quickly. He considers stopping it with knockback burst alone, but rejects the gamble because his real body cannot afford an uncertain clash. Instead, he decides he must block the hit while minimizing the damage he takes. The champion's charge smashes into the wall as Sang-yoon redirects the line of attack. Using the shield's angle against it, he drives his great sword through the champion from above. The result shocks him because the damage is far greater than expected. He realizes the shield could not stop the strike and that even this famously defensive champion was cut down with ease, suggesting the sword itself is far stronger than his current stats. He suspects the great sword of fighting spirit is supplying raw power beyond what he should normally be able to produce. Surrounded by the remaining kobolds, he begins to understand the weapon's value more clearly. He then unleashes sweeping attacks that slaughter the rest of the nearby mob before they can regroup. The floor is left covered in dead kobolds and blood. Among the loot, he finds a platinum artifact called Shoes of Rapid Movement that greatly boosts speed. He calls the timing perfect and recalls that kobolds often carry rare artifacts, which makes the drop especially valuable. He equips the boots immediately. When they fit him perfectly, he jokes to himself and concludes the raid just became much easier. With that advantage in hand, he looks upward for the next threat. Below, the two agents stare at the battlefield he has turned into a massacre. They admit the kobolds are far more dangerous than expected, even while Sang-Yoon keeps dominating them. Sang-Yoon calculates that the loot already includes several silver items, multiple golds, and a platinum artifact, making the raid far more profitable than he imagined. He also notices that killing the kobold herd has restored his health, and he appreciates how useful his clever hunter title is. A sudden presence interrupts his thoughts. He senses the foul aura he has been waiting for and realizes the true boss has finally appeared. He enters the central treasure room of the fissure, where the king's hoard lies. At first he can hardly process what he is seeing. The chamber is overflowing with mountains of gold and treasure chests, leaving him stunned. His caution instantly gives way to greed, and he half jokes that he should just take everything and retire. While fantasizing about abandoning all other goals, he fails to notice a hidden threat above him. A concealed attacker fires from the shadows and catches him off guard. The shot detonates through the treasure, blasting coins and debris everywhere. He realizes the boss opened with a sneak attack. The hidden enemy stays calm and unreadable after landing the ambush. Sang-Yoon recognizes the attack pattern and prepares to punish it. He launches himself toward the sniper's position, but the enemy evades with surprising agility. Sang-Yoon is startled that the boss could dodge at such close range. He realizes the earlier kobolds were likely bait that drew him into this room on purpose. The attacker is revealed as the final boss, the Emperor Kobold King. The revelation leaves Sang-Yoon momentarily shaken. The king fires another explosive bolt, and Sang-Yoon escapes only by using full charging as a burst of evasive movement. He admits the shot was dangerously close and knows it would have pierced him if he had not dodged that way. He lands and squares off with the king at a safer distance. Now fully focused, he drops the greed and treats the boss as a serious threat. The king calmly reloads for another shot. Sang-Yoon finds the boss's relentless ranged pressure deeply irritating. Outside the boss room, the two agents realize the final battle has already begun. They rush in apologizing for their delay, drawing the king's attention for a moment. The king reacts with a furious roar, and the agents freeze under the pressure. Its king's gaze inflicts overwhelm on them, mentally crushing both men where they stand. Hyun can barely comprehend what kind of boss could do this. Neither of them can move under the status effect. Sang-Yoon uses the opening created by the king's distraction to leap in for a decisive strike. Recovery activates at that exact moment, cleansing his own lingering overwhelm and letting him move freely again as he taunts the king for looking away. The king senses the danger and lunges to counter. Sang-Yoon's slash lands, but the king twists through it and avoids a clean finish. The hit fails to trigger Demon Bash because the king's resistance is too high. He realizes that even though recovery created an opening, the stat gap is too large for his stun-based follow-up to work. He glances back at the immobilized agents and understands how deadly the king's overwhelm truly is. If two level 100 association players are crippled this badly, he concludes the Kobold King is even stronger than the Goblin Lord he fought before. Instead of backing down, he smiles because this confirms the prize he wants is within reach. He vows that this time he will definitely obtain the overwhelm ability for himself. The king answers by summoning a storm of dark, empowered arrows around its body. Sang-Yoon immediately recognizes the danger. A system warning identifies the attack as indiscriminate barrage as the king unleashes a wide-area rain of bolts. Sang-Yoon curses the boss's persistence while trying to survive the barrage. The king keeps airborne and mobile, maintaining pressure from above. More spectral arrows gather around it, showing the barrage is not over. Sang-Yoon admits the king is far smarter than previous monsters and realizes it has intentionally stayed out of full charging range to force a war of attrition. He remembers that the king's overwhelm comes off cooldown faster than his recovery. That means if the fight drags on, he could be locked down and killed without being able to act. He desperately searches for some way to handle sustained range damage. In the middle of the treasure room, an idea finally occurs to him. With a sudden grin, he seizes on that new plan. After recovering from a strange status condition, Sang-Yoon's allies steady themselves and turn their attention back to the fight. They realize Sang-Yoon has been enduring the enemy's barrage far better than expected, and begin wondering what hidden recovery abilities he possesses. Even while acknowledging Sang-Yoon's unusual skill set, the blonde observer feels a growing unease he cannot explain. That unease sharpens into alarm as he suddenly notices something wrong with the enemy's attack pattern. He figures out that the arrows were never meant to kill quickly, but to herd Sang-Yoon deeper into the treasure chamber. Understanding too late that the whole exchange was a setup, he shouts a warning that Sang-Yoon has walked into a trap. Sang-Yoon lands in the heart of the treasure pile and calmly asks if the enemy has finally finished firing. As he drops onto the gold, he deliberately commits to the position the trap was designed to force him into. The enemy braces, sensing that Sungyun's composure means he expected this moment. The monster's confidence wavers as it realizes Sungyun is not panicking at all. Sungyun suddenly triggers a hidden effect, and a sacrificial nullification restores his health while canceling the incoming attack. The monster's finishing blow crashes down, only to be completely wasted. For the first time, the enemy is visibly shaken by Sungyun's refusal to die. Sungyun uses the opening to reposition through the treasure instead of being crushed where he stood. The Kobold King lunges after him, but the momentum of the trap has already shifted in Sungyun's favor. The monster snarls in frustration as its sure kill turns into a failed gamble. Sungyun mocks the creature for assuming it was the only one capable of setting tricks. He reveals that he had been baiting the enemy on purpose, and the system confirms that his sacrifice effect both blocked the attack and healed him. He explains that the monster should have realized something was off when he kept taking hits without counterattacking. With the trap sprung and his body enhanced by psychedelic, Sungyun prepares to seize control of the battle. He declares that the tables are turning and launches his counteroffensive. Sungyun activates knockback burst, turning the treasure field itself into a weapon. The gold coins erupt forward in a massive blast, hammering the Kobold King from every direction. The monster roars as the coins tear into it like a storm of shrapnel. Watching from afar, his allies are stunned that the scattered gold has become a shotgun-like barrage empowered by extreme knockback. The blonde observer decides the raw force is not the most important part of what he is seeing. What truly shocks him is Sungyun's combat sense, which he judges to be beyond anything he has seen in other players. Even after the barrage, the badly wounded Kobold King remains standing, forcing Sungyun to reassess. The monster grudgingly acknowledges Sungyun's persistence and refuses to collapse. Instead of being discouraged, Sungyun smiles, thrilled that the fight still has more to give. He accepts the challenge and vows to settle the battle to the very end. The Kobold King answers with a desperate charge, throwing everything it has left into one last clash. Their blades meet head-on in a violent exchange, but Sungyun's speed and timing let him control the duel. The monster is knocked off balance as Sungyun slips past its power. He cuts through the Kobold King with a decisive finishing strike that finally breaks its body apart. The system confirms the victory, announcing that Sungyun has defeated the Kobold King. The fallen boss burns away, its threat finally extinguished. A flood of rewards follows, including a huge level gain and a new C-rank title called Before the Drink Goes Cold, which grants temporary overwhelm immunity after entering a dungeon. Sungyun learns the title comes from an old boast about cutting down enemies before a drink could cool, and he is intrigued by how unusual the Constellation reward feels. With the boss gone, he turns toward the last thing he had been waiting for. He spots the special effect he wanted most, Overwhelm, among the dropped artifacts. The loot includes a platinum talisman that crushes enemy will, boots specialized for backward evasion, and a necklace that marks nearby enemies. Recognizing how useful the items will be, Sungyun decides to take them with him and absorb them later, especially since others are already watching him. Before he can leave, his companions call out to him in alarm. They urge him to hurry because the dungeon is about to shut down. They explain that the rift has started closing, and they need to escape immediately. At first Sungyun thinks they are overreacting, since a cleared rift closing should be normal. Then he suddenly realizes the real problem. He looks at the mountain of treasure around him and understands that all of it will vanish if he leaves it behind. The sight of the overflowing chest makes the loss feel unbearable. Even as his allies drag him toward the exit, Sungyun protests that he cannot stand abandoning such wealth. Outside at Bupyeong Station, bystanders and media gather around the unstable rift as it begins to collapse. A bright surge from the rift signals that the raiding party is finally returning. The crowd celebrates, convinced the station has been saved and the rift is closing safely. That excitement quickly turns to confusion when something about the return does not match their expectations. Sungyun emerges clutching loot, while his companions practically carry him out, and he cannot understand why everyone is staring at him like that. He notices a microphone being shoved toward him before he can even recover. A reporter from Player magazine immediately identifies him and starts an interview on the spot. She publicly hails him as the hero who saved Bupyeong Station and asks for a statement. Caught completely off guard, Sungyun can barely process being called a hero. Elsewhere, in a high-ranked training room, a white-haired woman begins a mock battle against summoned golems. Her summoner announces 3 rank B golems and formally introduces himself as Cho Lee-hyun of the Korea Player Association. The exercise begins, but the woman treats it less like training and more like a test of her own limits. She studies the golems for only a moment before deciding they are beneath her. Then she explodes into motion and carves into the first golem with overwhelming speed. Her attack shatters the construct before it can properly respond. The remaining golems barely have time to register what happened. She casually exhales, as if the exchange was hardly worth the effort. When one golem tries to strike from behind, she catches the attack effortlessly. She counters with a flurry that slices all 3 golems apart in an instant. The constructs collapse into rubble, unable to withstand even a mock exchange with her. The last fragments fall away, ending the test almost as soon as it began. Her summoner is left speechless by how completely she overwhelmed the exercise. She concludes that mock battles can no longer reproduce the sensation she is chasing, because everything here is too slow. Privately, she admits that what she really wants is to fight Sungyun again. A news report about the Bupyeong rift catches her attention by announcing that a lone nearby player cleared it. When the report names it as a rift and mentions an on-site interview, she becomes sharply interested. The moment she realizes who the interview subject is, she is stunned. She watches Sungyun modestly downplay his feat when asked how it felt to clear a deadly rift without casualties. His humility only deepens her fascination, because she never expected to see him again in this way. The reporter presses him about defeating a level 150 monster despite being far lower level himself. Sungyun answers that level matters, but it does not decide victory on its own. Hearing that, the white-haired woman becomes convinced he understands his own strength with unusual maturity. She starts wondering what kind of master or constellation could have shaped someone like him. Then she entertains a more personal possibility, imagining that perhaps he is contracted to a god like her. The next day, Sungyun lays out the artifacts at home and prepares to absorb them. As he begins the process, he enters the gap of unconsciousness to internalize their powers. Inside that inner space, he eagerly waits for the absorption to finish. He looks forward to gaining overwhelm, search, and backstep, pleased that luck has handed him such practical abilities. He reflects that most warriors in the age of players were obsessed with brute force above all else. But stronger monsters punished that mindset, and warriors who relied only on strength began destroying themselves. When that old approach failed completely, a new answer emerged. He recalls how the sword demon, Du Jiangsu, changed the entire warrior paradigm by abandoning heavy armor for dexterity. Instead of chasing raw power, Jiangsu built a style around evasion and versatile utility skills. That all-rounder approach became a new model for warriors everywhere. Sungyun decides that this time he will follow the path that produces the best results, not cling stubbornly to old habits. The system announces that the talisman, boots, and necklace are all ready to be absorbed. Along with the skills, the absorption unexpectedly manifests dishes tied to the Kobold King's tastes, including mushroom soup and black pepper steak. Sungyun jokes that the Kobold King apparently had better taste in food than expected. Then he notices there are only 2 dishes and starts to wonder what is missing. A third plate appears with a sinister aura, immediately ruining his appetite. It turns out to be seasoned orange larvae, and Sungyun instantly regrets asking for the full menu. Outside his home, reporters and curious onlookers have already begun gathering in front of the building. The crowd argues with security and demands access, refusing to leave Sungyun alone. From above, Sungyun is baffled that they managed to return after he thought he had already paid to keep them away. Still nauseated from the larva dish, he gives up on going outside and decides to rest instead. With no real plans and lingering fatigue from the previous day, he settles on staying home. Just then, his phone starts vibrating in his pocket. He answers cautiously, unsure who could be calling now. The caller is Kim Jae-hee from the Player Management Department, following up on their earlier meeting. She says the association wants to award him a plaque for clearing the rift, which only makes Sungyun more uncomfortable with the attention piling up around him. He reminds himself that praise and ceremonies mean little compared to the far greater disasters he knows are still coming. Because he still has a long way to go, he declines the plaque and tries to end the matter there. Jae-hee quickly changes the subject and tells him the call is actually about the Silent Ground dungeon. When he asks if his request was approved, she confirms that his recent accomplishments made it easy to get authorization. The mention of Silent Ground pulls him into a painful memory. In that memory, he speaks with a long-haired warrior who still mourns his younger sister 10 years after losing her. Sungyun asks what dungeon claimed her life. The answer is Silent Ground, a place where her skill-based fighting style was rendered useless before she could act. The man bitterly reflects that even overwhelming stats could not save her there. When he wishes he could return to the past, Sungyun silently absorbs the weight of that regret. Back in the present, Sungyun immediately tells Jae-hee to prepare everything, because there is something he must do in that dungeon. Soon after, he heads out in a newly purchased car. Enjoying the comfort of modern driving, he admits he had wanted to spend only on artifacts, but recent experience taught him the value of convenience. He remembers how carrying a giant sword through public transit during the Bupyeong incident drew exactly the kind of attention he never wants again. While driving, he receives another call from Jae-hee. She confirms that today is the Silent Ground Raid Day, and he tells her he is already on the way. She explains that another staff member will guide him once he arrives, while Sungyun reflects on how quickly time has passed during his non-stop training. He realizes an entire week has already gone by since the rift, spent almost entirely on training and checking his progress. Now he is eager to finally test the new skills he gained. That anticipation is interrupted when something outside catches his eye. He sees an unexpected traffic jam ahead and cannot understand why the road is blocked at this hour. Even after deliberately avoiding rush hour, he finds the street clogged and controlled by traffic officers. Stuck in place, he wonders if another rift has appeared. Then he notices something that makes him freeze. At the center of the commotion stands a massive blue dungeon gate surrounded by cameras, staff, and a famous raid team. The sight of the lead raider confirms his suspicion before anyone even says the name. Sungyun recognizes him in disbelief as Du Jiangsu. The scene is identified as Dungeon Number 21 at Yodo Crossing, a major raid site. Fans and media scream for Jiangsu's attention, turning the raid into a spectacle. A reporter flatters him about his overwhelming popularity and asks how it feels to be adored by countless fans. Jae-soo answers with a flat, minimal courtesy that barely hides his indifference. The reporter is disappointed by the cold reply, but keeps pressing for more. When asked about his raid strategy, Jae-soo makes it clear he sees no mystery in it. He says his strategy is simply to cut down the monsters, nothing more. Instead of being put off, the reporter finds his bluntness strangely charming. Her cameraman has to remind her to stay professional. From his car, Sang-yoon leans out and points toward the scene, finally understanding the source of the traffic. He realizes he has accidentally drawn attention to himself while staring, and worries because his own face is now becoming known too. As the crowd hypes the encounter as a meeting between a god and a human and calls Sang-yoon a challenger to Iceblade's throne, the stage is set for their paths to collide. A powerful swordsman is told that a player named Shin Sang-yoon recently cleared a rift alone and fights in a style similar to his own. Instead of dismissing it, the swordsman reveals he already knows Shin, immediately changing the weight of the rumor. Outside a dungeon site, reporters swarm Shin and assume he came to challenge Jae-soo, but he flatly denies it. The crowd's attention turns absurdly toward his new car, and Shin realizes he has attracted Jae-soo's notice in exactly the way he wanted to avoid. As cameras keep rolling around the glowing gate, Shin searches for a way to get out of the situation cleanly. Jae-soo simply smiles at him from across the scene, making the encounter feel more like a silent test than a public misunderstanding. Shin misreads that smile as condescension and briefly wonders whether he is being challenged. But as he studies the moment, he decides that even this uncomfortable meeting is valuable because it shows him how far he still has to climb. Watching Jae-soo's presence alone makes Shin recognize the gap between them and turns his irritation into motivation. Jae-soo ends the encounter without drama and leaves, with his subordinate following his lead. As he departs, Jae-soo reflects that unlike the many ambitious players he has met, Shin feels fundamentally different. He senses that Shin is not looking at him with admiration, but as an obstacle he fully intends to surpass. Jae-soo fixes Shin's name in memory, and leaves convinced they will meet again. The story shifts to dungeon number 66, Silent Ground, the place Shin is about to enter. Shin steps out and commits himself to the raid. Even before moving, he acknowledges that Jae-soo's stance had been so complete that it offered no openings at all. Rather than discouraging him, that only makes Shin more eager to chase that level of mastery. His own thoughts sound so intense that even he momentarily catches himself. Nearby, a red-haired player angrily protests that her team was supposed to raid Silent Ground today, only to be told Shin Sang-yoon has taken the slot instead. Shin approaches the commotion, and the staff greet him as the person at the center of the dispute. The furious player accuses him of abusing his status as a top-ranked player and violating basic decency among players. Shin recognizes her face and is relieved, because this confirms a memory he had been worried might be wrong. He remembers that this is the day her younger sister dies in Silent Ground, which explains her desperation. Even while recalling that tragedy, he is struck by how different her loud, confrontational personality is from the image he had expected. Deciding restraint would only fail here, Shin prepares to answer her directly. He abruptly tells her that sometimes a person needs to come on strong, catching her off guard. Then he firmly reminds her that anger does not give her the right to speak to him however she wants, especially when he is only following the association's schedule. Without waiting for further argument, Shin announces he is entering the dungeon immediately. The woman threatens him as he walks away, but Shin only finds the whole confrontation exhausting. He passes through the entrance into the ruined interior of Silent Ground. Inside, he advances alone into the dead city. The stench of rot hits him at once, confirming that the monsters here are exactly the kind he expected. The floor erupts beneath him as the first enemy attacks from underground. Shin reacts instantly when multiple undead hands burst up around his legs. He identifies them as undead-type ghouls and adjusts his approach accordingly. One ghoul manages to make contact before he can finish it cleanly. A system warning tells him the touch inflicted silence, briefly preventing skill use, and he realizes even a graze here is dangerous. Forced to rely on pure movement and timing, he grips his sword and switches to direct physical combat. He drives the blade straight down through the attacker and kills it in one brutal strike. More ghouls immediately close in from every direction, proving the first one was only a probe. Shin concludes that in this dungeon he cannot afford to be hit even once and must conserve skill use as much as possible. Instead of panicking, he welcomes the restriction as a fight that will be decided by fundamentals, the one area he trusts most. Elsewhere, the Korean Player Association Scout Team 4 gathers for a strategy meeting. The presenter moves on to the next subject of discussion. That subject is Shin Sang-yoon, and his name alone jolts the room. One senior member recognizes him as the player who recently left a strong impression on Jae-soo. Another notes that Shin only awakened about a month ago after working as a porter, making his rise even stranger. Team leader On Ikkian identifies him as the player the Lee brothers keep praising and signals that the room should take him seriously. The team agrees Shin has been drawing public attention, but some argue that rapid growth alone does not make him a uniquely exceptional case. Deputy team leader Shin Min-jae supports that cautious view. He argues that explosive growth is not unheard of and that Shin's solo rift clear should be judged conservatively until its true danger is verified. He even suggests Shin may simply be unusually good at handling the media, only to be immediately contradicted. Lee Ge-hee cuts him off so often that the room openly comments on it, and she silences everyone to speak. When pressed, she apologizes for interrupting but insists she has something important to add. Ge-hee reveals that Shin is a player she has personally been tracking. She has spent the last several days collecting data on him and recommends that everyone review it carefully. According to her, that data makes one thing clear: Shin Sang-yoon is no ordinary player. She first shows the standard projected growth curve for an ordinary level 50 player as a baseline. Then she prepares the comparison that matters. Shin's projected growth chart appears far beyond the norm, with vastly more expected skills and titles than a typical player. The room rejects the result on sight as impossible. Shin Min-jae accuses Ge-hee of abandoning objective judgment and forgetting her role as a scout. Ge-hee counters by pointing to the projected number of titles, arguing that such a rate would place Shin on the same growth trajectory as Sword Demon Du Jiangse. She insists this conclusion comes from an objective reading of the data, not personal bias. To support it, she says she interviewed everyone who has fought beside Shin in dungeons. One witness says Shin has so many odd traits that it is hard to know where to begin. When Ge-hee asks him to focus on combat ability, he says Shin's skills and battlefield presence were unlike anything he had seen, especially his use of stun. But he adds that raw skill alone still would not explain why Shin feels truly special. What sets Shin apart, he says, is something deeper than power. He describes it as Shin's natural combat sense. Another witness enthusiastically agrees, saying Shin's basic training and fundamentals are extraordinary. Ge-hee presses for precision, asking whether they only mean Shin is impressive for his level, and they reject that weaker interpretation. They struggle to explain it, but say Shin feels less like a talented rookie and more like someone drilled to perfection. In battle, it was as if they were fighting beside a veteran with years of real combat experience. Ge-hee asks for a clearer example rather than vague praise. The witness explains that Shin seemed to know what an enemy would do before it happened and could predict the next move with uncanny accuracy. That foresight let him cut through attacks as if he had already seen the outcome. Even when surrounded, he kept moving as though every threat had already been mapped out in his head. The witness notes that most fighters reveal openings under pressure, especially when overwhelmed. Shin, however, showed none of those normal cracks. It felt as though his body was already responding before conscious thought could catch up. Even sudden attacks from behind failed to surprise him for more than an instant. He recovered from those moments with impossible speed and turned them back on the enemy. Ge-hee summarizes this as a highly refined and delicately trained sense for combat, and the witness agrees. The memory continues with monsters lunging from every side while Shin keeps control of the field. No matter what situation he was thrown into, he never looked trapped for long. Even the monsters seemed confused when their attacks failed to corner him. He would instantly shift position and create a new angle of escape or counterattack. In other words, he always seemed to have a solution ready before the problem fully formed. Ge-hee concludes that Shin's defining trait is an instinct so sharp it borders on foresight. She goes further, arguing that his battle sense already rivals that of most A+ rank players. If that factor is included in their evaluation, she believes Shin deserves to be considered S rank. Back in the dungeon, Shin grimly notes how absurd the situation has become. He looks out over the ruins and realizes the number of monsters is still overwhelming. In the meeting room, Shin Min-jae is stunned by Ge-hee's claim and can barely believe what he is hearing. He demands to know whether she understands what S rank means and mocks her idea of foresight as if she were claiming Shin could predict rifts in advance. Pushing the sarcasm further, he jokes that she might as well say Shin is a regressor, and Ge-hee unexpectedly treats that as a theory worth considering. The team leader shuts the argument down before it can spiral any further. Even so, he accepts that Shin is exceptional and assigns Ge-hee to monitor him alone from now on. Ge-hee happily accepts the assignment, clearly pleased to be the one following Shin. Meanwhile, Shin pauses alone in the dungeon after another stretch of fighting. He complains about the foul smell of ghoul blood and the fact that these monsters are troublesome despite dropping nothing useful. Then a thought suddenly strikes him. He realizes he may already possess the very kind of perception skill everyone has been describing. He activates detection, a support skill that marks all monsters within range, and regrets not using it from the start. The ruins instantly fill with red markers, revealing far more enemies than he expected. Seeing the sheer number left alive, Shin is rattled and briefly considers bypassing some of them. But another anomaly catches his eye before he can decide. A tiny glowing insect appears in the air, marked by detection like a hostile target. Shin realizes the marked fly is being treated as a monster and questions why. He destroys it on instinct with a quick strike. The explosion reveals it was a suicide fly, and Shin understands how close he came to losing more than just skin. He escapes with burns only because he reacted in time, which confirms the flies are lethal ambush weapons. From that, he deduces a magician-type enemy must be nearby controlling them. Before he can reposition, a swarm of the explosive insects converges on him. Their detonation tears through the area, and the true casters finally reveal themselves. A group of undead mages appears above the battlefield, directing the flies and chanting over a magic circle. Back in the meeting, Shin Min-jae calls on Ge-hee again, trying to force her back into a stricter analytical frame. He argues that admiration is not evidence and asks whether she has any concrete data on Shin's skills and titles beyond vague impressions of battle sense. He answers that Shin seems to have unusual methods of acquiring most of them, implying his growth cannot be judged by ordinary standards. She says she has seriously considered that possibility rather than speaking carelessly. Even while presenting it as only a theory, she frames Shin as someone whose behavior may point to a hidden explanation. In the dungeon, Shin braces inside the smoke and prepares to test that theory of his own survival. He activates Defensive Sword, forming a blade barrier around himself while mocking the enemies for their persistence. The skill blocks attacks aimed at his blade, but its restriction on moving forward makes it a difficult tool to rely on. Even so, Shin decides that if he cannot advance normally, he will force the battle onto his own terms and prove he is beyond ordinary logic. A flashback reveals that days earlier he had been training alone in an underground practice room against automated crossbows. He repeatedly tested himself by intercepting incoming bolts under pressure. That relentless practice eventually let him create a defensive field with his sword that could stop attacks from all directions. Back in the present, Shin realizes it has already been 3 days since he began this extreme training cycle. He recalls that passive skills can be earned through constant repetition if one knows the right training paths. But active skills like full charging require far more specific conditions and cannot be gained through simple repetition alone. Those conditions are usually hidden, rarely shared, and almost impossible to discover without luck unless someone already has deep experience. Still, Shin knows luck is not the only thing guiding him. Because of his accumulated experience, he can identify and exploit those hidden conditions, which is how he found Defensive Sword in the first place. The undead mages notice his survival and focus their attention on him. One of them locks onto him with clear hostility. The mages gather dark green fire and begin casting Inferno together. Shin launches himself straight toward them through the storm of magic and insects, choosing offense over waiting to be overwhelmed. As he advances, he admits Defensive Sword is powerful but too restrictive to use passively in a fight like this. So he turns the incoming explosions into propulsion instead of merely enduring them. The blast wave carries him forward at tremendous speed. He rides that momentum like a slingshot toward the casters. The undead mages are stunned when the supposedly pinned target suddenly closes the distance. Shin breaks the skill's intended limitation by exploiting its wording rather than obeying its spirit, proving that rules can be bent if understood well enough. The mages answer with a fresh barrage of Inferno, trying to erase him before he reaches them. Shin dives through the converging fireballs, threading the narrow gap between their attacks. He sees the opening and commits completely. One mage realizes too late that Shin has already broken through the kill zone. With his barrier still guiding the charge, Shin crashes into the undead line and begins his counterattack at point-blank range. A skull-like monster is shattered apart in a single crushing blow. In the sudden quiet, a lone armored knight senses that something is wrong. He pauses, silently searching for the source of the disturbance. The fallen remains crack open as a rare drop begins to emerge. A young hunter notices the glowing reward and is briefly stunned by his luck. He realizes it is a high-grade purple magic stone worth a fortune, proof that the dungeon's rewards are improving with difficulty. Rather than risk stopping now, he decides to leave the stone and collect it after clearing the area. Confidently, he turns his attention toward reaching the dungeon's center and activates his detection skill. The result shocks him because the skill finds only one monster left in the entire area. He immediately suspects the rest of the mobs did not simply disappear on their own. Before he can locate the last enemy, the armored knight appears behind him and closes in. He realizes too late that the threat was at his back. With no time to identify the angle of attack, he resolves to gamble on a block. He leaps away and commits to his guess, hoping it will save him. Instead of a direct strike, the ground erupts with violent purple energy across the battlefield. The blast throws him into the air and leaves him cursing the trap. As he regains himself, he understands that all the other monsters fled because of this new arrival. He recognizes the knight as a being so lethal that even dungeon monsters avoid it. The identity clicks into place. This is a Death Knight. The Death Knight descends on him immediately, forcing him into a desperate defense. Even without knowing why it is outside the dungeon's center, he can tell from its presence alone that it is overwhelmingly dangerous. The sight also stirs a painful memory of a girl tied to this monster's past violence. He remembers that this same kind of monster killed her younger sister. The system confirms the enemy as the middle boss, the Death Knight of Penance and Rage. That memory hardens his resolve, and he swears he will not let the same tragedy happen again. He charges straight at the Death Knight instead of retreating. Their weapons collide, and he immediately feels how brutal the difference in power is. The Death Knight keeps pressing with crushing sword blows that drive him back. He realizes each strike is far heavier than he can comfortably withstand. He recalls that a Death Knight is an undead monster created when a dead knight's soul enters an undying body. Its signature ability is a constant swamp of silence that nullifies skills for anyone caught in the aura beneath its feet. Because the association judged that ranged parties could avoid that aura, they badly underestimated the dungeon's true danger. He remembers that this misreading led to disaster, because the Death Knight's real threat was never just the silence field. Its true power came from the dead knight's soul sealed inside it. If that soul belonged to a highly trained warrior, the monster's danger rose drastically. Later, the dungeon's official difficulty was revised upward once that truth became known. Death Knights in this place were ultimately judged to be between A+ and S rank. A heavy impact slams into him and sends his body reeling under that reality. Spitting blood, he admits to himself that he is in real danger now. For the first time in this fight, he accepts that he might actually die here. Lying there, he falls into a brief, grim silence. The Death Knight seems almost puzzled when the hunter suddenly laughs off his fear and anger takes over instead. He recognizes an old pattern in himself. Whenever he is exhausted or cornered, doubt comes first. He calls that weakness out directly, refusing to let hesitation decide the fight. He understands that if he keeps thinking like this, he will never change. So he addresses the Death Knight and deliberately provokes it. He openly challenges the monster, demanding that it come at him. The Death Knight answers with a cold, silent stare. Purple energy gathers around the knight as it prepares another assault. The two face each other across the ruined chamber, both now fully committed. The Death Knight lets out a low growl and launches again. He reacts instantly and slips away from the incoming rush. The monster notices his sudden movement and adjusts. It dives after him from above, trying to pin him down with another killing strike. He is pleased to see it chasing him, because fighting head-on with his remaining health would be suicide. What he needs most is a way to restore his HP while staying alive. His detection skill suddenly reveals a cluster of nearby monsters, giving him exactly the opening he was looking for. He realizes the lesser monsters had retreated toward the center to avoid the Death Knight. He spots the route into that deeper section and commits to it. He dashes through the doorway before the Death Knight can stop him. Inside, a crowd of ghouls rises to meet him. They shriek as he barrels straight into them. He stays calm because this is exactly what he wanted. He carves through the pack in a sweeping, continuous slaughter. One ghoul is split cleanly apart as he cuts a path through the mob. Behind him, the Death Knight keeps closing while he uses the chaos as cover. His clever hunter title restores stamina and HP with each kill, and he gladly takes the recovery. Using the momentum from the massacre, he decides to keep healing this way and push toward the deepest part of the dungeon. He races into the deepest section of silent ground. The moment he arrives, he senses something waiting there and tenses. He finds an even larger horde still gathered ahead of him. Instead of despairing, he sees enough prey left to refill himself completely. But the Death Knight bursts in right behind him, refusing to let him farm safely. He realizes he has run out of room to maneuver. The Death Knight unleashes a massive purple slash that tears through the horde in a straight line. He understands at once that the attack was never aimed at him. The monster deliberately wipes out the lesser undead around them. Its expression sharpens as it commits to that ruthless choice. He grasps the reason immediately. The Death Knight noticed he was recovering by killing its allies and removed that option. Then it blasts him upward again, seizing control of the fight. As he tumbles, he prepares a knockback burst to counterattack. He tells himself he has recovered enough and finally found an opening to use it, but the skill fails to activate. He has drifted into the swamp of silence, and the Death Knight's aura nullifies every skill he tries to use. The realization hits him with bitter clarity. The Death Knight punishes that mistake with another devastating blow. He is hurled away, battered and losing all the HP he had just regained. He curses himself for forgetting the silence field at the worst possible moment, and knows his sword block barely saved his life. Frustration mounts as he feels the fight slipping again. For a moment, he is tempted to believe he cannot keep going. That weakness drags up the memory of a battlefield where giving up meant losing everyone. He remembers a dying woman calling his name and asking one final favor. She begged to be buried beside her younger sister, and he refused to accept her death. He had lied to keep her conscious, insisting rescue would come soon. He remembers desperately urging her to stay awake. Then he recalls the instant he realized she was already gone. He sees himself frozen beside her body, unable to change what happened. That old helplessness tightens around him again. The memory ends with his scream over the dead. Back in the present, smoke and dust swirl through the ruined hall as the Death Knight advances. The monster watches him in silence, waiting to see whether he will break. Instead, he admits that he had been thinking about this fight the wrong way. Trying to conserve himself for the final boss was a mistake, and he decides he will stop repeating that kind of hesitation. He chooses survival over restraint, activates psychedelic, and commits to a life-or-death gamble. He refuses to give up, not because of duty to the past, but because he still wants to live. With red energy surging around him, he steps back toward the Death Knight. Both fighters explode into motion, their speeds blurring across the chamber. He resolves to fight for what he can still protect, not for what he already lost. He crashes into the exchange with renewed force. The Death Knight absorbs the impact and tries to overpower him again. His hands tear and his body strains, proving he still cannot win by raw strength alone. But in that pain, he finally understands what advantage he does have. He realizes he is not stronger than the Death Knight, but he is better at reading and exploiting openings. The Death Knight answers with a towering purple strike meant to crush him outright. He slips away before it can land cleanly. He gets behind the monster's guard, moving where its power matters least. The Death Knight whirls around in fury, trying to catch him. He taunts it, pointing out that overwhelming attacks mean nothing if they cannot connect. Then he lands a clean blow, and the system confirms it as a critical hit. His luck spikes the damage window to an absurd level, and he pours everything into the strike. The critical launches the Death Knight across the room with explosive force. The blow tears through its armor and sends blue flames spilling from the wound. He watches the monster crash down, badly damaged but not finished. Standing amid the dust with red energy still crackling around him, he waits for what comes next. He tells the fallen knight to stop acting finished, because he knows better. He remembers that Death Knights never end this easily. Sure enough, the Death Knight sacrifices the flames of its former life to force up all of its physical stats. He recognizes the start of its final pattern and braces himself. All Death Knights differ, but they share one rule: when their HP drops below 10%. They begin a 10-second self-destruction sequence, turning the fight into a deadly game of tag. The wounded knight rises again while blue fire and purple power build toward detonation. He steadies himself in silence, already calculating the countdown. He repeats to himself that the monster is not done yet, and neither is he. He keeps his eyes on the burning knight, waiting for the first move of the final phase. The Death Knight roars as the sacrificial flames drive its body beyond its previous limits. He confirms to himself that the last phase has truly begun. He recalls the rule completely. Once the countdown starts, every Death Knight becomes a walking explosion. The monster's power surges again as the self-destruction timer begins ticking down. A massive blue blast erupts around the Death Knight, and he knows one direct hit now would kill him instantly. At his current level, trying to finish it head-on would be suicide. He compares himself to prey before a predator, forced to survive rather than dominate. But he refuses to die passively, and decides that even prey can still shape the hunt. With 10 seconds left, the Death Knight detonates another attack to start the chase. The countdown flashes as the flaming skull locks onto him. He chooses the only viable plan and runs for his life. The Death Knight tears after him, blasting the ground apart in pursuit. He glances back and realizes just how little room for error remains. Even while fleeing, he forces himself to stay calm and think. As the timer drops to 9, the Death Knight dives after him with another explosive rush. He suddenly notices the monster reaching with purple energy instead of simply striking, hinting that the chase has another trap still to reveal. As the battered swordsman realizes his enemy may be about to reveal its true move, he braces himself despite being at his limit. The Death Knight raises a hand and begins shaping a dense mass of purple power into a weapon. That power condenses into a blade-like projectile marked with runes, making the threat immediate. The Death Knight hurls the attack across the ruined hall while the countdown keeps falling. The swordsman refuses to accept the hit and forces out a desperate counter. His strike collides with the incoming attack, and even the Death Knight is caught off guard by the interruption. For the first time, the Death Knight lets out a paying roar instead of cold control. A barrage of blue slashes tears through the monster, showing the swordsman has finally found a way to hurt it. Bloodied and grim, he pushes himself harder, driven by sheer stubbornness. Seeing there is still time left, he curses himself for nearly giving up too soon. He admits his body is already breaking down and that every breath feels crushing, but he keeps going anyway. He begs his failing body to endure just a little longer so he can finish this. With sweat and blood running down his face, he orders himself to keep holding on. The two clash again in a violent explosion that throws both of them apart. The swordsman crashes across the floor while the Death Knight is blasted back into the distance. He forces himself upright again, refusing to stay down. As the timer drops further, a system warning reminds him that inside the Death Knight's swamp of silence all skills are nullified. He stops panicking long enough to force himself to think clearly. The looming Death Knight makes the stakes plain. If he cannot think of a way through this, he dies. A blue slash suddenly bisects the ghoul, revealing that another fighter has entered the battle. A black-haired swordsman in armor stands over the corpse, and the nearby monsters recoil from him. The area around him is littered with butchered ghouls, proving he cut through them with ease. The newcomer finally confirms he has finished off his side of the fight. The protagonist erupts in relief and anger. Thrilled, the ghouls are dead and furious about how often they abuse silence against him. A blonde female knight approaches and asks if he is finally done, and he admits he just finished. When he complains that she looks completely fine, she casually says the fight was never that difficult for her. He protests that silence turns the battle into a death sentence for a swordsman who cannot use skills while the ghouls spam theirs. She reminds him that she told him to bring status abnormality potions from the guild, and he defends himself by saying a long cooldown would make them useless if silence was reapplied. She cuts through his excuse by telling him that is exactly why such tools must be used intelligently. Her point is simple: even a 2-hour cooldown still gives one decisive chance, and a real player should be able to clear a raid with the hand they are dealt. He hears the lesson but only grows more irritated at being lectured. Instead of accepting it, he grabs her in frustration and snaps that if things were that easy he would already be a ranked player. She fires back that she is only stating the truth, and he threatens her for talking back. Remembering that exchange now, he admits he had no right to treat her that way. At last his recovery skill activates and removes the silence status that had been suppressing him. With his skills restored, he immediately calls up Backstep, a movement skill that can create a sudden opening. He uses it to slip backward just as the Death Knight lunges, buying a little more time. The Death Knight charges after him, still relentless despite the near finish. Its roar fills the hall as it commits to the killing blow. The swordsman is flung back again, barely surviving the pursuit. He realizes that backstep has drained the last of his mana and that he has no hidden option left. The Death Knight closes in for the final strike while he can only face it head-on. In desperation, he reaches toward his sword even though his body is no longer obeying him. The Death Knight's spear-like attack tears past him as the timer falls to its final seconds. The remaining time drops to almost nothing, leaving no room for another mistake. He slams down hard, still alive but completely spent. Coughing blood, he admits he no longer has the strength to move and can only wonder how much time remains. Then he notices the Death Knight beginning another attack and realizes death is still coming. He stares at the monster and wonders if this is truly the last thing he will ever see. As he faces the end, he stops asking where things went wrong and instead recognizes that his entire run has been full of mistakes. He first misread the enemy's strength and paid for it with far too much damage. He admits he repeated that same mistake later, even if he fought better near the end. He also regrets wasting his regression ability instead of using it with more care. Above him, the Death Knight's body begins to crack and break apart. The monster collapses out of the air and crashes down beside him. Lying in the rubble, he can only laugh weakly at the absurdity of surviving this long. He had already accepted that everything was over when the countdown hit 0. Then he realizes he must have regressed again, because the Death Knight is disintegrating instead of killing him. A system message confirms the impossible. He has defeated the Death Knight and gained more experience than ever before. Multiple level-ups restore his health and stamina, and he suddenly remembers that a big level increase can save him from death. But that relief is incomplete, because he immediately notices a problem. His health is back, yet his body still trembles from exhaustion because stamina and HP are not the same thing. He also remembers he is still carrying the penalty from psychedelic, which means the raid is far from safely over. Since the final boss of Silent Ground still lies ahead, he knows he cannot continue in this condition. That leaves him with only one practical choice. He decides to undo psychedelic now, recover his stamina, and accept whatever backlash follows. He briefly reassures himself that he was not struck after activating the skill, so maybe the penalty will be manageable. The moment he commits, he senses that assumption was dangerously wrong. The built-up damage hits all at once, folding him over in agony. The system explains that undoing psychedelic has converted the stored damage into severe exhaustion. A second warning makes it worse. The accumulated damage exceeds the safe limit, and if this state continues, he could die. Outside the dungeon, the waiting group watches the portal to Silent Ground and begins to worry. The analyst notices something is off because the timing no longer matches the prediction. The others realize he should have emerged by now, and while one suggests reporting it, the red-haired woman insists he must bear responsibility for entering so confidently. Even so, her hard stance starts to crack under growing concern. Her irritation boils over because she cannot ignore the possibility that something has gone wrong inside. Back in the dungeon, the protagonist can barely process what is happening as dust swirls around his collapsed body. Half-conscious, he wonders what on earth he is still doing alive in there. The hall remains silent except for drifting debris and his fading breath. Then new ghouls emerge from the haze and begin closing in on his helpless body. They surround the crater where he lies, drawn to him like scavengers sensing a corpse. One ghoul leans in with hungry delight, ready to feed. A claw reaches toward his face while he is too weak to resist. At that instant, a tiny goddess appears and declares that anyone who tries to harm her player will not be forgiven. Her presence alone sends the ghouls fleeing in terror, as if some higher authority has entered the room. She scolds him for acting pathetic and demands that he get up, questioning whether this is really all he amounts to. He can only stare at her in stunned silence. She spins in place, taking stock of the room with sudden alertness. Then she notices something important lying nearby. A sly smile spreads across her face as she realizes there is still a reward to claim. The protagonist lies beside the Death Knight's sword and bones while the goddess hovers over him. When he finally wakes properly, he is disoriented and unsure where he is. The memory of the dungeon snaps back into place and jolts him fully awake. He panics over how long he was unconscious inside such a dangerous place. The after effects of psychedelics slam into him again, racking his body with pain. He curses the skill's backlash, but accepts that he had no choice against an enemy like the Death Knight. At first he is relieved the ghouls did not chase him, but then he realizes that makes no sense for corpse-hungry monsters. As he turns to investigate, he notices the goddess lying nearby and is startled by the sight. He laughs in disbelief as he begins to understand that she must have intervened. He asks whether the goddess saved him, only to find her fast asleep and unable to answer. Since she cannot explain what happened, he decides to focus on whatever rewards he can secure for now. A lone ring rises from the remains as the dungeon's prize. It floats toward him, glowing with concentrated mana. He identifies it as the Silent Ring, a platinum support artifact that boosts mana recovery inside the dungeon when the moon is visible. Instead of celebrating, he explodes in frustration because after everything he endured, the reward is not the silence-related artifact he wanted. Then he stops mid-rant as a thought finally clicks into place. He recalls the system's exact wording. He defeated the Death Knight and gained enormous experience. That reminds him of the strange status window he saw right before blacking out. When he checks his information, he finds his level has jumped to 83 and he has a large pool of new stat points. The number itself is so absurd that he has to stare at it twice. Shock overtakes him as he realizes the increase is real. He can barely say the number aloud, stunned that he has reached 83. Compared to the time he only reached level 58 after defeating the Kobold King, this gain is on an entirely different scale. He concludes that killing the Death Knight alone raised him by more than 20 levels. That means he traded a poor haul of artifacts for a monstrous amount of experience, and his growth is accelerating exactly as he hoped. Drunk on the possibility, he imagines becoming a top-ranked player in no time. The dream is cut short by a violent coughing fit that reminds him his body is still damaged. He realizes he is literally coughing blood and cannot ignore the cost of this victory. So instead of moving on, he settles down beside a fire to recover. The quiet campfire makes him nostalgic, and he admits it has been a long time since he felt this relaxed inside a dungeon. When he teases the goddess for relaxing even more than he is, she answers that luck favors those who can enjoy life's small moments. Her words make him reflect on how far he has drifted from that kind of life. Still, he decides the past is over and that he has to live differently now. He resolves to seize fate with his own hands and begins synchronizing his mana with the silent ring so he can absorb it. The absorption completes, and instead of a normal reward, the process produces a luxurious serving of bone marrow garnished like a gourmet dish. He is thrilled by the absurd rarity of it, and marvels that he only ever saw food like this online in his previous life. Trying to imitate those videos, he carefully scoops the marrow out with a spoon. He experiments with lifting the rich piece properly, treating the moment with ridiculous seriousness. With theatrical confidence, he prepares to taste it. As the silent ring is fully absorbed, he happily declares that eating meat by a campfire is a dream come true, while the goddess is baffled by how relaxed he has become. She then asks how he obtained his Devour Artifacts ability, explaining that such unrestricted growth abilities are exceedingly rare. He answers that every awakened player is supposed to gain an innate ability, and she admits she does not know individual player traits but calls his power an extraordinary stroke of luck. He laughs bitterly at that word, because the only way he got this luck was by paying for it through regression. The goddess replies that she is lucky too, because she chose a growth-type player like him as her own. Her praise makes him think seriously about what growth could really mean for his future. He imagines his name spreading across the country, then rejects that as too small for his ambition. In his mind rises a far greater stage and a figure no ordinary player could ever hope to reach, the true monster of the world. That figure is a mage who surpassed all normal limits and mastered all 4 elemental magics. He remembers the man who alone held back an S-class rift and became the United Kingdom's first high-rank archmage. The name that defines that impossible summit is Geron Decay. He knows he is nowhere near even standing in that man's shadow, but he begins to wonder if one day he could make him his goal. Turning to the goddess, he addresses her with sudden sincerity. He promises that becoming her player will prove to be the greatest choice she ever made, and silently vows to grow until even Geron Decay becomes a target he can chase. The goddess is stunned by the seriousness and scale of his declaration. Then her surprise melts into a warm, delighted smile. A burst of light follows as her emotions spill over into action. She throws herself at him in an affectionate embrace, proudly declaring that she knew she had chosen well and that his words moved her. Overjoyed, she resolves to support him with everything she has from now on. She says their fates are now bound together, and that her trust in Shin Sang-yoon has deepened, while he can only yelp because the hug is crushing his already aching body. The system turns even that into a blessing, announcing that the goddess of luck's all-out hug has restored his stamina completely. The challenger steps into the final chamber of Silent Grounds, where death itself seems to be waiting. At the heart of the audience chamber of silence, a skeletal king sits on his throne wrapped in ominous purple power. The final boss reveals himself as the weary King Archlich, an undead ruler exhausted by endless boredom. He first speaks in an ancient tongue, then switches languages and casually praises the intruder for making it this far. Archlich invites the hero to entertain him, and the hero is caught off guard by how talkative this supposed final boss is. The hero points out that Archlich ignored them while they camped outside his door, which let him fully recover, and thanks him for the mistake. With the pleasantries over, the hero draws his sword and prepares to end the fight quickly. He vows to finish Archlich before boredom can return, while his tiny goddess companion hypes him up from the sidelines. The hero also sees this battle as his chance to finally be done with the dungeon that has been tormenting him. Archlich opens with overwhelming magic, raining attacks from multiple directions and forcing the hero into pure evasion. Rather than being threatened, Archlich delights in watching his prey scramble and decides to see how long the hero can keep it up. The barrage tightens around the hero, and he realizes the Lich is deliberately pressing him while mocking him. A direct blast nearly catches him, proving that one mistake here will be fatal. The hero recognizes the spell pattern as a dangerous subspace technique that launches weapons from every angle, making even defense skills hard to use. As the summoned weapons keep multiplying, he starts worrying that he cannot block many more hits while Archlich shows no sign of running dry. He calculates his own mana use and realizes that if he keeps relying on skills, he will be the first one to collapse. That thought leads to a sudden realization when he notices something strange in Archlich's casting rhythm. He suspects Archlich is intentionally baiting him into wasting all his mana, just as the Lich declares the show is over. Archlich transforms further, forcing out extra skeletal arms so he can cast even more spells in rapid succession. The Lich announces the hero's end and prepares to crush him under the weight of that advantage. Then Archlich tells him not to fear, as if death here is only the natural result of bad luck. Instead of panicking, the hero answers with calm confidence. He promises to finish the fight instantly, mocking the eyeless Lich while hiding that he has already found a counter. He judges Archlich as a high-rank mage whose transformed state may actually make him harder to handle than the Death Knight from earlier. The hero recalls the basic weakness of mages. Proper spellcasting normally needs both hands focused on one spell. Casting one-handed weakens accuracy and power, which means Archlich's flood of attacks must come with trade-offs. That insight brings his attention back to the Lich's altered body. He realizes Archlich solved the hand problem in the simplest undead way possible by growing more arms and brute-forcing extra casts. Even if perfect triple casting is impossible, firing 3 spells in quick succession is still enough to overwhelm most opponents. So the hero decides the only answer is to strike before Archlich can fully exploit that advantage. He launches himself straight at the throne, betting everything on a fast kill. Archlich calls that charge a grave mistake and activates Language of Silence. The hero is afflicted with silence, losing access to all skills for 3 crucial seconds. Even stripped of skills, he refuses to retreat and keeps charging with raw physical force alone. He declares that he does not need abilities to cut off Archlich's head if he can just reach him. Archlich calmly begins another spell, showing he had expected exactly that response. At the last moment, the Lich uses extreme close-range blink, slipping out of the sword's path and turning the hero's commitment against him. From point-blank range, Archlich follows with flames of purgatory, convinced the hero has doomed himself. While lecturing him about mistaking luck for skill, the Lich is suddenly interrupted by a rising blade of blue force. Archlich only has time to register that something impossible is coming straight for him. The hero's counterattack detonates through the Lich's body and tears apart the spell before it can finish him. Archlich is left screaming in disbelief as the blue strike overwhelms his purple magic. The hero answers the Lich's taunt by admitting that luck really is all he has ever had. Archlich crashes to the floor in pieces, badly wounded and no longer in control of the fight. Now staring up at the hero, the Lich can only deny what happened and ask how he was beaten. The hero laughs and reminds him that he had been watching the whole battle, so the answer should have been obvious. He reveals that he possesses a skill capable of undoing silence, something Archlich knew in theory but failed to account for in practice. What Archlich truly overlooked was not the counter itself, but the lesson hidden in the hero's previous battle. The hero had shown his fighting style and his mana limits before, and Archlich believed he had perfectly measured both. That confidence made the Lich certain the hero could not possibly spend mana on another skill during the silence window. Archlich insists his calculations were flawless, and the hero tells him that trusting those calculations was the real mistake. He explains that once someone can push past their limits, old assumptions stop being reliable. His passive mana circulation had been accelerating his recovery the whole time, letting him exceed the mana ceiling Archlich thought he understood. Outside the dungeon, an orange-haired woman waiting near the gate senses something has changed. When the hero finally emerges alive, the crowd erupts in shock and excitement, and the media immediately rushes to turn the moment into an interview. The hero, still dazed from battle, has no idea why everyone is suddenly surrounding him. Seeing cameras, medics, and onlookers gathered around the gate, he feels like he has somehow walked into a scene he remembers from another life. A reporter and emergency staff descend on him at once, bombarding him with introductions, questions, and medical checks before he can even answer. The questioning becomes so chaotic that even his personality type gets thrown into the pile, turning concern into absurd noise. He can only stare, overwhelmed by the attention. Nearby, the orange-haired woman laughs in relief and insists she was never really worried enough to ask anyone for help. Her tall blonde companion silently doubts that claim. Others watching the scene start noticing that the supposed nurse among them is acting strangely. The suspicion grows as she keeps blurting out personality types instead of behaving like medical staff, exposing that she is an imposter. The moment hangs in a bright, awkward pause as everyone finally notices the deception. Watching the blonde man, the hero quietly realizes he can at last repay an old debt. His thoughts drift back to the past, to the time before regression when he was just another isolated player in a crowded world. 10 years after awakening, his growth had completely stalled, and his obsession with devour artifacts left him cut off from everyone else. Back then, no one paid him any attention until one voice unexpectedly called out to him. That voice belonged to the blonde swordsman, who invited him to join a raid and became the first person to reach out. The invitation came with awkward oversharing about a guildmate getting sick from expired kimchi, revealing a guild that was clumsy but human. Hearing that warmth and ordinary concern, the hero saw how happy and secure that guild seemed, and he wanted that feeling too. Even so, he turned the offer down and chose to raid alone. He now admits that refusal came from petty pride and shame over being a veteran who still could not meet basic expectations. That pride blinded him to the help being offered. As a result, he nearly died alone in the dungeon. The blonde swordsman ignored the rejection, followed him inside anyway, and asked if he was all right. The hero knows now that without that intervention, his life would have ended there. The blonde man explained that he came because he feared his own awkwardness had pushed the hero into a dangerous solo raid. That sincere concern let the hero cast aside his inferiority complex and begin again. He understands that without that rescue, the blonde swordsman himself would never have changed either. Afterward, when the guild invited him again, he accepted without hesitation and joined them for real. He grew to love that weak but compassionate guild because it protected struggling players and reminded him why he became a player in the first place. But later, the same blonde leader reached his breaking point and confessed that he wanted to quit. Pressed on what he would do instead, the man admitted he would rather do anything else than keep living like this. When asked for the truth, he finally stopped joking. He confessed that he was simply terrified of facing death again and watching people die in front of him. He explained that he had formed the guild to protect others after his younger sister left home, but now even his own members were quitting after ending up in intensive care. The hero could only listen in silence, knowing he had received so much help from this man yet had none to offer in return. He wanted to tell him to quit if that was what he needed, but the guild had grown too large for its leader to abandon everyone depending on him. Remembering that helplessness, the hero now reaches out to the blonde man in the present. He tells him never to form a guild, because now he finally has the chance to say what he could not before. He warns that taking on that burden will only make his life miserable, and the blonde man is left stunned. Unable to place the strange familiarity of the warning, the blonde man asks whether they have met before. Before the moment can settle, the orange-haired woman explodes in outrage over an old grievance and starts dragging the conversation into chaos again. The hero uses the distraction to bow out and tells them all to live well. The story then shifts to the slums of residential Sector B under Dimension Core, where another plot is already moving. In that ruined district, several ominous figures and monsters gather beneath a dark sky as if preparing for something larger. A hooded observer speaks in Latin-like phrases and recognizes that an extraordinary student has appeared. Seeing how dangerous that development is, the observer decides the plan can no longer wait. Back in the outside world, the news reports that Shin Sang-yoon's information has forced the Players Association to raise the danger assessment of Silent Grounds. The broadcast confirms that the Death Knight inside was far more dangerous than the dungeon's listed rank suggested, so entry is now forbidden until re-evaluation. Hearing that, the hero feels relieved that future players may be spared the same needless losses, and he realizes he has finally saved someone since regressing. He reflects that Silent Grounds gave him more than artifacts and titles. It also gave him knowledge that could change his future. Among those gains is new information about the mysterious late bloomer model student, whose path may matter more than he first thought. He reviews the loot and finds a platinum dimensional bag with subspace and a gold lich ring that grants silence and extra mana. He also receives a telekinesis necklace, and his tiny goddess reacts with smug delight, while he is left speechless by the hall. The hero is thrilled, because he expected silence but not rewards this absurdly useful. Subspace alone would have been huge, and now telekinesis is added on top of it. Realizing he has gained both mobility and remote control options, he can hardly believe how much his combat style is about to expand. He immediately starts imagining how these two skills could transform his flexibility and push him to an entirely new level if mastered properly. Since he never saw anyone gain abilities like these in his previous life, he wonders if he is finally about to earn a truly unique title, only for the goddess of luck to complain that he has not thanked her at all. He hurriedly flatters her and promises proper gratitude after he finishes eating, which only half satisfies her. Then the three artifacts begin synchronizing their mana and transform into bizarre dessert-like forms for absorption. The final result includes a glittering millefeuille of infinite layers, making the whole process look less like loot and more like a cursed pastry course. Faced with magical desserts named after cosmic absurdities, he can only wonder what kind of taste the Archlich had in life. Still, he decides to start with the millefeuille and test the strangest reward first. The moment he tastes it, he is pulled into a surreal experience, as if the dessert's endless layers truly have no end. He is overwhelmed by the impossible texture and flavor, convinced the name was not exaggerating at all. The taste hits him so hard that he practically falls in love with dessert on the spot. In a burst of sincere repentance, he apologizes to all sweets he ever underestimated, and the system begins absorbing the three artifacts into him. Once absorption completes, he jokingly admits that for all his chatter, Archlich at least had excellent taste. The system then demands that he bind telekinesis and silence to specific abilities. Choosing telekinesis is easy, since binding it to his greatsword perfectly suits the way he fights. Silence is harder, because unlike stun or freezing it does not linger in a simple way, so binding it to flashy burst skills may waste its value. Not knowing the hidden risks, he settles on the safest looking option and tries to bind silence to his basic attack. The system warns that doing so requires an extra cost of 1 mana for every basic strike and asks whether he will accept it. He immediately recognizes how punishing that could be, since it would drain mana with every ordinary swing. But after remembering the title he earned from Archlich, which grants him a massive increase in mana, he sees a possible way to support the cost. With mana circulation constantly refilling him, the risk may be manageable, though it would still be dangerous if he were ever mobbed by weak enemies. He hesitates, weighing the danger against the potential. Then he smiles, deciding that caution alone will never let him grow. He accepts that real progress requires stepping outside his comfort zone and taking calculated risks. Silence is successfully bound to his basic attack, meaning every normal hit can now inflict the status depending on the target's resistance. Before he can fully process that success, a blazing portal tears open nearby and interrupts everything. The surrounding energy turns grim, and even the goddess of luck is startled because she had nothing to do with this arrival. 3 new constellations appear at once, praising the hero's ferocity and hinting that they want to sponsor or claim him. The goddess of luck immediately objects to other constellations showing up while she is already present. Then a completely new goddess arrives and declares that the hero should not belong to only one patron. The newcomers part to reveal a radiant figure with an unmistakably regal, ancient presence. She brusquely orders the Mongol conqueror aside, and even that warlike constellation yields to her. The other constellations step back with surprising good humor, treating her authority as something obvious. The hero studies her appearance and starts to suspect exactly which mythic figure she might be. Her jackal-headed symbolism makes the answer feel almost certain. The new goddess says she has been watching his courage closely and was impressed enough to come in person. She goes further, declaring that a man like him deserves to stand at her side rather than remain with lesser patrons. She openly tells him to abandon the goddess of luck and join a more glamorous goddess instead. That insult triggers an immediate divine argument, with the goddess of luck furiously attacking her rival's arrogance. As the two goddesses trade increasingly petty insults, the hero can only conclude that whatever their exact relationship is, they absolutely do not get along. In the middle of that celestial bickering, the new goddess suddenly offers him secret information, and the hero's attention snaps back to her. A messenger from a new goddess urges Shin Sang-yun to hear secret information and abandon his current patron in favor of a contract with her. The mention that the information concerns a late bloomer model student jolts Sang-yun, because he realizes it must be about someone important from his past. The cat-like goddess is caught off guard when he reacts far more strongly than expected. Sang-yun immediately presses her for answers, caring less about the goddess's offer than about whether the person she mentioned has resurfaced, and what he has been doing. The new goddess's lead is that she found that man wandering the slums of the Dimension Core. She further describes him as obsessively investigating the end and hidden truth of the Dimension Core. Using that information as leverage, she demands that Sang-yun leave his current goddess and contract with her instead. Back in the real world, Sang-yun sits alone and turns the warning over in his mind. He admits he cannot make sense of the phrase about the Dimension Core, especially since the man never spoke of anything like that in his previous life. His thoughts are interrupted when the goddess of luck appears before him. Sang-yun eagerly asks whether she found anything, but she reports that the man was no longer in the slums. Though disappointed, he thanks her, and she enjoys seeing the usually sly cat goddess get humbled for once. Sang-yun keeps worrying about why that man was in a place meant for failed constellations and what that implies. Unable to shake the mystery, he is left wondering where the man is now and what he has been pursuing in secret. The scene shifts to Hyunjong Corporation, where another thread of the story begins. At the corporation, a report is brought to the president about the participant list for the upcoming open market. The president reacts with interest as soon as she sees the new name. The list reveals Shin Sang-yun as a new entrant to the open market, a level 88 swordsman with no formal player rank. Han Hyunjong, the S+ rank head of Hyunjong Corporation, recognizes that an unusually interesting guest is about to arrive. Sang-yun heads out by car, moving toward the market while still sorting through everything he has learned. On the way, he reflects that further investigation turned up nothing on either the late bloomer model student or the eschatology of the Dimension Core. Even so, he decides he cannot trust the new goddess, suspecting she wants to use his growth to elevate herself into a mythical constellation. He concludes that staying with his current arrangement is safer, while the goddess of luck keeps amusing herself by recalling how badly the cat goddess was rattled. The navigation announces his arrival, pulling him out of his thoughts. Sang-yun realizes he has finally reached the place he came to see. That destination is Hyunjong Market, the country's premier open market for artifacts. He recalls that the open market was created to let players buy and sell artifacts safely instead of risking dangerous private trades. Given how often expensive exchanges led to violence and fraud, a secure market was bound to emerge. The old system of high-value direct deals had always invited theft, coercion, and bloodshed. That history is why safety became the market's most important selling point. Most such markets are run by major guilds around the world. In Korea, the unmatched leader is Hyunjong Market, backed by Hyunjong Corporation. Its dominance does not come from corporate strength alone, but from Han Hyunjong herself, the world's only S+ rank buff player. Her presence draws elite players from everywhere, and their mere attendance keeps the market peaceful. Sang-yun dryly notes that with so many people desperate for her buffs, almost no one would dare cause trouble there. At the entrance, an employee stops him before he can go in. She politely asks for his name and entry authorization so his access can be confirmed. After checking, she informs him that he has been granted access all the way down to the 8th basement floor. That surprises him, because the 8th basement is the VIP level, and he wonders if Han Hyunjong personally rated him highly. As he starts inside, nearby players recognize him and assume he should have arrived with Kim Miso. Their gossip quickly turns into a rumor that he and Kim Miso are dating, which shocks him. The talk grows uglier as strangers mock Miso over her dead boyfriend and speculate crudely about her relationships. Sung-yoon hears them slander her and realizes he cannot just ignore it. He decides that if people are willing to spit out filth so casually, he will make them answer for it. A moment later, market staff begin dragging the gossiping troublemakers out despite their protests. Watching from above, Sung-yoon coolly notes that blacklisting people is how adults settle this kind of problem. Satisfied with that quiet retaliation, he turns back to his real purpose. He calls the elevator to head deeper into the market. His first stop is the VIP floor, even though he knows his current funds are nowhere near enough to buy what is usually sold there. Still, he tells himself that even window shopping at the top level will teach him something useful. When he reaches the 8th basement VIP room, he steps into a world meant for the wealthiest buyers. A guide named Song Ah-hyun welcomes him, and Sung-yoon feels awkwardly out of place among such luxury. She encourages him not to feel intimidated and promises to help whenever he needs it. Trying to act composed, he begins inspecting the displays. The first price he notices nearly stuns him, because a single artifact is listed at 140 billion won. His guide explains that it is an epic-grade artifact called the Book of the Abyss, but that only confirms how far beyond him this floor really is. Embarrassed that his shock might have shown, he refuses further recommendations and tries to recover his dignity. Then he notices a crowd gathered around something even more extraordinary. When he asks, he learns that a special stage is being used to display newly acquired merchandise for sale. Curious, he leaves the guide behind and goes to see for himself what could have stunned so many VIP customers. The closer he gets, the more he senses that this is no ordinary item. A blazing display erupts before the gathered buyers, revealing an artifact powerful enough to dominate the entire room. The item is introduced as the Mage Stone, an almighty-grade artifact being sold domestically through Han Hyunjong. Sung-yoon is shaken by the revelation, because Almighty is the highest of the 9 artifact grades. His shock turns to disbelief when he sees the starting price is 3 trillion won. That makes him realize the seller, Jaron Decay, must possess even more terrifying treasures if he can part with something like this. Sung-yoon concludes that anyone selling artifacts of that caliber must be holding even greater power in reserve. Instead of feeling inspired, he is crushed by how small and powerless he seems compared to that world. He later moves down to the 4th basement platinum zone, where the prices are at least within the realm of sanity. There he spots a ring with a starting price of 700 million won, which finally feels like something he can realistically consider. Compared with the madness upstairs, even that expensive item feels almost comforting. Before he can focus on shopping, someone calls his name. The caller introduces himself as Jong Junhyuk and asks what kind of artifact Sung-yoon is looking for. Sung-yoon recognizes him as the future player who will become known as Perfect Storm. Not wanting to reveal too much, he claims he is only browsing. Junhyuk offers to show him one of his own artifacts, explaining that it does not suit him. He presents the Stream of Life Ring, a platinum support artifact that converts mana into stamina and can also trade mana for a burst of recovery. Sung-yoon immediately suspects Junhyuk wants to use Hyunjong Market's direct transaction exemption to sell it privately without fees. He recalls that this market has a special rule allowing direct deals between players inside the building. Because those private deals are exempt from the usual 5% commission, the system encourages safe person-to-person trades on site. The ring catches Sung-yoon's interest, especially now that he has recently gained a man-related title that could make such an item useful. Even so, he hesitates because it still is not quite what he truly came looking for. What he really wants is a seemingly worthless artifact that others would overlook, so he can exploit it in a completely different way by consuming it. Before that conversation can continue, Junhyuk notices a commotion nearby and recognizes it as a familiar nuisance. A woman is sitting on the floor eating stacks of pizza while security complains that she has been stinking up the area for days. She responds with total shamelessness, even offering them food as if that solves anything. Junhyuk sighs that she is causing trouble again, while Sung-yoon is struck by something in the way she speaks. A phrase she uses triggers a sudden sense of recognition in him. Following that instinct, he approaches her politely and asks to see the information on the artifacts she has laid out. Still chewing, she casually tells him to pick them up and inspect them himself. As he does, she makes no effort to stop him. The moment he examines one ring closely, he realizes he has found exactly the kind of hidden treasure he was searching for. He compares 2 platinum rings and identifies the real prize, a sealed potential reinforcement ring that looks inferior to a normal speed ring but can multiply dexterity far more efficiently for him. The discovery reminds him of how he once found hidden value in Lighten, another item others underestimated. He understands why no one wants this ring, since its effect is strong but its mana cost scares off ordinary buyers. Without hesitation, he decides to buy both rings and asks for the total price. The woman tries to overcharge him by claiming she loves those items and pricing them at 2.2 billion won together. When he stays silent, she hurriedly lowers the price to 2 billion. Seeing he still is not moved, she keeps improvising excuses and discounts. Her bluff collapses completely under his deadpan stare. He finally transfers 1.3 billion won, forcing the deal through at a far lower price than she wanted. She accepts the sale and grudgingly admits he is far better at haggling than she expected. Sung-yoon takes quiet pride in that, knowing a lifetime of poverty made him impossible to fool in a negotiation. Once the deal is done, the woman cheerfully talks about using the money for food and a donation to her orphanage, which catches Sung-yoon's attention. When he asks, she reveals that she runs an orphanage herself. To prove it, she offers to show him something on her phone. She proudly shows him a photo of herself with several children, asking if they are not adorable. The name Joy Orphanage hits Sung-yoon like a blow. The sight awakens a buried memory of his own childhood at that very orphanage. He realizes the place she is rebuilding is the same home he once came from. She notices his sudden reaction but does not understand its cause. Trying to steady himself, Sung-yoon is asked whether something is wrong. He claims he merely remembered the past, then carefully asks whether that orphanage was not destroyed long ago. She confirms it was wiped out during the collapse, and Sung-yoon hides the truth by saying he once knew someone from there. As he listens, he realizes she likely needs so much money because rebuilding and protecting an orphanage is dangerous when players are targeted for their wealth. She explains that her parents used to run the orphanage, and that she has recently begun reconstructing it herself. Sung-yoon masks his emotions, says he had no idea, and accepts her invitation to visit sometime. She hands him the orphanage's business card and proudly says the children drew it themselves. The childish drawing on the card deepens his sense of recognition and loss. He forces out a compliment, then jokes weakly that the children seem to dream mostly about money. The memories hit him so hard he nearly chokes up. He reflects that the orphanage he grew up in was a good place, and wonders how the children who survived the collapse ended up after being scattered. Realizing he is on the verge of crying in front of a stranger, he snaps himself back under control. Once he regains his composure, he is struck by how comforting it feels to meet someone who still cherishes that same place. Watching her happily plan what to buy for the children, he decides he has to visit the rebuilt orphanage soon. The story then shifts to Eden Guild headquarters in Yeouido. Sung-yoon arrives there, heading inside with a new seriousness. Someone calls out to him before he can go farther. A large man named Jo Jinho introduces himself, and says they have been waiting for Sung-yoon. As Jinho leads him onward, Sung-yoon realizes this visit is more important than he first thought, and resolves to treat it seriously. The narration briefly returns to the market conversation from an hour earlier. Before parting, the woman had promised to contact him later, and said the children would be happy to see him. Sung-yoon had warmly agreed, only to be interrupted by an incoming call. He apologized, took the call, and the woman left on good terms after celebrating their deal. On the phone, Kim Miso excitedly told him that they had been assigned a new gate. She teased him for not saving her number, then explained that the assignment was urgent. The gate is a two-person level 130 dungeon at No One's Station called Black Gate, and the name immediately catches Sung-yoon's attention. At first he struggles to place it, then the memory suddenly returns. He remembers that Black Gate was the dungeon first cleared by Kong Boa, the future arbiter of swords. He also recalls that the strategy was later made public, and that perfect coordination between partners was the key to clearing it. Since he and Miso have already built strong teamwork, he realizes they are unusually well suited for it. Then he remembers the most important detail of all, the first clear reward. Black Gate's first clear prize is an epic-grade artifact worth around 120 billion won. The moment he hears that, he commits completely and tells Miso he will do the raid no matter what. As he follows Jinho through Eden Guild, Sung-yoon can barely contain his greed at the thought that he might soon own an epic artifact instead of merely staring at impossible prices. Jinho senses Sung-yoon's ominous excitement, but Sung-yoon brushes it off with a laugh. They arrive on the 4th floor. Jinho explains that Miso is currently with the guild president, so he has been sent to guide Sung-yoon instead. He leads Sung-yoon toward Eden Guild's special training room, calling it one of the guild's proudest facilities. As they approach the restricted room, Sung-yoon realizes something important is waiting just beyond the door. As he enters the building, Sung-yoon immediately senses that the place is hiding something far more dangerous than an ordinary office. His guide casually assures him the training facility is free today, but Sung-yoon is startled by the claim. Trusting his instincts, Sung-yoon points out that someone is already inside, and his guide struggles to believe it. A stone golem suddenly erupts from the floor, proving Sung-yoon right and turning the quiet room into a battlefield. The monster lunges forward with murderous force. Before it can reach them, Tiri intercepts it with twin blades and overwhelming speed. She drives her attack straight through the golem's body and shatters it apart. The creature is finished almost instantly. Tiri completes the exchange in one clean burst, leaving only debris behind. Her sudden appearance makes the guide realize the room was not empty after all. He politely asks whether she had reserved the training room and offers to wait outside if this was a scheduling mistake. Tiri is caught off guard when he calmly asks how much longer she needs before they can use the room. While she hesitates, the guide presses for a simple answer. He greets her like an old acquaintance, while Sung-yoon immediately notices the awkward tension between them. Tiri explains that she came early to practice teamwork with Miso for an upcoming gate raid. The guide remarks that she and Miso must be close, and Sung-yoon innocently starts to explain, only to realize Tiri is no longer listening. Tiri sees through his clumsy prodding and accuses him of stirring things up on purpose. A sudden idea occurs to her. Instead of arguing, she abruptly excuses herself and says they can spar another time before leaving the room to them. She also admits she used the room without booking it and gives them permission to take over, while Sang-yoon is left wondering why she seemed upset. Once she is gone, the guide apologizes for the trouble and invites Sang-yoon to relax while Miso is delayed. Then his tone shifts, and he suggests a more interesting way to pass the time. He proposes a spar, and Sang-yoon is caught completely off guard. To show he is serious, the man plants his massive sword into the floor. He calls it a light spar, even as he starts stripping down like he is preparing for a real fight. Sang-yoon can only stare, baffled by how casually this guild treats combat challenges. He reflects that everyone in this place seems to greet new people by trying to fight them. The swordsman reassures him there is no pressure and admits he simply wants to see for himself what kind of fighter Sang-yoon really is. He openly frames swordplay as a way to reveal a person's true nature, making clear that this duel is his personal curiosity as much as his hobby. Sang-yoon quickly understands that the man is testing his character as much as his skill. When offered a practice weapon, Sang-yoon declines. Instead, he summons a swirling subspace in his hand. From it, he draws out his own great sword and reveals that he carries his weapon through a hidden storage skill. The display leaves the swordsman visibly impressed before the match even begins. He laughs in delight, deciding the rumors about Sang-yoon being unusual were true after all. Satisfied, he declares that they should begin immediately. The pressure around him changes at once, warning Sang-yoon that this is no ordinary practice match. The swordsman admits he had planned to hold back, but Sang-yoon's weapon and presence convince him to use real power from the start. Elsewhere, in the Eden Guild CEO's office, another conflict is unfolding. Miso's father urges her to obey him this time, but she snaps the moment he brings up the issue she has repeatedly told him not to mention. He apologizes and insists his interference comes from concern, yet Miso finally understands how suffocating his concern has become. Unable to bear it any longer, she cuts him off, says she is leaving, and asks him not to contact her for now. Her father can only watch her go in frustration and regret. After she leaves, he immediately answers a call from someone he addresses as president. He confirms that he still has a secure line to the association. Then he makes a request with grim determination. Back in the training room, the swordsman faces Sang-yoon across the wrecked floor. At the same time, Miso's father orders a full investigation into Shin Sang-yoon, starting with his family and past. The duel formally enters training mode, locking Sang-yoon and Jo Jinho in as the participants. Jinho asks if Sang-yoon is ready as the system confirms the mock combat setup is complete. He says 2 exchanges will be enough for him to judge Sang-yoon's level. Sang-yoon studies Jinho's gigantification and realizes that even in a smaller form than the monster he once fought, Jinho's pressure is far greater. He recalls that while Dugyeongsa perfected an all-rounder style, not every swordsman could follow that path. Many instead devoted themselves entirely to raw strength and built their bodies around that belief. Sang-yoon recognizes Jinho as the peak example of that strength-based school of swordsmanship. In Korea at least, Jo Jinho stands as the clearest symbol of overwhelming power. His gigantification lets him dominate opponents with a single crushing blow, preserving his place at the top even as the meta changed. Rather than fear that reputation, Sang-yoon feels his excitement rising and declares himself ready. Jinho praises that confidence and charges first without hesitation. As he attacks, he boasts that a real man proves himself through action, not doubt. Sang-yoon realizes that Jinho can generate destructive wind pressure just by moving his sword, forcing him to choose his response instantly. He rejects defensive tricks and decides that against Jinho's strength, he must answer with strength of his own. He activates Psychedelic to reinforce his body and speed, while Face-Off isolates Jinho as his sole target and sharpens the duel into a direct clash. Jinho commits fully to the opening strike. He calls it a light blow, but the attack tears through the room like a disaster. Sang-yoon forces himself to stay calm, knowing a frontal contest with Jinho should be suicidal. He abandons any thought of meeting the center of the attack head-on. Instead, he dives toward the flank of the swing, aiming for the point where Jinho's force is least concentrated. Jinho is startled that Sang-yoon found the weakness in his attack so quickly. Sang-yoon catches the blow at the edge and braces with everything he has. Jinho is stunned that Sang-yoon managed to block him at all. What shocks him even more is that Sang-yoon chose the most reckless option available. Rather than dodge or evade, Sang-yoon deliberately turned the exchange into a contest of power. Having survived the first strike, Sang-yoon immediately claims his turn. Jinho nearly loses himself in the thrill of the clash and marvels at the force packed into Sang-yoon's counter. Sang-yoon realizes Jinho's next attack will be even more dangerous and decides he has to move now. He unleashes a powerful blue shockwave to blast Jinho backward and create space. Jinho is exhilarated that someone with such a small frame could throw him off balance. He admits to himself that he completely misjudged Sang-yoon's level. What he heard from Miso and Tiri had made Sang-yoon sound promising, but now he sees that promise was an understatement. Jinho surges forward again, no longer treating Sang-yoon like a rookie. Delighted, he decides Sang-yoon is the same kind of foolhardy fighter he respects. He openly praises Sang-yoon's attack and says he is genuinely impressed. Sang-yoon downplays it as luck, privately admitting that only a critical boost to knockback burst let him survive that exchange at all. Jinho refuses the modesty and insists that real strength should be acknowledged plainly. He apologizes for underestimating Sungyun and prepares to answer with what he considers his true power. Sungyun instantly realizes that Jinho is about to reveal the devastating technique he remembers from the future. He recalls the strike that once saved countless lives by destroying swarms of falling meteors in a single sweep. That legendary move is Jinho's signature, Star Breaker. Jinho warns that the technique is still incomplete and that this is the first time he has shown it to anyone. Even so, Sungyun is already satisfied that Jinho now considers him worthy of going all out. But satisfaction quickly gives way to panic when he realizes he has almost no chance of taking that attack as he is. He decides his only option is to pour every enhancement he has into one strongest possible counter. With psychedelic, full charging, and speed stacked onto knockback burst, he declares that he is ready. Even while preparing, he knows it is absurd to challenge a level 700 powerhouse in a direct power contest. Still, both men commit, and the room trembles under the force gathering between them. Jinho launches first, roaring as he brings down the finishing blow. Sungyun answers with the resolve that has carried him through impossible odds before. Jinho descends with Star Breaker, determined to crush everything in his path. Sungyun meets that impossible attack with the same determination, vowing to overcome the impossible once again. Later, the aftermath leaves the guild hallway quiet while Miso walks away, still upset. She remains lost in thought, trying to steady herself. Then she forces herself to stop wallowing, and decides she should be training with Sungyun instead of staying depressed. A violent tremor suddenly shakes the building, startling everyone nearby. At first she thinks it might be an earthquake, but she quickly realizes the shock is coming from the training room. The implication hits her immediately. She sprints for the room in alarm. Bursting into the corridor outside, she shouts for Sungyun and demands to know what is happening. The air itself is still churning from the impact, confirming that the fight inside was far beyond a normal spar. When she sees the wrecked room, she is horrified by the scale of the destruction. Inside, Jinho is still laughing in disbelief, admitting that even in training mode he put serious force into that last attack. He tells Sungyun that taking it head-on instead of avoiding it was the last thing he expected. Sungyun thanks him for the praise, but admits the clash badly injured his wrist. Jinho brushes that off and promises Eden's medical facilities can fix it without affecting Sungyun's future training with Miso. Privately, Jinho admits he took more damage than he let on, and is shocked that a rising rookie could push him this far. Yet instead of resenting it, he finds the experience strangely satisfying because Sungyun's sword felt nothing like a beginner's. What he felt in that clash was the pressure and refinement of a trained veteran. That realization leaves him both amused and aware of how much farther he still has to go, even as training mode ends. Once the system releases them, Jinho sincerely thanks Sungyun for indulging his selfish request and says the duel gave him a chance to reflect on himself. He goes further and declares that no one in Eden can doubt Sungyun's ability anymore. Sungyun realizes this confirms the spar really was a test, and Jinho openly admits he was suspicious of someone who rose to fame so suddenly. Now fully convinced, Jinho enthusiastically accepts Sungyun as one of his own and even tries to recruit him into his absurd real man club. Miso arrives just in time to understand exactly why the room was destroyed and why Jinho looks so pleased with himself. Furious, she tears into him for ignoring her request to guide Sungyun and instead wrecking the training room with a pointless duel. Both men immediately fold under her anger and apologize. Some time later, the scene shifts to the underground parking lot of Player Town Building C. A white SUV waits there with its door open. Exhausted from everything that happened, Sungyun can barely keep himself moving. He steps away from the vehicle, still reeling from the consequences of the day. He admits to himself that ignoring Miso and getting dragged into Jinho's nonsense was his own fault. The punishment was brutal, with Miso forcing him through 18 straight hours of training afterward. Even so, he considers it worthwhile because the training paid off, and with about 2 days left before the Black Gate, he plans to rest. Just as he is about to leave, someone calls his name. A blue-haired woman approaches, introduces herself politely, and asks whether he has just finished training. Too tired to think clearly, Sungyun can only answer vaguely. Still wary, he asks who she is. She hands him a card identifying herself as Lee Gi, a scout from the Korean Player Association. Sungyun is relieved she is only an association scout, though he briefly wonders if he somehow knew her from his previous life. Gehi explains that she has been gathering information on him in order to recruit him, and Sungyun is baffled that she would admit that so openly. Too drained to deal with it, he says he is tired and will contact her later using the number on the card. Before he can leave, she stops him with one direct question and asks whether he has any interest in becoming an association-affiliated player, and he answers that he does not, at least not now. She says she expected that answer and asks for one more personal question. Though annoyed by how persistent she is, Sungyun reluctantly agrees if it is something he can answer. Gehi then asks whether his ability is one that can copy or steal other powers. She immediately follows with an even sharper guess, asking if he might instead possess an ability that lets him see the future. The question hits Sungyun hard enough to make him freeze. At the same time, attention shifts to the entrance of the Yodo Black Gate, where the next crisis is approaching. A van arrives at the site as preparations continue around the gate. Miso steps out and tells the driver she will contact him later, while he reminds her to stay safe. Now at the gate earlier than expected, Miso calms herself and decides she can simply use the extra time to get ready. Miso is startled when the man she came to meet feels strangely unfamiliar to her. She finds Sungyun waiting by the gate and hesitantly calls out to him. Trying to act cheerful, she approaches early and starts to suggest they warm up before the raid. But his unsettling mood throws her off so badly that she almost loses her nerve mid-sentence. Sungyun turns on her with eerie suspicion, briefly treating her like a stranger before recognizing her. Miso presses him about what happened, while he awkwardly insists nothing is wrong. Inside, Sungyun is in shambles from sleepless anxiety after obsessing all night over the woman who seemed to see through him. He realizes with horror that someone already suspects both his exclusive skill and the fact that he regressed. The thought that a bizarre outsider has nearly exposed him leaves him feeling cornered. He frantically weighs whether to hide, befriend the suspicious woman, or do anything that might stop her from digging deeper. Miso snaps him out of his spiral by calling to him again. Worried enough to cancel the raid, she demands the truth, but he refuses because he cannot afford to lose this chance. To redirect the conversation, Sungyun brings up Miso's new bow. Miso brightens and proudly reveals that she borrowed a different weapon specifically for this raid. She explains that it is an epic-grade artifact on loan from Japan's Kurikawa Guild through a long-standing partnership. Sungyun congratulates her, but the cost and prestige of casually borrowing an epic item sting his pride. He forces down his jealousy and reminds himself that he will soon obtain an epic item of his own. Miso accepts his reassurance and prepares to move forward. Sungyun decides to start the raid early and leads her toward the gate. Miso studies him carefully, still sensing that something about him is off. Even so, she agrees, and the two step into the dungeon together. Sungyun buries his fear of being exposed and resolves to focus only on securing an epic reward. Meanwhile, Miso thinks he is oblivious to why she went so far to borrow that bow, and remembers the moment that truly shook her. She recalls how his growth had already seemed unnaturally fast, but one training session pushed that feeling into something far more alarming. In that memory, Sungyun panicked when her safety was threatened. She remembers an indestructible training ground being destroyed by a single strike from him, proving his power was beyond anything she could match without an epic weapon. That memory is exactly why she came into this raid so thoroughly prepared. Miso resolves that she cannot spend her life forever chasing after his back. Inside the Black Gate, they arrive at the entrance to Hollow Forest. They advance cautiously into the unfamiliar terrain. Miso stays tense, still unsettled by how different everything feels. Sungyun tells her not to waste stamina on constant fear, and she admits the dungeon already differs from the preliminary report. He notes that the supposed paranormal forest looks nothing like what he knew from his previous life. Seeing the environment itself altered for the first time makes him realize this raid may have diverged in dangerous ways. Their doubts are cut short when a hulking monster appears ahead. Miso identifies it as something like an orc and readies her bow while Sungyun prepares to engage. Sungyun immediately realizes the situation has changed much more drastically than a simple variation in scenery. The creature is not an orc at all but an oversized goblin, confirming the dungeon's contents have shifted. As the monster charges, Sungyun warns Miso that it is coming straight at them. He calls her name to make sure she reacts in time. Remembering his research on black gates, Sungyun recalls proposing a system of hand signals and repeated combat drills to prepare for unpredictable situations. He had convinced Miso that they should simulate every likely crisis until communication became instinctive. She doubted they had enough time to prepare for every possibility before the raid. He argued that mastering a few core movement patterns would let the rest come naturally under pressure. He warned that if memory failed in the moment, only relentless repetition would save them. So he pushed for repeated drills until their responses became automatic. He believed that if they memorized those patterns, they could clear the raid flawlessly. The training had been grueling enough that Miso struggled to keep each signal straight. Now, under a direct charge, that practice finally pays off. Miso instantly recalls the correct response, and the two split in opposite directions to evade the rush. As expected, the monster turns toward the weaker target, and Miso uses that prediction to set up her shot. She fires while dodging, aiming not for a kill but for the joints before the creature can fully move. Sungyun confirms that restraining its movement is enough to create an opening even without a finishing skill. Miso's arrow tears into the monster with far more force than she intended. She is stunned by the sheer destructive power behind a shot that was not even full strength. Miso realizes the epic raid bow is amplifying her attacks to a terrifying degree. The wounded goblin still roars and tries to continue its assault. It crashes down heavily, slowed but not yet dead. Miso keeps firing and confirms that while she can cripple it, landing a clean killing blow is still difficult. Sungyun tells her that is enough because he will use the opening she created. He descends with a crushing strike and drives his blade straight through the monster. In that instant, he commits himself to ending the fight decisively. The giant goblin collapses dead, leaving Miso staring at how smoothly they finished it together. Sungyun immediately notes that Miso's firepower has increased dramatically compared to before. He proposes revising all of their tactics around the bow's new power and points out that she could have safely aimed for the head. Privately, he judges that such overwhelming output is exactly what should be expected from an epic grade artifact. He estimates her attacks are now several times stronger and realizes this gate may be much easier if they exploit that advantage properly. Miso is relieved that their teamwork held up, and Sang-yoon praises how quickly she adapted. The praise only reminds her of the exhausting amount of practice she endured to keep up with him. She bitterly remembers how many times she had to review their training footage just to avoid being left behind. Sang-yoon casually announces that the practice run is over. Before Miso can process that, he declares they should move on to the real thing as more monsters arrive. Several goblins gather around them, watching warily after seeing one of their own die so quickly. Their hesitation shows that even the monsters have become cautious. Miso notes that they are not rushing in recklessly anymore, and Sang-yoon sees that as an advantage. He activates detection and decides that cautious enemies are easier to control than reckless ones. His skin reveals 10 monsters nearby, including one hidden presence he did not expect. He concludes that the unseen threat is likely a stealth-type kobold assassin, which means the gate's composition has changed again. He starts to suggest one strategy, then abruptly switches to a different plan better suited to enemies without ranged attacks. Miso is left baffled by his sudden insistence on a tactic he has not explained. She immediately suspects he is about to force her into something awful. When he confirms he wants to use the anti-stealth pattern, she flatly refuses before he can finish. He keeps trying to explain alternate options, but she snaps at him to stop talking and listen. Even the goblins seem confused as they watch the argument unfold. Miso demands to know why she has to suffer through this plan at all, while Sang-yoon reminds her that she already knows the answer. He argues that her unexpectedly overwhelming firepower makes this the most efficient strategy whether she likes it or not. Miso gives in through tears, knowing he is right even though she hates it. Sang-yoon cheerfully begins the maneuver, reasoning that with no ranged enemies, securing a perfect firing position is the best possible play. A goblin charges just as the plan starts. Sang-yoon launches Miso high into the air like a projectile, using her as the centerpiece of the anti-stealth tactic. Miso screams in terror, furious that he keeps making her fly despite knowing how much she hates it. To keep her from crashing, she activates flight. The skill slows her fall for 5 minutes, giving her a stable aerial firing platform. Still crying and furious, she decides she has no choice but to make the plan work. Below her, 2 goblins rush Sang-yoon, while she prays the tactic pays off. One of the goblins lunges in for a killing blow. Sang-yoon narrowly avoids the strike as it smashes into the ground. That failed attack exposes the monster to Miso's line of fire. She instantly blows its head apart with a perfectly timed shot. Sang-yoon accepts the result with satisfaction, seeing that her attacks really can erase enemies in a single hit. He realizes this efficiency is not due to the epic bow alone. Watching her in action, he suspects their training and the passage of time have sharpened her far beyond what he expected. From above, Miso now resembles the terrifyingly precise archer he remembers from his previous life. That realization convinces him that he is not the only one growing stronger in this altered timeline. Using detection again, he searches deeper and locates the hidden enemy's position. A dark shape begins to emerge from concealment in the distance. The stealth monster finally reveals itself as a shadowy assassin. Its true form is a spectral kobold assassin waiting for a chance to strike. From the sky, Miso spots the assassin and lines up a shot before it can act. At the same time, Sang-yoon leaps in and shuts the assassin down before it can complete its attack. The kobold takes a brutal hit and cries out as its ambush is broken. Sang-yoon commits himself to supporting Miso properly now that she is carrying the offense. He admits to himself that he never expected this kind of battle flow, but he can work with it. As Miso rains arrows from above and Sang-yoon controls the ground, he wryly accepts that she is the one carrying him for now. Miso counts 7 monsters left and activates a multi-target lock-on skill. Her aim snaps onto all 7 remaining enemies at once. She unleashes Stardust Rain, turning the battlefield into a storm of guided arrows that tears through the goblins. By nightfall, they reach the World Tree Rest area after clearing the zone. They settle by a campfire, with Miso still sulking while Sang-yoon quietly prepares something. He cautiously tries to speak to her, unsure how long her anger will last. Miso coldly tells him she has no intention of forgiving him anytime soon. She finally explodes, accusing him of making her do that airborne tactic 6 separate times. Sang-yoon can only weakly defend himself by saying the monsters kept forcing the situation. Miso points out that she ended up doing nearly all the killing, and even Sang-yoon admits he may have pushed things too far because he got carried away. He desperately searches for a way to repair her mood and realizes an ordinary apology will not be enough. Then he remembers a different talent that might save him and begins cooking. He quietly finishes preparing the dish over the fire. Sang-yoon proudly decides that a truly good meal is the best cure for a bad mood. The smell of the food drifts through the camp and reaches Miso. Despite herself, she notices it immediately. Her stubborn silence starts to crack under the aroma. Sang-yoon cheerfully calls her over, saying the timing is perfect because he just finished. He tells her not to stay angry forever and offers food as a way to keep their spirits up for the road ahead. What he presents is an absurdly luxurious adventurer's beef Wellington. Miso is stunned into silence by how extravagant it looks. She finally takes a bite. The taste hits her so hard that all her resentment vanishes at once. She bursts into delighted praise, demanding to know how he made something this good and where the meat came from. Sang-yoon lies that it came from something rabbit-like, deciding to keep the truth buried as long as she is happy again. The hidden truth is that the meat is actually from a kobold, and it is unbelievably good. Miso happily thanks him and says she feels completely restored, while Sungyun awkwardly accepts her gratitude. The empty plates make it clear they devoured everything. Now fully satisfied, Miso sincerely thanks him again, and the tension between them finally softens. Re-energized, she asks about the next zone and confirms that the final area covered by the preliminary survey is where the Shadow Defender appears. Though still a little shaken, she agrees they should rest a bit longer before moving on. After a pause, Miso apologizes for the trouble she thinks she has caused him and for being careless. Sungyun realizes she is talking about the rumors surrounding them and brushes them off with a joke. When he mentions the stories that she treats him like a kept servant or worse, Miso is horrified, but he tells her he does not mind what people say. Miso admits that she was simply drawn to how capable he was, and that the media twisted that admiration into something strange. Sungyun tells her that gossip is just proof of how much attention they are getting, trying to ease her guilt before the next stage of the raid. By the campfire, the woman admits that being associated with him has made her more famous, though he brushes it off and insists her extraordinary rise would have drawn attention anyway. He laughs away any need for guilt and reassures her that, regardless of what outsiders and the media say, they still rely on each other whenever it matters. Trying to keep the moment safe and impersonal, she frames their bond as nothing more than an ordinary business arrangement. But the claim leaves her unable to continue, as if she already knows that explanation does not match what she feels. He eases the tension by dismissing the rumors as mere gossip, pretending the issue is just public chatter. Then he quietly challenges that pretense, making her realize he is asking whether their connection means more than either of them has admitted. Gathering her courage, she finally voices the real question between them. If this was never just business, what would become of them?